Batman in the Marvel Universe. Chapter 1 Spider-Man is dead. The world is always changing. It's just that some people can accept this change, while some people can't. Like the figure shown on the screen, the red and blue uniform with spider web patterns has told everyone his identity. Spider-Man. A Spider-Man who has been in this city for a long time. Although he has long been a good neighbor admired and loved by the vast majority of people in the city, there are still some guys who don't have much feeling for this good neighbor. For example, as a police officer on the front line of public security in New York City, some guys naturally don't have any feelings for him. Even though they know Spider-Man is a good guy, they still have to pay attention to and be wary of him out of duty. Of course, sometimes not only the world is changing, but people are changing too. At least in this world, he is the only one who likes to stand on the dripstone on the roof of Fisk Tower like Spider-Man. Now there is one more. Wayne looked at the city beneath his feet, obviously lost in deep thought. The iconic building had already told Wayne the name of this place. New York. The Big Apple. The Spider-Man news on the screen further illustrates what kind of amazing events are happening in the world today. A dangerous yet fascinating world. Raising his hand, Wayne just looked at his equipment quietly. The pitch-black arm armor was firmly locked on the forearm, and the three barbed hook-like plates on the outside of the arm armor had a strong sense of violence. The battle suit made of gray and black Kevlar fiber protected his fragile body. The pitch-black cloak created dark ripples in the howling wind from the high-rise buildings. He was born to be one with the darkness. His vibe seems naturally incompatible with this world. Gloom and darkness flowed in every corner of his body. Wayne clenched his fists and felt the power filling his body. He had a body full of strength, but it didn't exceed the limits that he knew. And the fact that he almost always keeps his rational mind shows that Wayne is no longer an ordinary person. The emphasized logo on his chest further illustrates his current identity. Batman, a Batman who came to a world with Spider-Man. This is nothing like Gotham. Before Wayne could say anything, a voice had already stated his views on this world. I've never seen anything like it in Gotham. It was a voice full of vicissitudes of life, as if he had long been suffocated by the burden he was carrying. The appearance of this voice surprised Wayne a little, but he did not have any other reaction. He just accepted everything that happened quite calmly, even if the voice is ringing in your own brain. So I'm schizophrenic. With the help of a voice changer, Wayne's voice became low, hoarse, and full of oppression. No, kid, you might as well say that I live in your head. The voice refuted Wayne's words. Wayne closed his eyes and immersed his mind. This should have been a difficult thing to do, but for Wayne now, everything was as natural as breathing. When he opened his eyes again, there was no sight of New York City in front of him. Only 2 rows of cages on the left and right. Wayne walked towards the first cage on his left. The cage was filled with darkness and shrouded in a black fog. He didn't want Wayne to see clearly what was inside. Turning around and looking at the cage on the other side, it was the same. Obviously didn't want him to see anything clearly. He understood that this should be something like his special ability. But it seems that the mysteries are not revealed one by one in the order of the cages. But, since there was no one in the first cage, where was the owner of the voice? You came. Contrary to what Wayne thought, the owner of the previous voice was not in the first cell of any row of cages near him. Instead, the same voice as before came from the second cell on the right. Wayne walked over. This cell was obviously different from the one Wayne had observed before. There was no thick black fog, nor was there any pitch-black darkness. There was just a normal cell. But the people imprisoned here are not normal guys. The pitch-black outfit and the bat logo on his chest prove that the criminal imprisoned here is also a variant of Batman among many. However, this Batman, whether it is the background color of the bat logo on his chest or the belt used to carry various items, are all bright red like blood. Wayne didn't really know much about Batman, but he did know which period in the comics world this Batman was dressed in. This Batman is not called Bruce Wayne. His name is Thomas Wayne. In the alley, it was no longer Bruce's parents who died, but Thomas's son. In this short world, Bruce Wayne's life ended when he was 8 years old. Unable to accept the death of her son, Martha Wayne became a madman after the accident. She cut the corners of her mouth and became a clown. Thomas Wayne became the Batman that his son should have been. Compared to the style of Batman in the main world, Thomas Wayne's Batman style can be said to be extremely cruel. He never cares about the lives of criminals, nor does he care whether those guys have so-called human rights. He prefers to use guns to solve everything, and is more keen to take the lives of all those who dare to commit crimes in Gotham. This Batman had no way to bring his son back to life, so he found another way to commemorate his son, which was to make Gotham clean again. You are a little different from what I imagined. Thomas stood up and walked to the cell door, looking through the door at Wayne who was now in front of him. Wayne didn't say anything, but looked at Thomas calmly with his blue eyes. Seeing Wayne in this state, Thomas tried hard to keep himself calm, even though he knew that the person appearing in front of him would definitely not be his grown-up son. Just like he said before, New York and Gotham are completely different, and the Wayne and Bruce in front of him are even more different. Even though they may have the same face. You can observe the world through my eyes and get the information you want. Wayne said. The first sentence he said was to judge how Thomas observed the outside world. Nodding, Thomas did not deny Wayne's statement, but he still said, maybe the world you see is directly reflected in my mind. This matter can be verified later. Wayne was not in a hurry to judge whether what Thomas said was true or false. In Wayne's eyes, since he can travel through the world, it seems not surprising that some other strange things will happen. Maybe you can help me become a person worthy of the name Batman. After leaving this sentence, Wayne turned and walked out. Thomas stood there in a daze for a while. Finally, he shook his head and sat back on his simple bed. It was not as luxurious or comfortable as any bed he had ever slept in before, but what Thomas could feel here was incomparable peace. Not to mention that he might grow up with a Wayne. When Wayne's consciousness returned to his body, the busy pedestrians in the city below all stopped at the same time. A news report was being broadcast on a screen hanging on a tall building. A special message. Sad news, our hero Spider-Man left us today. His death is linked to another mysterious seismic event that occurred in Brooklyn today. It has been confirmed by multiple sources that Peter Parker, on the first day and the first hour of his coming into this world, Spider-Man died. Patreon.com/elricoronado18112 Chapter 2 The Second Spider-Man. Spider-Man's death made many people sad, but it also made many people happy. For example, the gangsters who were trading contraband in the alley were obviously no longer as nervous as before. Even the sound has been raised several degrees. Ha ha ha, that guy who was wandering over the city every day is finally dead. In the alley, he looked at the news pushed to him on his mobile phone. A gangster was speaking to his companion quite happily. If they didn't have any beer on hand, Wayne had no doubt that they would raise their glasses and drink heartily in the next second. Okay, Spider is gone. I don't know if those other guys will come out and cause any trouble. The other guy who was making the deal was obviously calmer. He still did not relax his vigilance and kept looking around with his peripheral vision to see if there were any other street heroes appearing around. Once one appears, it will definitely disrupt their transactions. It would be better to end the transaction early so that nothing happens. Everyone can go home early and have a good sleep. What are you afraid of? There are no heroes left to take care of us now. They are probably all gone to pay tribute to that spider. The gangster who spoke first was obviously unscrupulous. He even looked up and thought about looking directly above the alley. No way. The gangster was about to say something when a figure appeared in his sight. That is Bat. The shadow of a bat flashed by, and then all he saw was a specially reinforced combat boot. Wayne jumped down from the air, and the black cloak behind him spread its wings like a bat, slowing down his speed the moment he jumped out. But the cloak that followed Newton's laws, fluttering as Wayne descended at a high speed. Boom! The heavy kick from Wayne made the gangster fall into a deep sleep without feeling any pain. The other gangster had no intention of pulling out his gun. The first thing he did was to turn around and run away. Years of criminal experience have already taught today's gangsters a lesson. When facing these masked bastards, don't think about fighting them, and don't even think about saying anything to them. All you can do is surrender or turn around and run. If you are lucky, maybe you can escape from the masked monster. Where do you want to go? A deep, devilish voice sounded in the ears of the gangster. He bumped into Wayne head-on. After the collision, Wayne did not retreat at all, but the gangster fell directly to the ground. Looking up at Wayne, the gangster retreated using his hands and feet. He was a little confused. This guy was clearly behind him before, so how could he appear right in front of him now? In this dark alley, he couldn't see the look in Wayne's eyes at all. Wayne's eyes scanned the things in the hands of the gangster in front of him. I hated these guys who dealt in illegal things. Wayne walked forward, getting closer and closer to the gangster. The dark figure doubled the fear it brought to the gangsters. Every time Wayne took a step forward, the gangster's fear grew. The gangster couldn't accept this situation anymore, so he pulled out the pistol from his waist. Unfortunately, the gangster's movements were too slow in Wayne's eyes. Before the gangster could point the gun at him, Wayne had already shot a bat dart. The sharp bat dart was not aimed at the gun in the gangster's hand, but at the gangster's wrist. Ah! My hand! The gangster pinched his right wrist and screamed. A batarang had pierced his forearm. Wayne just watched it all indifferently. The bat dart didn't hurt any important parts of your forearm, it just hurts a little. Wayne didn't care about the gangster's howling at all, he just acted like he was talking about something that had nothing to do with him. Perhaps it was because Wayne now possessed all the abilities of a certain Batman. When Wayne saw the gangster, he instinctively analyzed the parts of the gangster's body that could be subdued but not fatal. In Wayne's eyes, the gangster was no different from a corpse that had been dissected layer by layer. You are a devil! The gangster roared at Wayne with tears and snot. But Wayne didn't care at all. He walked up to the gangster, lifted him up with one hand, and slammed him against the wall. Now I ask and you answer. Wayne put his face close to the gangster, keeping the angry bat mask on. In the eyes of the gangster, it might be more terrifying than anything else. Ah, don't suck my blood. The gangster's face was full of fear and he nodded repeatedly. Maybe he was afraid that Wayne in front of him would suck all the blood out of his body. Before Wayne could say anything, a spider silk had already stuck to the gangster's body and pulled him directly to the center of the alley. When a man who can lift a grown man with one hand and is dressed like a bat, who would believe more that a bat-like man is a good person? At least this was a little too easy to recognize for another guy who had just come into this world. Sometimes, superheroes aren't the only ones who wear masks. Supervillains also cover their faces to make themselves look more terrifying. Wayne now fits Spider-Man's judgment of a supervillain very well.
That was a heavy blow, man.
Spider-Man looked at the batarang that pierced the thug's forearm. I know you're a big fan of Batman, but Batman wouldn't do something like this.
I will never do evil in the alleys.
Looking carefully at this obviously down-and-out Spider-Man, Wayne really didn't want to think about Spider-Man's situation in the most difficult direction. But who made him not even have a pair of shoes? Even there is a belly. Perhaps he noticed that Wayne was looking at his belly, so Spider-Man waved his hand calmly. It may be caused by some spatial fluctuation. I used to have a perfect figure. Wayne slowly walked 5 meters in front of Spider-Man and spoke softly. You smell like pizza.
Bacon and cheese.
Wayne's words instantly made Spider-Man start to smell the smell on his body. But he didn't feel that there was any smell of pizza on him.
Aha, you're kidding me, man.
Spider-Man shook his finger to indicate that Wayne was joking. The guys around you, possessing illegal weapons, and even have lives on their hands. Wayne didn't dwell on what Spider-Man had for dinner. He just shifted his gaze to the gangster over there who was completely afraid to move. Spider-Man also turned his attention to the gangster. The gangster quickly nodded at the down-and-out Spider-Man, indicating that Wayne was right. At least the gangsters know that when they can't escape the pursuit of the masked freaks, the best option is to find Spider-Man and have him take them to the police station. That way they can save their lives. However, facing a guy like Wayne who had no idea of his background, even one move could make his trading partner fall into a deep sleep. He really didn't dare to bet whether Wayne would kill someone.
It seems that I wronged you.
Spider-Man turned around and wanted to apologize to Wayne. The question is, where is Wayne? I hate this kind of thing. After tying up the gangster with spider silk and stopping the bleeding at the place where he was shot by the bat dart, Spider-Man called the police using the gangster's cell phone. Then he disappeared in front of the gangsters. Due to the intrusion of a certain guy, Wayne now needs to find a target again to fill his pockets. The batarang should have been taken back. Wayne frowned when he thought of the batarang that he did not take back. Now he doesn't have a bat cave as his logistics base, and every bat dart is a non-renewable resource. Precious. I think you forgot something. A somewhat rhetorical voice sounded in Wayne's ears. Spider-Man caught up. He still had the bat dart that Wayne had used earlier in his hand. End of this chapter. Patreon.com/elricoronado18112 Chapter 3. Annoying Spider, Extra. Spider-Man is obviously wearing a mask, but people can always feel his current expression. For example, what Wayne felt now on his face was a playful emotion. Maybe it was because of his eyes that looked huge on the mask, allowing people to feel the feelings from the spider more clearly. Compared to Spider-Man's rich expressions, Wayne's bat mask can only bring people fear and anger from the person under the mask. Even if the person under the mask had a smile on his face, it would only make people facing Wayne feel a little ironic. Likewise, few people get to see Batman's smiling face. Most of what they could see was just disapproving looks from Batman. That's all. Wayne said nothing. He calmly took his batarang back from Spider-Man's hand. Hey, can't you just say thank you? Wayne's calm performance obviously made Spider-Man a little uncomfortable. Even if he helped an old lady, he would get a thank you. Now he has taken back Batman's batarang, but there is nothing here? When he said this, Wayne, who was walking in front, stopped and turned to look at Spider-Man. What material is your spider silk made of?
With this kind of toughness and tensile strength, I think it will dissolve automatically in a short time.
A bracelet-like device suddenly appeared in Wayne's hand. With this skill, anyone in Gotham could probably be trained to become a peerless thief. What? Spider-Man himself was stunned. He probably never thought that one day his spider silk shooter would be taken away quietly by someone. How did you do it? Spider-Man said to Wayne excitedly after he reacted. He had never seen things like this develop. Moreover, his spider silk shooter was placed inside his battlesuit. So how was it taken away? You're distracted. Wayne threw the spiderweb shooter directly to Spider-Man, who obviously had a small belly. Duh. Spider-Man now really doesn't know what to say about this matter. Even though time was a butcher's knife and he hadn't exercised seriously, at least Spider-Man could be sure that he had never been distracted. Wayne didn't care about Spider-Man's depression now. He just turned around and walked towards his set goal. He needs something. Hey, why can't you just talk to others properly? Spider-Man noticed that Wayne was about to leave, so he quickly ran towards Wayne. The Spider-Man of this world has just died, and you, the Spider-Man with a belly, have appeared. Wayne didn't even bother to turn his head. He just walked forward. I can tell that you're involved in something pretty troublesome. I don't intend to get involved. Wayne's calm words made Spider-Man look helpless. He had never seen a guy like this who basically showed no emotion when talking. But aren't you already involved in this matter now? Spider-Man still followed Wayne and had no intention of leaving Wayne. Wayne didn't say anything. He just stood on the rooftop of this relatively tall building, carefully looking at what was happening around him. I was about to complete my plan, but was interrupted by an uninvited guest. That guy has been following him all the time. Hey, I knew you were a die-hard fan of Batman. So, are you looking for the next criminal? Spider-Man is really a chatterbox. He has been beside Wayne and constantly nagging him. I hate this guy. Thomas in Wayne's mind could naturally hear Spider-Man talking, and he couldn't accept Spider-Man's chatterbox. In his world, there is no one who can talk as Spider-Man. Talking non-stop. You don't even need to drink saliva. Wayne didn't say anything, but he did agree with what Thomas said. Spider-Man is great in every way except his mouth. You haven't talked to me for a long time, which makes me feel awkward like I'm doing a monologue. How about you give me a response? Spider-Man suddenly came in front of Wayne, swinging on his spider silk. Wayne reached out and pushed Spider-Man away, continuing with his own actions. The biggest difference between bats and spiders is that bats need money. A bat without money might not even be able to make a bat dart. You really broke my heart, man. And I think you should be a better fan of Spider-Man, man, don't you? Spider-Man never knew what giving up was. He definitely has his own confidence. There is no way that everyone's beloved Spider-Man can be better than the gloomy Batman. Are you talking about a Spider-Man with a midlife crisis, a belly, and no shoes on his spider suit? Wayne looked up and down at the person in front of him. Spider-Man lowered his head to look at his exposed calves and his toes that were digging the ground out of embarrassment. These are all small problems. When he looked up again, Wayne was no longer in front of him. The only thing there was a figure that had swung to another building with a hook gun. In some ways, we are quite similar. Spider-Man smiled. Wayne has found his goal and would certainly not care about Spider-Man's soliloquy. All he has to do now is make money. By the way, create an identity for yourself. Even though he didn't know how long he would stay in this world, it would be best to have a relatively legal identity. It allows Wayne to get rid of the interference from NYPD most of the time. As for having money, the purpose is simple. Some things always require money to get them done. For example, equipment. Perhaps it's because Spider-Man has been confirmed dead, and now ghosts big and small have all come out to cause trouble. All of New York has become like the state before Spider-Man appeared, with criminals and chaos everywhere. The chaotic city, the dark corners, the current New York made Thomas feel familiar in Wayne's mind. This state of the city is exactly the state it was in when he was in Gotham. All order means nothing in the eyes of those guys. Except the Bat worked out everything. Just like the previous transaction, Wayne's target is still the member who is obviously selling illegal things to people around him. Often, these guys have enough cash to support some of Wayne's activities. What's more, Wayne not only intends to obtain illegal items from those individuals, but also wants to deal with the base camp of those criminals. This is yours. Holding a small packet of powder in his hand, the black guy was looking at the man in front of him who was obviously addicted with a smile on his face. Thank you. The man handed the cash in his hand to the black guy and reached out to take the bag. When the man was about to touch the bag, the black guy raised his hand, making it completely impossible for the man to touch it. Hey, hey, hey. The black guy stretched out a finger and shook it. Sometimes, money can't necessarily buy goods. You still need a little effort. Sir, what can I do? The man now didn't know what he was saying anymore. He just wanted to get the goods from the black guy. After hearing his own satisfactory answer, the black guy smiled and handed the bag of powder in his hand to the man. As long as you can send your wife here, I will give you something new that will make you feel great. No problem. The man didn't care what the black guy said, he just wanted the bag. He reached out to the black guy. The black guy nodded with satisfaction. I recorded your words, don't forget them. You forgot something. A cold voice sounded behind the black man. What? Before the black guy could react, a powerful knee strike pushed him directly against the wall. His stomach was churning, and the black guy felt like he was about to vomit out his dinner. The entire abdomen was twisted together. Wayne looked coldly at the man who was lying on the ground looking for the bag that the black guy had dropped. Wayne never felt any pity for such a person. Especially, the guy who plans to exchange his loved ones for his so-called happiness. Wayne walked towards the man. The man finally found the bag of white powder that the black guy had thrown away before. Just when he wanted to feel the ecstasy in his mind, a foot stepped on his head and hit the ground. Blood slowly flowed from the man's forehead. Son of a bitch! When Wayne was dealing with the poisonous insect, the black guy who was unable to move due to the severe pain finally recovered. Without saying a word, he pulled out his gun and shot Wayne without hesitation. But it missed the mark. A spider silk thread had already grabbed his gun-holding hand. What? The spider silk wrapped around his hand obviously made the black guy a little confused. Wasn't Spider-Man dead? Wayne didn't care whether Spider-Man would appear immediately. He cut the spider silk with one hand and punched the black guy in the abdomen. Wow! Spider-Man landed beside them at this time. Looking at the miserable state of the black guy and the man whose life or death was unknown, Spider-Man was obviously a little bit reluctant. This is not in line with Batman's character. Now I ask and you answer. Wayne ignored Spider-Man's presence. He held the black guy's collar with both hands and spoke to him word by word. Every pattern on the pitch-black bat mask in front of him seemed to be telling of the fear from deep within his heart. Spider-Man dropped his hands helplessly. The black guy didn't want to go on like this, so he nodded repeatedly. Who made the masked freak in front of him not care about the harm caused to himself? Pick up address? I only know that the goods come from Hell's Kitchen, and the transaction location is always notified by them at short notice. What's the delivery time? Take it every 2 days, and I'm going to take it tomorrow. Even though there was blood in the black guy's mouth, he still didn't dare to be vague and explained it clearly to Wayne. Where do you keep your cash? The password to my home safe is, and the address is 303 on the 3rd floor of the apartment building 2 stops away. Letting go of his hands, the black guy slowly slid down the wall. Seeing Wayne turning around, the black guy probably thought he had escaped a disaster.
Just when he was about to take a breath, Wayne, who had already turned around, suddenly turned around and elbowed him without any warning.
It hit the black guy in the face. Blood splattered everywhere, and one could even see the teeth flying out with the help of the light. After doing all this, Wayne simply took out the cash from the black guy and put it in his own pocket. There was also a car key, which was also accepted by Wayne. Are you really a die-hard fan of Batman? Why do I feel that you are more like the Punisher? Spider-Man looked at what Wayne was doing now, and he really couldn't see any trace of Batman's style at all.
Spider-Man has already checked the man on the ground.
That guy at least has a severe concussion. If it's more serious, he might be a vegetable. As for the black guy who was directly elbowed by Wayne, Spider-Man can guarantee that he is definitely a vegetable. If medical treatment is not timely, Spider-Man has no way of being sure whether the black guy can survive. Didn't you see that blood has started to seep out of the back of the black guy's head? But now the Thomas in Wayne's mind has some complaints about what Wayne has done. He was not condemning Wayne's behavior or saying that he was too harsh. Instead, he felt that Wayne's behavior was a little too lenient. If Thomas were to engage in this kind, he could guarantee that neither of the two men would survive. Everyone must go to hell and report to Satan. I think you were too kind. Thomas spoke to Wayne in a disappointed tone. Forgive me, I'm not yet able to take someone's life directly, and I'm not yet able to do it without any psychological burden. Wayne responded to Thomas calmly, this is already the greatest harm I can do. Thomas had no way of saying anything about Wayne's words. He himself knew that it was too much to ask Wayne to be like him. Without another word, Thomas retreated back into his cell. Wayne was already walking towards the parking lot not far away with the car keys. He pressed the unlock button, and a Ford pickup truck lit up. It's a pretty nice car, I like it. Spider-Man's annoying voice sounded again. End of this chapter. Thanks bro, extra chapter, thanks for the support. Gabriel Teets. Chapter 4, Selling Spider-Man Tactics. Wayne ignored the middle-aged Spider-Man. When he opened the car door and got in, a red and blue figure sat in the passenger seat quite naturally. Can I say that this is stealing the car? Of course, this car is most likely earned by that guy from selling drug powder, but no matter how you look at it, it is still a theft. Spider-Man started talking non-stop as soon as he sat down. Of course, I won't hand you over to the police station, or I think both of us will be arrested. Spider-Man said with his hands dancing, you are a car thief, and I am a homeless man wearing a cheap spider suit. Wayne really had nothing to say about Spider-Man's familiar behavior. He could only hope that the look in his eyes would let Spider-Man know that he didn't like him following him. Hey, don't look at me like you don't agree, okay? I think you need an assistant, like Robin. Spider-Man gave a rather dangerous look with his big eyes when he said this, specifically used to imitate the rather dangerous look of the Bat family. Seeing the disapproving look from Wayne, Spider-Man could only regain his composure. Think about it, I definitely do more good than harm. Spider-Man flexes his biceps to show that he's definitely a good helper. Robin doesn't talk as much as you, and besides, I don't need Robin. Wayne didn't intend to continue arguing with Spider-Man, so he just started the pickup truck. Don't need Robin? You definitely don't like the Batman from the main world in the comics. Let me think, you should like the old man in the Flashpoint incident? Or something else? Spider-Man pondered. To be honest, he is quite familiar with Batman in DC Comics. But after he became Spider-Man himself, he didn't have much time to read those comics carefully. He can still remember some pretty famous Batman characters, which shows that he has a good memory. Listening to Spider-Man chattering, thinking of the Spider-Men who gathered together later, Wayne felt a little overwhelmed. Among the 6 Spider-Men, although there are 2 or 3 who don't like to talk much, there is always someone who maintains his personality and becomes a guy who talks a lot. Shut up. In the end, Wayne chose to step on the brakes. Okay, I'm a little scared of you like this. Even though Spider-Man was trying his best to avoid speaking, he still couldn't help but say a few more words. Get out. Wayne didn't want to stay in the same space with this guy anymore. He coldly ordered Spider-Man to leave. Are you asking me to get off? Spider-Man pointed at his mask in disbelief. He never imagined that one day he would be disliked by others. When he met Wayne's gaze, he knew Wayne was serious. He could only shrug and say, okay, you're the boss, of course I'll listen to you. As he spoke, he opened the car door and left his seat. But, after getting out of the car, Spider-Man wanted to say something to Wayne, but the only answer he got was the roar of the car's engine and the exhaust gas. Don't forget to come back and pick me up. You're really a guy who doesn't want to listen to others. Spider-Man was a little helpless. He shot out his spider silk and pulled himself to the roof of a building, carefully observing the direction of Wayne's movement. He still wasn't too sure about that die-hard Batman fan. When he was working with that die-hard fan, his spider sense was always giving him faint reminders. Wayne never considered him as someone he could trust. Always be on guard against yourself. Let's see what you can do. Spider-Man felt the cold rooftop under his feet and turned his head. Of course, it's better to get a pair of shoes for our friendly neighbor Spider-Man first. While Spider-Man was looking for shoes that fit his feet, Wayne now really felt that it would be a good idea to ask that guy to get out of the car. The whole world is quiet. Finally, I can start my own actions. But Wayne also knew that it was absolutely impossible to really get rid of Spider-Man. New York, people there are much more familiar with it than I am. I guess by the time I found Hell's Kitchen, Spider should have already arrived there first. I just don't know if there is a blind lawyer in this world who stays here every day and fights crime. Thanks to the driving skills learned from Batman, Wayne is now fully capable of driving at the maximum speed within the prescribed range. As to why not just speeding? The pickup truck that Wayne is sitting in now may not be able to escape from the PDNY successfully. According to what the guy said, he comes to Hell's Kitchen every 2 days. Although the location is not the same, it is roughly in the same area. Wayne was driving the vehicle while checking the car's automatic turn signal records. After selecting the 2 groups with the highest repetition rate and conducting a large number of simulations in his mind, Wayne already roughly knew the approximate area he should go to. Before Wayne got close to Hell's Kitchen, someone had already observed the pickup truck. As a frequent visitor to Hell's Kitchen, this car is indeed quite familiar to the gatekeeper of Hell's Kitchen. But they did not let their guard down just because they were familiar with the place, as they knew very well that today was not the agreed time to pick up the goods. Even if that guy had sold all the goods he had, they would not let him into Hell's Kitchen. No one could violate the rules of Hell's Kitchen. Hey kid, this isn't the day. The guy who was shouting at the pickup truck hadn't finished his words when he saw a figure jumping out of the car. The pickup truck showed no signs of slowing down and rushed straight towards Hell's Kitchen. Oh shit. All the 2 guys could do was to avoid the collision of the pickup truck and save their lives. But the 2 of them swore that they would never let them meet the black guy again. Otherwise, he would definitely break all his teeth out. It was already night tonight, but he was sure that he had definitely seen someone jump out of the pickup truck before. It's most likely that damn black guy. Motherfucker. Gabriel, are you okay over there? The person who first shouted at the pickup truck slowly stood up, brushed off the dust on his body, and shouted to his companions. The problem was that no one answered him. The only response he got was the crackling sound of a pickup truck short-circuiting as it crashed into a nearby wall. Were you hit by a car out of control? This abnormality made him immediately draw the pistol from his waist and walk to the other side. Hey bro, answer me. When he finally got to Gabriel's side, he found that his brother had been knocked unconscious. When he wanted to check Gabriel's vital signs, a figure suddenly appeared in front of him. The pitch-black mask and angry expression made him feel weak in the knees for a moment, and he even forgot to raise his gun. While he was still distracted, Wayne grabbed his gun-holding hand and used his joint technique to break the man's elbow joint. Before the guy could scream out because of the intense pain, his head had already hit a building nearby under Wayne's control. The violent collision caused him to lose consciousness instantly. The voice that was about to shout out was also suppressed by this action. After taking the pistol from the guy's hand, Wayne skillfully disassembled the pistol into parts, and threw the small parts directly into the sewer. At the very least, the lack of 1 or 2 parts makes the chances of this gun being picked up by a homeless person and recovered considerably lower. He raised his hand and shot the hook gun into the sky above the building, and Wayne disappeared from there. The sound of the car accident was very obvious and attracted the attention of the people around. What Wayne needs to do now is simple. Check where they are all coming from. A small car accident is unlikely to attract all the people in the surrounding area, but it can at least let people know what Hell's Kitchen looks like now. Chaos or order? Chaos in Hell's Kitchen is more advantageous, but order will take some time to resolve. Not everything goes the way Wayne wants it to, and the car accident did attract the attention of those guys. T has already started moving, but it is an organized movement. They even sent a team to patrol the surrounding area to ensure that no one would launch a surprise attack. Only then did they dare to ask people to check what was happening around them. Our gatekeeper was knocked unconscious. The person who went to the door looked at the 2 people lying on the ground. After judging that they were still alive, he reported through the intercom, "They are in a very bad condition. Do we have a hospital?" A cold voice came from the other end of the intercom. Got it. The guy who reported the situation was quite concise and shot at the 2 unconscious gatekeepers without blinking. Find out who is against us? After saying this, the person on the other end hung up the phone. Even though there was no one on the other end of the intercom, the guy still responded to the other end, "Yes. Looks like we're going to be busy again." A guy who seemed to have a good relationship with the leader came over. Wayne saw all of this, and it was clear that Hell's Kitchen had become one. It is no longer the chaotic neighborhood it once was. Standing up, Wayne watched the guys take their men away, leaving no one behind. It seems that the Hell's Kitchen here is a little different from the one in my world. Spider-Man also saw all of this. In his world, the biggest force in Hell's Kitchen belongs to Kingpin, but no single force has completely integrated it into one. This world has been completely changed and turned into the back garden of a powerful force. I wonder why you seem so calm about my arrival? Spider-Man suddenly realized that his behavior, which was intended to scare the Batman fans, did not attract any attention from Wayne. But I don't think your reckless rush into Hell's Kitchen will have any good results. Spider-Man really never thought that a guy who looked so calm and rational would choose to use a car accident to enter the sphere of influence of Hell's Kitchen. I believe the sudden appearance of a Spider-Man will make the people of Hell's Kitchen very happy.
Spider-Man was originally prepared that Wayne would not answer anything he said.
But Wayne's sudden words surprised Spider-Man a little. But what's the point of a Spider-Man suddenly appearing and making the people in Hell's Kitchen happy? Everyone in Hell's Kitchen would want to cut him into pieces. Another Spider-Man appears. Right here. Wayne used his voice changer to change his voice into the voice of a minion he had heard before. The loud sound instantly pierced Hell's Kitchen, and the night returned to peace. When has Spider-Man ever suffered such a thing? Batman actually exposed him directly to the underground sphere of influence of Hell's Kitchen. Just as Spider-Man was about to say something, Wayne had already thrown out a miniature smoke bomb, which not only concealed his own figure but also reminded those guys of Spider-Man's location. After Spider-Man passed through the smoke, where was Wayne?
No way, here we go again.
Now Spider-Man really didn't think this guy was a Batman fanatic. Instead, he always felt that this guy was Batman himself who came to New York City. This mysterious way of traveling, and the way he throws props without saying a word, is simply a replica of Batman. Although Wayne's plan still has loopholes, Wayne himself is not sure who the guy he is disguised as is with now. But Wayne just needs to draw their attention here. Besides, the smoke bomb that Wayne threw before also gave those guys an obvious sign. Where? Some sharp-eyed guys have already spotted the red and blue Spider-Man on the roof.
Without saying a word, he raised his gun and started shooting.
The sound of gunfire completely broke the silence. They had already received the news of Spider-Man's death, but they still would not take it lightly. Moreover, dressing up as Spider-Man in Hell's Kitchen was a provocation to them.
If I had known, I would never have followed you.
Now Spider-Man can only dodge quickly to avoid being hit by the bullets shot by those guys. Wayne squatted quietly on a water tank and watched all this happen. Hell's Kitchen was now obviously becoming lively because of the gunshots, but there was still one place where there was no movement at all. If Wayne calculated correctly, that should be where they stored the goods and cash flow. The hook shot was fired and the bat was swinging towards its target. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. The action begins. Crouching opposite the unusually alert building, Wayne can now clearly see the criminals who are patrolling diligently inside. The criminals outside the building were very careful to explore any possible hiding places. Even on the rooftop of the building, there are snipers closely watching everyone's movements. This is not something a normal gang would do. But I believe that even a normal gang would find it difficult to integrate the entire Hell's Kitchen into one iron barrel. It would be quite difficult for Wayne to enter the building normally and get the supplies he needed. But Wayne had no intention of knocking on the door politely and entering the building from the beginning. Isn't night the best time for Bat to hunt? Is there any problem? The sniper on the rooftop listened to the voice on the intercom and said calmly to the other end, "Nothing, not even a ghost. We can't take it lightly, otherwise the boss will skin us alive." The person on the other end of the intercom was obviously more relaxed. "Just stay in your monitoring room and eat your hamburger." The sniper chewed his gum and pulled off his headphones. The guy's laughter was heard from the monitoring room.
Ha ha ha.
Damn bastard. The sniper felt really uncomfortable. He was exposed to the wind and rain here, while the other one could stay indoors and eat. However, he had no choice because there were always unfair things in this world. He held his breath again, focused his gaze on the sight in front of him, and observed the surroundings. Suddenly, a dark shadow flashed across the small field of vision. The sniper instantly scanned around with his sniper scope, trying to find the figure that flashed by. But there was nothing around, as if it was just an illusion. The sniper shifted his gaze away from the scope and shook his head. Sometimes even the best sniper in the world will have hallucinations. He smiled and shook his head. Sometimes, what you see is not an illusion. A low and terrifying voice sounded behind the sniper. The sniper's originally warm body suddenly felt like it was falling into an ice cellar. He couldn't be sure whether the person behind him was a human or a ghost. "Who are you?" The sniper tried to talk to the guy behind him. Wayne stood behind him calmly, watching the guy make some small movements. "A criminal." Wayne leaned over and covered the sniper's mouth and nose, controlled his head, and smashed it on the edge of the roof. After the muffled sound, there was no sound of pain, only a body slowly relaxing. The sniper has lost his consciousness. The sniper's position is indeed a good place to observe all positions, but it is of no use to Wayne. And behind him is a skylight through which you can see the top floor of the building. There were a few guys there laughing and toasting each other. A man hugged a pretty girl with a hot body and touched her all over. On the coffee table between them were stacks of US dollars, and not far away was a safe for storing more cash. Wayne has found what he was looking for. It's simple why these guys would leave all that cash like that. In the eyes of these guys who sell illegal drugs, money is not the most important thing. The most important thing is their goods. But in Wayne's eyes, the goods need to be destroyed, and the US dollars need to be used to build his own base. Looking down at the obscene scene below, Wayne needed a moment for them all to relax. When one begins the most primitive activity, the second one is not far away. The guy below inhaled the white powder in front of him into his nostrils, let out a long sigh of enjoyment, and leaned back on his sofa. The woman next to her squatted down quite skillfully. "Well, ha ha ha. This is the life we should live." The guy was obviously a little mentally disturbed because of the contraband and laughed loudly. No one around would laugh at him, because other people feel the same way. What Spider-Man? What superhero? He's just a wimp who doesn't dare to kill anyone. Ha ha ha. This time he's killed by the boss. The man holding the whiskey glass was quite calm about everything that was happening in front of him. If those guys weren't so annoying, we would have been enjoying the best life. Perhaps because he was talking about Spider-Man, he got angry and one of the guys directly pulled the woman next to him over. When they looked up and waited for the woman to serve them, they found a figure on the skylight looking at them quietly. What are you looking at? The guy pulled out his gun and was about to make the guy do his job honestly. Wayne moved. Leaping high, the cloak behind him blocked the moonlight, revealing a very realistic bat logo. Bang! The sound of breaking glass made those who hadn't gotten high yet tremble all over. The brightest light was blown up by a bat dart the moment Wayne came down. The remaining lights were dim and weak, making the space seem extremely ambiguous. And when Wayne fell down, it was destined that tonight would not be a happy night for them. Son, the man who was directly controlled by Wayne, wanted to say something harsh, but all he got was an iron fist from Wayne. One punch and the man might have to live on liquid food for the rest of his life. The entire face was covered in scarlet blood, and there were a few bloody teeth scattered around. It looks like a dead dog? Except for the guy who was already high, everyone came to their senses instantly. They took out their pistols and pointed them at Wayne. Before they could fire, Wayne had already pulled the trigger of his hook gun. The sharp barb pierced one of the men's thigh. Ah! The man's cry of pain had no effect on Wayne. Wayne unceremoniously used the man as his weapon, swinging him around and knocking down everyone around him. He pulled the trigger again and pulled the man in front of him. Wayne punched the man in the chest and knocked him away. Without giving them any chance to react, Wayne used his speed to get in front of one of the guys. The speed and strength were fully demonstrated at this moment. He hugged the guy's body with one hand and threw him over his shoulder with great force. With Wayne's help, the guy smashed the sofa next to him. The guy who was high before was still there laughing crazily, totally unaware that there were no more guys he was familiar with around. She even waved to Wayne. Come on. I like threesomes. Wayne's response was brief and powerful. He punched the man in the face again and again until the man was no longer recognizable. But what Wayne was sure of was that the guy was not dead. End of this chapter. Chapter 6: The Bat That Does Big Things. Sorry, I hate it. Wayne straightened up. Now, here, except for the women who had already been drugged by those scums, there were no one else. There was no one left who could stand normally. Wayne didn't think those crazy women could say anything, as they were like a group of demons dancing wildly. Their brains may have been completely destroyed long ago. Wayne pressed the miniature blasting charge on the intact safe, directly blowing open the safe door. In this regard, Wayne can only admire Batman. A belt really has everything. What emerged from the safe were rolls of US dollar bills, as well as a large amount of rough diamonds and gold. The former Batman would probably be quite calm when facing these things, but unfortunately it is Wayne who is facing these things now. But even if Wayne was excited for a moment, he suppressed it under his own reason. Wayne pulled down the curtain on the side and emptied all the items in the safe. But Wayne didn't touch a single cent of the US dollars scattered in the hall. Wayne wasn't sure if there was anything wrong with the money. The hook gun fired, and Wayne disappeared on the top floor carrying his curtain containing a large amount of cash and precious metals. But this doesn't mean that Wayne will give up their goods so easily. So you sold me out just to get your own starting capital, right? Spider-Man looked at Wayne carrying a lot of bags and small things on his back. His big white eyes widened. He simply couldn't believe that Wayne would abandon him there just for those things he was carrying. Man, you really hurt my heart by doing this. Spider-Man covered his chest with his hands and narrowed his big eyes again, as if he was telling about his grievances. Watch them, I'll be back soon. Wayne handed the big bag to Spider-Man and then returned to the building again. Spider-Man couldn't believe his ears. He was afraid he had heard it wrong. If he had no problem, it was Batman who just asked him to see things for him. He was clearly betrayed by this guy just now, but now the Bat wants him to do things for him. Spider-Man really wanted to shout, "Son of bitch," directly to Batman. But in the end, his good upbringing made him take back his dirty words, and he sat obediently on the rooftop water tank, looking at the package thrown down by the Bat. After doing what he needed to do most, Wayne chose a direct and decisive approach this time. Bang! The not-so-strong back door was knocked open by a figure. Gang members holding guns rolled on the ground with painful expressions on their faces. Before anyone could come over and ask what happened, Wayne had already appeared in front of them. Wayne's approach to these gang members was quite direct. Batman's iron fist hit them directly in the face. The force of up to 1.000 pounds was enough to knock them unconscious in an instant. Such a violent commotion naturally attracted the attention of other gang members. They had no idea what was happening at the back door. But this concerns their lives and property, so they must go and take a look. No one knew the consequences of the commotion at the back door, whether their boss would directly take their lives. But when they actually got to the back door, they only saw a bunch of unconscious gang members on the ground, and no sign of anyone. What happened, brother? Help up a gang member who looks like he could still be woken up. The man shook him frantically, trying to get some information out of him about the attacker. Hell's Kitchen is so lively today. Spider-Man, who was just confirmed dead, appeared on their territory. Now a guy showed up out of nowhere and broke into their lair. While watching someone asking specific questions, other gang members were nervously looking around with guns raised to see if there were any outsiders. Wayne was above their heads, quietly watching all the precautions they had taken. Wayne stepped lightly on the wall, gave up the idea of staying on the ceiling, and slammed his knees directly into the back of an armed thug. The moment his knees hit him, the guy vomited blood and fell to the ground. Before the two guys beside that man could react, one of them was stabbed and fell to the ground. The moment he turned around, he hooked his legs around the neck of the gang member who wanted to find out Wayne's whereabouts. Now I ask and you answer. Go to hell, you freak. I have to say that this guy is still quite courageous. Even when facing Wayne, he can still clearly say such words. What happened at the back door? Did anyone break in? Suddenly the guy's intercom rang. Even if that guy really wanted to tell them that there was a big problem here, there was nothing he could do. Wayne's legs were tightly clamped around his neck, making it difficult for him to even breathe. Taking the intercom from the guy, Wayne operated some on his armor and then spoke into the intercom. Everything is safe. Just two guys having some fun. Fuck, they only know how to find things for other people to do. Tell them to stay in their positions honestly. If there are any problems, I will skin them alive. It is obvious that the person on the other end of the conversation is in a higher position, and many people came over to check. I know. After turning off the intercom, Wayne stared at the minion whose face was already red. Relaxing his restraint a little, the minion took a deep breath of the air that he had never cherished before. Tell me why no one pays attention to the top? Wayne was actually quite curious. Obviously, what he had done on the top floor was already a big deal, but still no one went up to check it out. Maybe it was because of the threat of imminent death that made this guy really scared. He stopped being stubborn and spoke directly to Wayne. The people there are all important clients. No matter what happens there, we can't disturb them. This answer surprised Wayne a little. He had previously thought that they were just some middle and high-level leaders who were gathering there to party. He did not expect that they would be clients of their gang. Where is your pharmaceutical factory? Wayne quickly asked his next question. Wayne needs time now, but the sniper who had been unconscious before obviously will not give him much time. According to calculations, the next round of interrogation is probably about to begin. As soon as they discovered that the sniper had lost contact, they would naturally realize that something was wrong. It's right downstairs. Go down from that entrance. The minion reluctantly raised his hand and pointed towards the entrance of the staircase. Anyone else? There is none left. After getting no answer from anyone, Wayne punched the guy on the head. I guess it's because he is young and can sleep whenever he wants in such a harsh environment. He loosened his legs and let the guy fall directly to the ground. Then Wayne took out 2 miniature incendiary bombs from his universal belt. After pressing the detonation button, Wayne returned along the same path he took when he came in. Bat landed lightly on the roof of the building, looking at Spider-Man squatting on the side in boredom, and the package lying safely nearby. Oh, our great Bat is finally back. With his sensitive hearing, Spider-Man naturally noticed the sound of Wayne retracting his grappling hook when he came back. Just when Spider-Man was about to ask Wayne where he had been and what he had done, he saw a raging fire burning under a building in the distance. It's really a big deal, Spider-Man said with some sigh. End of this chapter. Chapter 7: The Spider That Left. Are you going to stay here or leave together? Wayne didn't care at all about the raging fire in the building behind him. He was well aware of the power of the incendiary bombs he had thrown. As long as the contraband factory down there is like that guy said, there is no one there. Then this fire is destined not to cause any casualties. The only thing destroyed was the contraband underneath. To be honest, I'm not quite sure where we are going next. Spider-Man spoke to Wayne quite calmly. Find a suitable place and sort out our current identities. Wayne had already started his actions while speaking. Okay, you are the boss now, I'll listen to you. Spider-Man didn't want to continue wasting his brain cells on this aspect. The intensity of today's work has indeed reached my own standards. Wait, you mean bearing false witness? But only after leaving with Batman did Spider-Man understand what Wayne meant. What does it mean to get to grips with your current identity? Isn't that false testimony? That's a crime, man. Spider-Man suddenly jumped in front of Batman. He spoke to Wayne with a serious face. Wayne narrowed his eyes and looked at Spider-Man in front of him. We have always been criminals, haven't we? How is that possible? Now that we have this power, shouldn't we take on our responsibilities? And isn't it our mission to stop those guys from committing crimes? Spider-Man was extremely excited and he objected to what Batman expressed. He only knew that if he had understood what the greater the ability, the greater the responsibility meant after possessing this power, he would never have lost his Uncle Ben. Are you a police officer? Wayne spoke indifferently. Spider-Man shook his head. No, it's not. Are you a law enforcer? No. So what do you think you are doing? Wayne didn't want to say anything more. Once again disappeared in front of Spider-Man. Spider-Man wanted to stop Wayne from leaving, but now he needed to think carefully about what Wayne had said before. What Batman said really shocked Spider-Man's mentality. He needs some quiet time now. It is best not to follow the Bat for a short period of time. At least after I have sorted out all the words that can refute the Bat, I can find this stinky bat and have a good talk with him. After shooting out Spider Silk again, Spider-Man now needs to find a place to calm down. But he didn't see that as soon as he left there, Wayne had already appeared on the fire escape downstairs. Calmly watched Spider-Man leave. What you just said was a big blow. Thomas's words appeared in Wayne's mind. Aren't people like us always criminals? Wayne didn't think there was anything wrong with what he said. Besides, if this kind of words can discourage a mature Spider-Man, then he doesn't deserve to be called Spider-Man. When Wayne said this, his words highlighted ruthlessness. By the way, what is Spider-Man anyway? You seem somewhat familiar with this world, but not much. Thomas had thought about asking Wayne what he had been through. Although he is dressed as Batman, he has an understanding of a world he has never seen before. You can think of this as a replica of the heroic universe. Wayne jumped down from the fire escape. When Wayne was about to land on the ground, the cloak behind him suddenly unfolded, slowing down his fall. To Thomas, after hearing Wayne's words, he didn't think that his world was a so-called heroic universe. He only felt that his world was a paradise for crazy people with superpowers. Amazon and Atlantis were at war, flooding half of Europe. A cyborg is always thinking about getting himself into a so-called resistance army. All of this did not make Thomas feel that he had anything to do with being a hero, even if he himself is not. He was just like Wayne said. They are all criminals. He is even a murderer. What you do may be considered quite consistent with the ideas of some people in this universe. Thomas did not say anything, but Wayne spoke instead. Yeah, it's just that guy is more extreme. Wayne walked towards the vehicle in front of him. Fortunately, Wayne did find a set of casual clothes there that allowed him to take off his combat suit. As an apology for taking the other person's clothes, Wayne put down a stack of US dollars. After taking off his mask, Wayne used the rear-view mirror of the vehicle to clearly see what he looked like in this world. To be honest, at this moment Wayne might have understood why the Joker in the comics thought so highly of the appearance of the bat. Even in the mouth of a madman it can be judged as perfect. With his meticulously carved and perfectly defined features, perhaps in the eyes of women, Wayne can definitely be considered sexy now. Especially those pair of melancholy blue eyes. No matter who looks into those eyes, it is impossible to look away easily. Nice face. After praising the face, Wayne began to change his clothes. The only drawback is that the original owner of this suit might have been a fat guy who ate too many hamburgers. Even Wayne's marble sculpture-like body is still a little too fat. However, it is perfect as a transition. Wayne even found a travel backpack in his carriage, which at least could replace the bag that looked like it was from robbery. Put on a baseball cap, snap the hood of a hoodie, and carry a backpack full of US dollars. Wayne left here. A man walking down the street with ill-fitting clothes won't cause anyone to think there's anything wrong with him. There are so many homeless people in New York that it's hard to keep up with them. He gestured to the taxi that was still working outside. A yellow taxi had already stopped in front of Wayne. New York University. Wayne got into the taxi and spoke without waiting for the driver to say anything. No problem. The driver didn't say anything and started the taxi directly. But let me make this clear, if you don't have money, I will beat you up. The driver glanced at Wayne, who was sitting in the back seat while driving. The clothes were extremely ill-fitting, and although there was no strange smell, the driver still thought they were homeless. Wayne simply picked up the newspaper in the back of the taxi and began to gain a comprehensive understanding of the world. For him, only by understanding most of the conditions in this world can he create an identity that best suits this world. Okay, it seems you are a dull person. Seeing that Wayne had no intention of talking to him, the taxi driver could only keep the rest of his words in his stomach. He had some hope that Wayne really wouldn't have any way to pay the fare after arriving at the station. That way he could at least give this stinky guy a good beating and vent his anger. There was no conversation along the way. When they finally arrived at New York University, the driver was about to turn around and ask Wayne to pay, but Wayne was nowhere to be seen in the back seat. All that was left was a $100 bill and a gentle breeze. Oh my God, the driver stared at all this in a daze. End of this chapter. Chapter 8, Bat Residence. Perhaps it's because New York is still immersed in the sadness of losing a good friend. Even the security personnel of New York University seemed a little depressed. Keep scrolling through your phone, looking at everything related to Spider-Man. I couldn't help but mutter to myself. He helped me before. So much so that he did not notice a figure who had already entered the building in a rather incredible way. Wayne understood their nostalgia for Spider-Man and their respect for him. But that has nothing to do with Wayne. What Wayne needs to do is use the computer here to get himself a perfect identity. Pulling his hood, Wayne had clearly never been to New York University, but he was still able to easily avoid all the cameras. Wayne found the place he found in the shortest possible time. The computer room at New York University. However, the computer room is now closed, and the electronic lock at the door tells anyone who wants to enter that it is not just a decoration. Obviously, they don't want some energetic students to come here at night to study hard. Especially as Christmas is approaching. In response, Wayne just calmly took out a small gadget from his universal belt. After pressing the little thing on it, Wayne didn't even have to wait for long before the electronic lock was completely opened. After looking around, Wayne went straight into the computer room. After making sure that there was no student trapped in the computer room due to oversleeping, Wayne began his actions. Even though the computers here are not particularly good, they are still enough for Wayne to create an identity for himself that has no flaws at all. In the dark computer room, only the computer in front of Wayne was shining. But the baseball cap and the hoodie's hoodie completely hid Wayne's face from the camera. The only sound echoing in the computer room was the clicking of keyboards. When the sun rose again, Wayne had already gotten everything he needed. Wayne really refreshed his perception of his current body once again. Even though he didn't close his eyes the whole night, he was still full of energy. And that night, Wayne was fully prepared. Legal identity, legal driver's license, legal bank account, and even social security number. It is even possible to find Wayne's tax records that he submits every year at the IRS. I'm really grateful that Mr. chose our bank. You will always be our best customer. The bank manager smiled and extended his hand to Wayne. See you next time. Wayne shook the manager's hand. Then he turned and left. After Wayne left, there were always tellers happily discussing this handsome guy. A handsome, even sexy man wearing the most inappropriate clothes is dramatic no matter how you look at it. The tellers didn't stop their discussion until the bank manager sent Wayne out. Although the bank manager was somewhat resistant to Wayne's cash, in American society, only a few people would use cash in large quantities. But those guys are obviously not people who can walk normally in the sun. But everything Wayne showed proved that this guy was a real normal person. Even if the bank manager did have some doubts, he would not refuse such an ordinary person to deposit money in their bank. When Wayne walked out of the last bank, he was no longer a bat walking around with millions of dollars on his back, but a millionaire Bruce Wayne. Wayne's next step is pretty clear. That is to buy yourself a suitable set of clothes. Standing on the measuring table of Gucci, Wayne is being measured and questioned by the tailor. Sir, is this suit for a formal occasion or a social event? Social contact. Is it daytime or night? I want one for the day and one for the evening. What style? Italian. How many buttons? 2. Since Wayne doesn't have a fixed address now, he can only come and pick it up in 2 days. But even so, Wayne still changed his clothes from head to toe. The combined 3-piece suit makes Wayne look completely new. Watching the memorial service for Spider-Man in the distance and the speeches of Spider-Man's family, Wayne just walked in the opposite direction of the crowd without saying a word. He already knew what the world he lived in was like. Speaking of which, he has also seen movies set in this world. After all, a world with multiple Spider-Men is something that arouses curiosity no matter how you look at it. Naturally, he was once one of them. In particular, there was a character named Gwen Stacy who later became the public's favorite. That would be even more unforgettable. But all this has nothing to do with him now. Now he needs to settle all his affairs in this world as soon as possible. Obviously, he is not a guy with special abilities, so it is probably impossible for him to leave this world again. All he can do now is start his own life in this world. As it is, there is very little he can do. Isn't it a little small? Thomas said this with a frown, looking at the house that Wayne had chosen through Wayne's line of sight. If I inherit your property, do you think I will live here? Wayne was quite satisfied with the detached building in front of him. Although if I want to build my own bat cave later, it will be a huge project. Thomas didn't know what to say. Yes, even though he no longer cared about Wayne Group, he still lived in Wayne Manor. Naturally, one would feel that this house is a bit too small. At least I have a place to live now. After Wayne parked his new car, he walked to the lawn in front of his house and looked into the distance. Even if this place may be quite close to a troublesome thing. There were several people placing their belongings at the door of the house. Sometimes, the things you want to avoid the most are often the ones you encounter. Wayne is indeed trying his best to avoid running into Spider-Man, but the problem is that he can find a place that suits him, where he can move in with just his luggage, and which will not affect his daily expenses. It's only here. A single-family house 100 meters away from Spider-Man's house. Now Wayne could already see the white-haired old woman who was being helped back by someone. Who else could it be other than Spider-Man's Aunt May? You really don't need me to stay by your side? Mary Jane looked at Aunt May, whose hair was already gray, with a worried look on her face. She was really worried about Aunt May's mental condition. The feeling of seeing a loved one die must not be a pleasant one. End of this chapter. Chapter 9 Bat's Chance. Don't worry, I can still bear it. May patted Mary Jane's shoulder gently. He said that he had absolutely no problem. Watching this strong old man walk into the house step by step, Mary Jane couldn't say anything to comfort him even if she wanted to. She could only stare deeply at Aunt May's door. Finally, he walked to the door and said, "If there is anything, I hope you can call me. We are still a family, right?" There was no sound in the house, but Mary Jane was sure that Aunt May must have heard her words. "I'll come back to see you, Aunt May." After leaving these words, Mary Jane turned around and left with a bit of disappointment. As for whether May heard what Mary Jane said, of course she heard it, but she was more surprised by the figures that appeared in front of her. "Oh my God!" May covered her mouth, trying not to scream out in surprise. "I'm sorry to come in without permission." One of the guys, who was only wearing black and white, took off his hat and saluted. "Hello." A little girl who looked quite cute spoke to Aunt May a little stiffly. As the little girl spoke, the robot-like thing behind her made a guilty expression in a very human way. "I don't know if it's normal for animals to talk in this world, but it's still nice to meet you."
If this voice hadn't been heard, May really might not have been able to discover that there was a small figure on her coffee table.
Wait. May was really scared by what was happening. She had indeed known for a long time that her nephew was Spider-Man, but he never said that he had so many companions. At most, he said something about Captain America. Today, at the memorial service, May also met those famous superheroes. Obviously, they all came to mourn Spider-Man. You guys are probably not my nephew's friends. May tried to calm herself down. There were so many surprising things she encountered today. Her nephew died in an earthquake of unknown cause. Of course, May believed that Peter died at the hands of a villain. How could an unknown earthquake take Spider-Man's life? Although I still can't accept it until now, this is not our universe. We came here through space due to some accident. The black and white figure said his judgment very cautiously.
And I think the reason why we came to this universe should be the source of the death of Spider-Man in this universe. Although she looked like a teenage girl, she was the one who figured out the reason why all this happened the fastest.
It seems that they have made it clear. As soon as the small doll-like figure said this, they seemed a little alert at the first moment. The spider sense told them again that a group of people had arrived at the door of the house. Ding dong. When the doorbell rang, they immediately prepared for battle. May directly pulled out a baseball bat from the side and slowly approached the gate. You guys hide, I'll take care of it. It is really inappropriate to let a woman with white hair face an unknown danger. But the approach proposed by May is indeed the best. It would be better for them not to show up now. When they came to May, they had already noticed that there were a few guys around who were staring at them with ill intentions. It was a simple matter to avoid the surveillance of those guys, but if they appeared outside now, they really had no way of knowing what unknown consequences would arise. They hid themselves as quickly as possible. When May opened the door, she put down the baseball bat in her hand. It was just a couple of kids holding some Spider-Man memorabilia. There were also some adults accompanying the children. I'm so sorry, can I put this here? The little girl handed over the Spider-Man doll in her hand, which had a small card hanging on it. The childish handwriting clearly showed that the card contained everything the child wanted to say to Spider-Man. It's okay, kid.
May squatted down and stroked the hair of the child in front of her. He is a good man.
Looking at what was happening outside, the spiders hiding in the house all gave such comments to the Spider-Man they had never seen. Of course, the spiders weren't the only ones watching this. A bat was also watching this scene in its attic. Wayne didn't feel surprised that fans would come here directly to give him gifts. Spider-Man exists just like the Flash exists. 4 people in the 2 universes, these 2 are the bottom line of conscience in their respective universes. Excluding those surprising universes, at least in other normal universes, they often play the role of the last bottom line in the team. But in the eyes of the bats, those adults who seem to be accompanying the children could not be simple guys at all. The posture when standing and the alertness when walking. They have fully demonstrated the professional training they have received. These guys are either government officials or battle-hardened mercenaries. But, obviously, it is more likely that they are the latter. If it were the American government officials, there would be no need to be on guard against everything when facing the relatives of a superhero. You really care about this place. Wayne could sense that there were at least 5 guys around who were sent to monitor him. He really doesn't trust people to the extreme. Even if someone has died in his hands, is he still worried that someone will come? No wonder Kingpin was able to achieve his current position in this world. This caution has made it less likely for him to fall into a disadvantage due to arrogance. Even though his opponent is Spider-Man. But he still has his own obsession. After discovering that his weakness is Vanessa, Kingpin of the main universe decisively dealt with Vanessa. Solved my own weaknesses. Make sure you are ready to face all possible challenges. In this universe, Kingpin Vanessa has completely become his nightmare in his dreams and his lingering obsession. Wayne touched his chin. Although he now had a place to stay, there was still a big gap between him and the real bat. Perhaps, what happens next will be a chance for him to completely transform himself into a real bat. Kingpin. Wayne took his bat dart and carefully looked at the sharp edge of the dart in his hand. End of this chapter. Chapter 10 Wayne's Questioning Skills, Extra. According to Wayne's understanding, Osborne Technology, which was originally considered a top technology company in the world, had long been completely swallowed up by Gene Bing's company. Norman Osborn has even become one of Kingpin's lackeys. As long as Wayne can manage the company that Kingpin currently owns, he will have a super company that, although it cannot catch up with Wayne Group, will still be one of the best. Also, now that Peter Parker is dead, the little black spider is about to come online. After all, there can only be one Spider-Man in a universe, that's a theorem. Even later, when Little Black Spider fought side by side with Spider-Man from the main universe, it was because Little Black Spider did not belong to Spider-Man from the main universe. It looks like tonight will still be a sleepless night. Taking a deep breath, Wayne tried to keep himself calm. Wayne had been awake for 2 consecutive days. If he was a normal person, he would feel that his mental state might be abnormal. But when I thought that I was now a half-baked Batman, everything seemed to be back to normal. It is said to be the limit of human beings. But Wayne had never seen any human being who could survive for half a minute in the vacuum of the universe without any equipment. If this is considered human, perhaps it is only relative to his teammates who are either Kryptonians or demigods. Picking up the mask beside him, Wayne looked at the pattern that represented Bruce's inner fear and anger. I couldn't help but clench my fists. It would be more interesting with Bat. When Wayne appeared again, he was dressed in a complete bat suit.
Moving his shoulders, Wayne disappeared into his house the next second.
If it were a rainy night now, it would definitely be the best time for bats to come out. How boring. By the way, did the boss say when we can leave here?
I don't want to continue monitoring an old woman.
Obviously someone was dissatisfied with this matter. He could have gone out and found a chick to spend this cold night with, but now he was forced to spy on a gray-haired old woman. The companion who was drinking hot coffee on the other side was obviously immune to the guy's complaints. Is there anything special? He ruthlessly rejected the guy's complaints about him. And close your eyes and quietly enjoy your leisure time. But the other one didn't say anything in response. Is there anything special? He repeated his words again, but unfortunately, he still didn't get any answer. Speak. He finally opened his eyes impatiently. Before he could say anything, he could still feel someone grabbing him by the neck and flying into the air. Finally, it hit the wall behind it. The intense pain instantly cleared his brain, which had been a little confused due to long-term surveillance. Who?
He forced himself to open his eyes and take a good look at who had done such a thing.
A pitch-black mask with an angry look on its face was right in front of him. What kind of monster are you? He subconsciously regarded Wayne in front of him as a mutant freak not much different from Spider-Man. Only that kind of guy would walk around in a Halloween costume late at night. Although the man was frightened by Wayne's current outfit, he still did not give up his resistance. He doesn't care what the guy in front of him is. Even if he's a freak like Spider-Man, so what? Still afraid of guns, right? His hand had already touched the pistol at his waist. If he was given a chance, he would be able to shoot the guy in front of him into a sieve. The little action was indeed very covert, but it could not escape the eyes of the bats. What's more, bats don't use their eyes at night. Wayne used his free hand to grab the guy's wrist, clamped his arm, and exerted force. Crack. The sound of bones breaking could be clearly heard. Before he could cry out in pain, Wayne had already increased the strength of his hand around his neck. All possibilities of speaking out have been strangled. Cough, cough, cough. The pain can only turn into constant coughing and painful cold sweat on the forehead. Who is your boss? Wayne didn't think he could get anything about Kingpin from a guy like this. But if we go a little further up, we might be able to get some information. Among the guys under Kingpin, Wanderer is obviously a lone fighter. Dr. Octopus in this world, who can be more figuratively called Octopus Mom, has an entire research institute as her base. Scorpion? I don't know where in the gutter it is. The only person who could possibly be their leader is Tombstone. But even though he had roughly guessed whose subordinate it was, Wayne was still not very reassured. Looking at this guy gritting his teeth and not saying a word. The look of me not revealing anything even if you beat me to death is really too familiar. Aha! The next second, Wayne threw the guy directly to the edge of the roof. The huge force even caused him to mouth a mouthful of blood when he hit the low wall of the roof. Puff!
Blood spurted out of his mouth, and the guy looked at Wayne who was walking towards him with a look of fear.
The hand wrapped in a pitch-black glove grabbed his neck again. A strong man weighing 80 kilograms was lifted up by Wayne with one hand. There was nothing beneath his feet. He was hung by Wayne outside the rooftop of the apartment building. I'm an ordinary person and I don't have the power of Spider-Man, so I get tired easily and let go. Wayne used the calmest emotions and spoke the words that made that guy most afraid. I think you should know what it feels like to fall from the 3rd floor. If your legs hit the ground, you will become paralyzed, but your head? As Wayne spoke, he took another step forward. Now tell me, who is your boss? What's his address? The man might still want to keep it secret, but the problem is that the masked freak in front of him seems to be unable to hold on any longer. He could already feel Wayne's hands trembling slightly. The next moment, she might just let go and let him have a free soul. All I know is that he lives in a high-end apartment in Manhattan, and I don't know anything else. He grabbed Wayne's arm with his intact left hand. He really didn't want to just fall and die here. What a strange universe. A bad guy's lackey can live in crowded Manhattan. Wayne said, and the next moment he let go of his hand. Ah! This time no one stopped him. Boom! Wayne didn't even think of looking down.
In his calculations, the only possibility for him to become a paralyzed villain was that he would become a paraplegic villain.
But come to think of it, no one will let him continue to be a bad guy. End of this chapter. Chapter 11 The Destination of the Tombstone. Even at night, the sound of heavy objects falling and people wailing in pain are always conspicuous enough. It was a quiet community, and people took time out from their own affairs to see what was going on. Kingpin men even mixed in with the crowd of onlookers. When they saw that they were their own people, they just turned around and left indifferently. Apparently someone is taking action against them now. The question is what kind of person would have such courage? Spider-Man has already died in their hands, so who would be so blind as to mess with them now? Those little guys who used to work with Spider-Man?
But no matter who they are, they want to tell others that they are being targeted by someone else.
Boss, we have a brother who was thrown down from the building by someone unknown. Although he is not dead yet, he should be disabled. The younger brother who was assigned here to monitor Spider-Man's family immediately began his report. No one knew what was said on the other end of the phone,
But when the younger brother looked back at the guy who was crippled by Wayne before leaving, his eyes were full of pity.
His fate was sealed. The spiders heard the sound just as clearly. But I didn't choose to go out directly.
When they arrived here, Spider-Man, the only one here whose career has always been a detective and a superhero, the black and white shadow spider had stopped the others who wanted to rush out.
There are spies around who we don't know. If they go out, wouldn't that be exactly what those guys want? So now all they can do is wait and see.
As gangsters who have dealt with superheroes for a long time, they know best that usually at this time, those plainclothes freaks would have already left.
But he still walked to the other end cautiously and waited there quietly. Wayne didn't listen to what the minions said at all. He just waited quietly for the guy he wanted to see to appear here. What a high-end apartment in Manhattan. It would be impossible for Wayne to check all the high-end apartments in Manhattan Island in 3 days. But some things are bound to come from the boss of the thugs who are monitoring the Parker family around here. Wayne was always hanging far behind those minions like a ghost. This not only ensures that I can see their actions clearly, but also ensures that those guys have no way of finding me. Even this distance is absolutely suitable for Wayne. As long as that person appears, Wayne can ensure that he has arrived in front of them. Wayne was right. When his younger brother called that person, that guy had already decided to come over and take a look. The main reason is that this area is too sensitive. Spider-Man had just died, and his own surveillance personnel had already been taken care of. No matter from which perspective, it is a rather horrifying inference. Maybe some superhero attacked them without their knowledge. Especially since their factory was even attacked by an unknown masked hero yesterday. This made him, who was already a little irritable, even more furious. A vehicle appeared directly on the street without any disguise. The sudden braking left dark marks on the road. This simple and direct way of parking has already revealed how angry that guy is right now. I hope that what I hear next will be good news. A man dressed in gray walked directly down from the driver's seat. As soon as he showed up, he started scolding his minions.
If things could really be as simple as he said, the world would have been very different from what it is now.
Sorry, boss. There are too many people there and we can't do anything. The little guy who called to notify Tombstone immediately stood up and admitted his mistake. After all, the noise was so loud that it attracted all the residents in the surrounding area. Even if they wanted to take action, they didn't have the time. Moreover, when they arrived there, some residents in the surrounding area had already called the police and medical services. All they could do was leave there and make sure they wouldn't get involved. Tombstone took a deep breath. He also knew that killing someone in public was absolutely unacceptable. But things have been too bad recently. Does anyone know who this guy is? How could he do such a thing? Tombstone suppressed his anger and tried to make his voice as calm as possible. But at this time, the minions around just looked at each other, and finally chose to lower their heads and prepare to face the storm. So you didn't even see who attacked them, right? Tombstone really didn't know how many brain cells had died when he came up with the idea of recruiting younger brothers to act as his spies to monitor the Parker family. If it weren't for the red and blue police lights flashing in the distance. Now Tombstone really wants to pull out his gun and kill all the guys in front of him one by one. Listen, after those guys enter the hospital, I don't care what method you use to get rid of them for me. Otherwise, I will deal with you. After leaving these words, Tombstone got into the car. But what Tombstone didn't notice was that the moment he closed the car door, a small black had been nailed to the trunk of his car. Tombstone originally thought that he came here to get some information about the guy who destroyed their factory. But I didn't expect that the guys here didn't even see the specific appearance of the attacker. But think about it. The people in the factory also said that the guy was like a bat moving at night, leaving no trace at all. Almost all the guys who had faced the masked freak became vegetables. One guy roughly saw the man's outfit, but it was just his back. The only useful information that guy gave Tombstone was the man was wearing a pitch-black battlesuit and a cape that looked like bat wings. Compared to the former Spider-Man, the guy who attacked them now did save their people's lives. But that guy's attack was much more ruthless than Spider-Man. Do you think you are Batman? Tombstone gripped the steering wheel of his car and said angrily, this feeling of being provoked is really unpleasant. Wayne looked at the small red on his armor that kept moving on the map. He believed that if something like this happened, Tombstone would definitely go to Jean Bing to report it. If it was just the Tombstone's own intention, it would be impossible to arrange so many spies here. It could only be that Fisk wanted to see if anyone wanted to help Spider-Man get revenge. Maybe Fisk himself hadn't thought about it. There are indeed people who will seek revenge for Spider-Man, but some people are targeting the Fisk group under his control. The Tombstone stopped, but unlike Wayne's previous guess, it did not stop in Manhattan or the more affluent Long Island. Instead, it stopped in Brooklyn, not far away. Judging from Fisk's obsession with Vanessa and his son in this universe, this should be their warm family. Moving his neck, Wayne is now ready for a tough battle. End of this chapter. Chapter 12 My Back, Extra. So, after we sent away that friendly neighbor from New York City, we welcomed a messenger of the night who was completely black? Kingpin, who was sitting in his seat, was even asking questions about the Tombstone. His eyes were still fixed on the photo on the coffee table.
There was a woman with a very warm face and a child who looked well-behaved and sensible.
These are the two most important people to Fisk in the world. But he pushed it away with his own hands. All he needs to do now is to bring them back to his side. Everything else can be put aside for now. Even if a superhero like Spider-Man appears again, he can pretend not to see it as long as it doesn't interfere with his plans. But he also needs to know whether this superhero will become an obstacle to bringing back his lover. Yes, boss, but it seems that this guy is much more ruthless than Spider-Man. Anyone who has fought him is basically disabled for life. Tombstone has compiled all the information that is known now. It is true that no one lost their life because of that guy's attack. But now turning them into vegetables or even making them disabled for life is not much better than death. Let's put his matter aside for now. What's more important to me now is not to trouble a small factory, nor those disabled members who are left behind. Picking up the photo frame in front of him, Fisk stroked it gently with a gentle expression. It is hard to imagine that this person with such a gentle face could say words so cruel and cold. But it is obvious that Tombstone and Fisk are the same kind of people. He doesn't care about the life, death and disability of those guys. The only important things to him are his career and himself. Nothing else bothers him. I understand, boss. He nodded to Fisk. Tombstone already understood how he should deal with this matter next. Maybe he had no way to catch the Apostle of the Night, but he could ignore the destruction and property loss that the Apostle of the Night brought to them. This matter is quite simple for Tombstone's. Seeing Fisk looking at him again out of the corner of his eye, Tombstone bowed to Fisk tactfully. I'm leaving now. As soon as he finished speaking, Tombstone walked out of the house, out of this space filled with happy memories of Fisk and his family. Fisk no longer paid attention to the tombstone, but instead turned his attention to the framed photo of Vanessa and his son. Vanessa, Richard, I will bring you all back. It was hard to imagine that Fisk, who was so powerful in the underground world, would now show such a sentimental expression. When Wayne just arrived at Fisk's residence, he saw Fisk in this state. Wayne doesn't care how much Fisk loves his wife and son, a criminal who has directly or indirectly destroyed the family happiness of countless people. After losing your loved ones, you want to drag them back to your side. How can such a good thing be possible? After pressing the control surface on his right armor, Wayne now saw the world no longer within his normal field of vision. In Wayne's eyes, this house is no longer a normal residence. He could see every area of the house that had been specially treated. Although this house is an extremely memorable place for Fisk, it does not mean that he will withdraw all his backup plans because of these things. Sure enough, Wayne has now found a special elevator leading to the bottom of the house. Wayne knew very well that the things hidden in there could not be any documents about the Fisk group, but might just be information about Fisk's criminal empire. But it is already within Wayne's acceptable range. Well hidden. After taking a deep look at Fisk, who was still there worrying, Wayne did not choose to go in directly. Wayne needs a complete plan that will allow him to get everything about Fisk's criminal empire during this time. With all the structures of Fisk's current residence reflected in his mind, Wayne chose to retreat directly. Today, I was able to get Fisk's address and the structure diagram of his house. Wayne was satisfied. Sometimes bats don't necessarily appear only at night, they can also appear during the day. Quickly left here. Tomorrow during the day is the time when Wayne needs to do things now. Wayne stopped as he passed an apartment building in Brooklyn. Sometimes, the guy you don't want to meet always appears in front of you in an extremely unexpected way. For example, the scene now looks like a crime scene. The victim was none other than Spider-Man, who had been nagging at him before. The person dragging Spider-Man was a kid wearing a cheap Spider-Man peripheral costume. Bang! The sudden noise coming from the fire escape scared the child. He dragged Spider-Man's hand, subconsciously let go, and raised it up. Poor Peter Benjamin Parker, after being let go by the children, fell straight down the fire escape. If he were not Spider-Man, he could have been directly admitted to the hospital's supreme luxury ward, or simply the ICU. I didn't kill him, and he didn't die, he just fainted. I just wanted to take him home to take a good look at his injuries. I had absolutely no other intentions. The child explained everything quickly. But maybe it was because of his talent in languages, but to Wayne, when he spoke quickly, it sounded like he was rapping. Aha! Wayne didn't say anything, but just this meaningless interjection was enough to make the child a little overwhelmed. Aha! He tentatively repeated Wayne's words to see if this masked guy, who looked like a superhero and didn't look easy to mess with, would explain to him what he meant. What I said is absolutely true. You have to believe me. The child was really frightened by Wayne's expression. He was bitten by a spider and gained strange superpowers. He also saw the battle between Spider-Man and the Green Goblin. He even saw how Spider-Man died. But he was just a kid after all. He was still a little scared when he met a superhero who was completely incomprehensible to him. Especially looking at the appearance of the superhero, it is obvious that he is not someone who is easy to talk to. Hey. All he can do now is act nice. Make yourself look harmless. Oh, my back. Spider-Man's voice interrupted the frozen atmosphere between them. End of this chapter. Chapter 13: The Friendship Between Spiders and Bats. Spider-Man, who had a belly, slowly stood up with the help of the wall beside him, and as he stood up, he made a sound because of the pain in his back. But now Spider-Man no longer wears a mask, looks more like a down-and-out homeless man. A green coat and a pair of elastic pants that don't look very comfortable. He's nothing like Spider-Man in any way. Spider-Man rubbed his forehead, trying to think carefully about what he had experienced before. A child electrocuted him and knocked him unconscious. then took himself behind a New York light rail tram, crashing into one thing after another. Especially at the end, they actually fell down from it. If my body wasn't strong enough, I would have been sent to the hospital as a result of this beating. Spider-Man was also a little confused about the surrounding environment because he had never seen this place before. When he looked up, he saw the child who had tortured him so much, and the first person he met after coming to this universe. A huge fan of that bat.
Hey, I knew you would come to see me.
Peter was happier now and didn't care about the pain in his back. He pointed at Wayne and started laughing.
Do you know each other? The child now felt that he must have disturbed the lair of some strange organization. Otherwise it would be impossible for him to meet these two people at the same time as they knew each other.
I don't know him. This was Wayne's answer.
Yes.
This was Spider-Man's answer. Clearly two people spoke at the same time, but gave two completely different answers. And it's obvious that Spider-Man is more excited. What do you mean we don't know each other? I helped you yesterday and attracted so much firepower, and now you turn around and say you don't know me. Peter obviously reacted strongly to Wayne's statement that he was not familiar with the relationship between them. In Peter's opinion, the two of them had experienced a friendship that could be considered a life-and-death battle. How come they didn't know each other here at Wayne's place? When the child heard what Peter said, he also looked at Wayne with interest. But Wayne just glanced at the child sideways, and the child immediately retracted his gaze and looked somewhere else. For this young boy, Wayne's deterrence is obviously much higher than Spider-Man's. First of all, you came to me, and secondly, I didn't force you to stay with me.
Spider-Man could not imagine how Wayne could speak such cold and chilling words with his mouth that was only 37 degrees Celsius.
Are you saying that I'm nosy? Are you saying that there is no relationship between us? Do you know that such words will hurt the heart of a fragile spider? Although I don't know if Peter himself has realized that there is something wrong with the words he is saying now. But Wayne's mask, which already showed some bitterness and hatred, became even more angry at this moment. Wow! The child acted as if he had heard some shocking gossip. First he looked at the Spider-Man dressed as a homeless man below. Then he looked at... Oh no! He doesn't have the courage.
He could only lower his head and stare at his unlaced shoes.
Wayne glanced at Spider-Man below, then shot out his grappling hook and left. What was originally a simple matter became increasingly difficult to explain after Spider-Man's words. And such matters become increasingly difficult to explain the more they are explained.
So between you.
This kid was obviously quite confused and interested in what Peter had said before. Spider-Man doesn't care what this guy says. What he has to do now is to catch up with the bat. That bat might very well know how he came to this universe.
Don't leave yet, I have something to ask you.
Looking at Spider-Man below, who seemed to be about to leave, the child immediately jumped down from the fire escape. This time, when he really faced the child, Spider-Man's spider sense was activated.
You are the same as me.
Spider-Man was a little confused. According to the theory of parallel universe, there should only be one Spider-Man in a universe, just like in his world. And he had just attended a Spider-Man funeral today. I actually met a child with this ability at night. Quantum theory is amazing.
Spider-Man muttered to himself.
What are you talking about? The child asked curiously. But he soon interrupted himself with his own questions. Now he needs to understand what is happening in this world. And the guy in front of him who looks like Spider-Man is the answer to everything. And of course, there's that guy who looks an awful lot like Batman from the comic books. Why do you look so much like Peter Parker? Because I am Peter Parker. Spider-Man dusted himself off and didn't want to discuss any more nonsense here. If he had left a little later, he probably wouldn't have been able to even touch the bat's hair. Then why didn't you die? Why is your hair different? Why did you get older? And your body shape, why do you have a belly? This series of questions really made Spider-Man feel overwhelmed. He really didn't know where a child came from, with so many questions. Children in the past were obviously easy to coax. Although I know you're saying I'm fat, I won't argue with you now. And you have to remember that superheroes never buy their own merchandise. At this point, Spider-Man was already standing on the wall, slowly walking upwards. So you're from another time and place. Like a parallel universe, similar to each other, but different? You're Spider-Man there?
And then you traveled here, and you don't know why.
After a while, the boy had figured out how this Spider-Man with a small belly got here. And while he was saying this, the boy had unknowingly followed Peter and climbed up the wall. Yes, you are right. Spider-Man was really annoyed by his nagging, so he turned around and spoke to the boy in a very serious tone. Now I just want to find that bat and find out how I got here. He may be the only one in this universe who knows how I got here. And you're going to make me lose track of that bat right now. But what if I also knew how you got here? The child said to Spider-Man quite excitedly. Question mark. Spider-Man stopped and looked back at the child wearing the cheap peripheral clothing with some confusion. I was there when our universe's Spider-Man died. I also know what brought you here. What's your name, kid? Spider-Man didn't stop, but continued to walk up with the child. Miles Morales. Can you teach me how to be Spider-Man like Peter said? We'll talk about this after we find the bat. As he spoke, Spider-Man had already reached the rooftop of the building. Faintly you can still see the figure of the bat. End of this chapter. Chapter 14 Batman's Sleeping Style. Miles obviously couldn't understand why they still had to look for the bat, since he had already stated that he had seen everything. But the Peter Parker in front of him still wanted to find the bat that looked more ferocious. Can we discuss not going to look for him? Miles, following behind Peter Parker, tried to persuade Spider-Man to change his mind. Miles really didn't want to see the bat again unless it was necessary. I always feel that the bat is not very friendly to him. Myers, you have to believe me. He is a very easy-to-talk-to guy. Peter Parker didn't think Wayne was unfriendly. In his eyes, it was just a sign that Wayne didn't want to talk much. He doesn't like to talk, so why doesn't he just talk more? But I always feel that the look in his eyes when he looks at me is filled with deep disgust. Miles felt a little scared when he thought of Wayne's ferocious eyes. Peter Parker thought he was just a normal Link, and in his impression, the bat always looked bitter and resentful when looking at anyone. Peter Parker stopped walking, turned around and patted Miles on the shoulder gently. Believe me, he doesn't just look like that when he looks at you, he looks like that when he looks at me. After saying this, Peter Parker didn't say anything else. He ran directly in the direction where Wayne had left before. All right. Since his Spider-Man coach had already said this, Miles could only agree. But to be honest, Peter Parker's current speed really makes it difficult for the kid who just acquired spider powers to keep up. After running for a while, Wayne found that two spiders were following him. The skills from Batman clearly told him how to avoid the tracking of the two spiders. In fact, the tracking ability of the big one is quite good, but the small one is full of loopholes. The hook gun shot out and directly pulled Wayne's body to another location. But this time Wayne's figure was no longer a little slow as before, but left his original position extremely quickly. This sudden acceleration obviously made Peter Parker, who was taking care of Miles from behind and slowing down his pursuit, unable to react. He couldn't care about Miles now. They had to catch the bat first before they could deal with Miles. Even though he really reached the landing point of the bat as quickly as possible, he still did not see the figure of the bat, as if that guy suddenly possessed superpowers and could become invisible here. Whoosh! A bat dart flew directly past his ear and hit the wall not far away. If his spider sense hadn't given him any warning, Peter Parker might have thought the batarang was meant for his throat. There's no need to greet him with something like this. Peter Parker turned around and said to the bat that slowly walked out of the shadows. Why are you following me? Wayne's words have always been concise. He couldn't figure out what this guy wanted to do by following him. We may need your help. The caution shown by Peter Parker was something Wayne had not seen in movies before. After all, a guy who dares to go to Kingpin's base to resolve the incident after listening to the child's explanation would definitely not be as meticulous as he shows now. Of course, this may also have something to do with the fact that Peter Parker has always fought alone. I'm not completely familiar with these abilities yet. I think you may have to be a little slower. Miles didn't arrive at the two people's side until this time. This kid should have explained everything to you. You two can handle it yourselves. I have my own plans, so it's best if you don't bother each other. Wayne threw a smoke bomb when he said this. No matter how extraordinary Spider-Man's senses are, they can never be stronger than Superman's. When the smoke cleared, Wayne had long disappeared. Ahem, it seems that you are right. Miles, who was choked by the smoke bomb and coughed, weakly put his hand on Peter Parker's shoulder. This time he was sure that what Peter Parker said was true, and that this bat was really like that to everyone. Wayne doesn't care what Peter Parker and the others are going to do. If they follow the normal plot process, there will be no problems for them, and they will be led to other Spider-Men. What's more, if these Spider-Men did not go to the private laboratory sponsored by Kingpin, does it mean that Kingpin might not go there as shown in the plot? No matter from which perspective, Wayne felt that if he interfered with the progress of the plot, it would cause the plot to deviate. Not only will it cause problems for Spider-Man, but more importantly, it will cause Wayne's plan to fail. Wayne's choice made Thomas in his mind quite satisfied. In Thomas's opinion, Wayne's choice is absolutely the correct one, and everything must be based on the premise of completing his plan. It is only possible to help others if it does not affect the normal progress of your own plans. This is also why Thomas repeatedly rejected the invitations from Cyborg, who was an advisor to the American military. At that time, he just wanted to maintain order in Gotham, and other things meant nothing to Thomas. Before returning home, Wayne carefully checked the entire community to see if there were any Kingpin spies left. Although what happened today was already a warning to them. But in all things, it is better to be cautious. Perhaps Kingpin and Tombstone are planning to let this poor community go. There were no longer eyes watching the Parkers all the time, and no more roving homeless people acting as mobile surveillance. Wayne landed lightly in the backyard of the house he had just bought without making any sound, as if his body was weightless. Maybe I can get a good sleep. After entering his room, Wayne put his equipment neatly away, then turned his neck and walked into the bedroom. As soon as his head touched the pillow, he fell into a deep sleep. But just 2 hours later, Wayne, lying in bed, opened his eyes again. Fuck. Now Wayne finally understands how Batman manages to fight criminals at night and still socialize normally during the day. There is even time to find a few actresses. This kind of sleep method that can fill up all energy in just 2 hours, anyone can probably do this. It's just a pity for Wayne. He needs to adapt to the sleeping method and sleeping time. As for sleeping, Wayne thinks it is best to sleep till dawn. But now the sky outside is still black. End of this chapter. Chapter 15 Wayne's acting skills. Rubbing his head, Wayne now really couldn't accept this kind of thing. After 2 hours of sleep, Wayne still hasn't recovered.
So, you're the same?
After drinking a glass of water, Wayne asked this question to Thomas in his mind. I can't do it. I can't get this kind of sleep. If I want to sleep, I need to at least sleep well for a while. Thomas said directly that he couldn't do it. There is still a big difference between Thomas and Bruce. Especially when it comes to Wayne Group, they are both completely different. Bruce at least had time to solve some of the Wayne Group's problems, but Thomas had long forgotten about the Wayne Group. Thomas's most important person had already fallen in that alley. And because Thomas is accustomed to using guns to solve problems, he is much worse than Bruce in fighting. Naturally, there is no way to compare physique with Bruce. But I suggest you use this time to train yourself. I don't know how Bruce did it, but at least based on your current physical condition. If you don't control your diet and exercise well, your body won't be able to maintain its current extreme state. Although Thomas didn't know much about this matter, from his point of view, Wayne's health must be well maintained. Any recommended exercises or diets? Wayne was also bored, so he naturally started chatting with Thomas. Although the old man's attitude towards criminals has always been that of a punisher, at least it allows Wayne to understand how he should maintain his physical fitness. He didn't want to be like Peter Benjamin Parker, who couldn't even maintain his body shape when experiencing a midlife crisis. Jogging, 20-mile, 32-kilometer, long-distance running, yoga. I also need to train my fighting skills in the evening. Thomas listed a series of activities. But when he finished speaking, he stopped and looked at his surroundings. You also need a large training facility and accommodation. Got it. Wayne felt helpless when he heard this. Didn't he want to have a super good place to train himself? If he wanted to find a place suitable for exercise and have a bat cave of his own, Wayne felt that he would spend half a month running around in the underground world. But even so, Wayne couldn't be sure whether he would have enough wealth by that time. Now, he just needs to wait quietly for Jean Bing to have problems, and he will be able to transfer everything to himself with his own skills. This is the easiest and most harmless way. As for what Kingpin will become, Wayne doesn't care. What's more, after this incident was over, the guy was directly handed over to the police by the little black spider. Wayne has to get everything done before the police. As for the recipe, let's talk about it after you have money. Thomas didn't intend to tell the recipe to Wayne now. When the ingredients are not guaranteed, even if all the recipes are told to Wayne, there is no way to guarantee that the ingredients Wayne can find are suitable. Do you have to be so blunt? Wayne has already changed into a sports suit and is ready to go out for a few laps. This is the most suitable sport for him at the moment. It's a pitch-black night, and few people would think that anyone would go out for a run at this time. Even though New York City now has fewer ordinary criminals because of the existence of those masked heroes. However, the criminals that appeared now were not the guys who dared to rob with only a pistol before. There is no criminal in New York City who doesn't have his or her own special skills. Otherwise, if you tell others, no one will believe that you are a super criminal. Walking out the door, Wayne stretched his limbs, trying to put himself in the best possible condition. Wayne would really like to see what kind of monsters would come out at night in New York. But now that Spider-Man is dead, despite what he did in Hell's Kitchen, those super criminals obviously don't want to work late at night. There is no way to get the little spider here. I have to say, Spider-Man is really everyone's favorite. Whether in the hero camp or the villain camp. Just like when outsiders want to see Bats, they often need to have a good conversation with the leaders of the Bats fans. Only if he is accepted, he might be able to see the Bat. But usually, they can't reach an agreement. Although Wayne's night run didn't make much noise, it still attracted the attention of a spider.
Late night run.
Looking at Wayne running outside, Spider-Man Noir frowned. After Spider-Man Noir recalled the spies around the tombstone, he was already outside observing everything carefully. He wants to help the dead Spider-Man protect his family. Naturally, he noticed every move of Wayne. Thanks to his black and white painting style, even if he appears in the dark now, it is difficult for anyone to notice his appearance. However, if someone noticed him, most people would probably faint from fright. A guy with no color at all is a bit scary no matter how you think about it. The Spider-Man Noir flashed and shot out spider silk in the direction where Wayne was running. He wanted to take a good look at who this person was. If he is a bad guy, then he will help the world and get rid of this guy. If he is a good person, then we should prevent him from getting into any problems due to the bad guys lurking around in the middle of the night. Although Shadow Spider was shocked that the New York today is so different from the New York in 1933, considering that Spider-Man could die in New York City. Over the past few decades, not only has the public security level not been improved, but it has actually declined. As for the guy who came out late at night, Spider-Man Noir didn't think it was likely that he was a good person. But in just this short period of time, Spider-Man Noir actually found himself following Wayne for several miles. This kind of speed is simply not something a normal human can run at. Now, Spider-Man Noir is even more convinced that this guy must be a bad guy. There's just no substantial evidence. Wayne's breathing was steady and he really enjoyed the running process. At the same time, he was also paying attention to the spider following him. As a detective, Spider-Man Noir's stealth skills are really good, and combined with the color of his clothes, it is simply seamless. But what can be said is that Wayne himself is a cheater. Not to mention there's a real Thomas Wayne in his head. Wayne didn't know that the Spider-Man noir was determined to follow him. He just thought that this guy was monitoring anything suspicious around him. Just running on my own. But the next moment, a black and white shadow suddenly flashed on the Spider-Man noir that had just shot out the spider silk and was about to swing in front of Wayne. He split into several people at that moment. The severe pain made him unable to control himself and he fell down. Boom! Even if Wayne wanted to pretend he didn't hear the sound, it was impossible. "Hello, are you okay?" Wayne turned back and shouted towards the dark alley. "Do you need help?" Wayne walked cautiously into the alley. It wasn't until Wayne walked in front of the Spider-Man noir that the Spider-Man noir recovered. "It's okay. I'm fine." Spider-Man noir somersaulted up from the ground, brushed off the dust that had collected on him when he fell, and even raised the brim of his hat with considerable confidence. You are Spider-Man. Didn't they say you were dead?" Wayne was surprised, even a little scared. "And what are you wearing now?" While speaking, he took a few steps back. It was obvious that he was a little scared of seeing a guy who he didn't know whether he was a human or a ghost. The acting skills displayed by Wayne this time are definitely worthy of an Oscar. End of this chapter. Chapter 16: The Insomniac Spider-Man Noir. Wayne's acting skills were indeed good, but this did not dispel Spider-Man Noir doubts. It is impossible for an ordinary person to run late at night, let alone have the courage to come to this place, which is obviously a very convenient place to commit murder after the noise. But now the first thing Spider-Man Noir has to solve is how to conceal his identity. The Spider-Man of this world is dead, and the mourning ceremony is carried out in full view of everyone. If it's not handled properly, Spider-Man might really be accused of deceiving the public. "Oh no, I'm just a huge Spider-Man fan who just put some of my own spin on his costume." You have to think, there's no way Spider-Man could fall off a wall, right? "Sir, why do you come out for a run so late at night?" After saying those two sentences, Spider-Man Noir changed the subject and began to take the initiative. He felt that there was absolutely no problem with this question. "I have insomnia. I've been under too much pressure recently. I'm going to see if running can help me sleep better." Wayne rubbed his eyebrows, looking uncomfortable. "Isn't it said that people sleep well when they are tired? I don't want to take sleeping pills. I keep them at home. I am always afraid that one day I will be too depressed and commit suicide." Wayne's tone was filled with helplessness and anxiety about insomnia. Spider-Man Noir didn't know how to start. At that time, there were not many people who could only rely on sleeping pills to sleep. At this point in time, he always feels that although technology has become more advanced, people are becoming more tired. Spider-Man Noir now reluctantly let down his guard against Wayne, took a step forward, and wanted to put his hand on Wayne's shoulder. "It's just that this posture is a bit strange. It always feels a bit awkward for a 1.8-meter tall man to put his hand on Wayne, who is 1.9-meter tall." But Spider-Man Noir is not just here to comfort Wayne. He wanted to see if this person was wary of him, and whether he would resist his abrupt behavior. An anxious, insomniac person will definitely be wary of a stranger invading his body space. Spider-Man Noir did feel Wayne's resistance, but it only lasted for a short while. Wayne did show resistance, and Spider-Man Noir couldn't continue, so he immediately let go of his hand and apologized. "I'm sorry, I always like to talk to others like this." Spider-Man Noir pressed his hat and said apologetically, "It's okay." Wayne's expression was obviously a little stiff when he said this. "I wish you a good sleep in the future." Spider-Man Noir left this sentence and walked out of the alley first. Even when he was walking out, part of his attention was on Wayne. He wanted to see how this person would react to his behavior. But everything Wayne did was quite consistent with all the good things about Spider-Man Noir. All these signs finally allowed Spider-Man Noir to conclude that this guy was just a man suffering from insomnia and went out for a night run without regard for his life. It seems that insomnia is more terrifying than losing one's life. Spider-Man Noir has never experienced what insomnia is. But now seeing Wayne's condition, he really felt that insomnia was a very scary thing. If possible, he doesn't want to suffer from insomnia for the rest of his life. When Wayne walked out, there was no trace of the Spider-Man Noir outside, but he still looked horrified because the Spider-Man Noir disappeared. Then he ran towards the direction he came from. Not far away on the building, Spider-Man Noir saw this scene and left with peace of mind. What a cautious guy. As Wayne ran back to his home, he couldn't help but admire Spider-Man Noir's prudence. But think about New York at that time. Spider-Man Noir, as a private detective, was able to live safely not only because of his superpowers, but also because of his caution. Otherwise, given the situation in New York at the time, he would have died if he had not been careful. Even private detectives in New York today are not sure whether they will die mysteriously one day. But the current situation has indeed intensified Wayne's desire to deal with Kingpin. "Whenever I go out for a run at night, I get stared at, which is really unbearable." On the other side, after Spider-Man Noir went back, Penny Parker, who was also Spider-Man, had not yet fallen asleep and was quietly waiting for Spider-Man Noir to come back. What happened? Little Penny was obviously a little worried that something might happen to this guy whom she had just known for a short time in this completely unfamiliar world. If one Spider-Man dies, then a second one can die. No matter who it was, Penny didn't want anyone to have any problems again. A guy who came out for a run because of insomnia, hoping to tire himself out enough to fall asleep. To little Penny, Spider-Man Noir was naturally not as hypocritical as he was with Wayne before. He spoke to Penny quite sincerely. Little Penny was relieved when she heard the news. Sure enough, insomnia is always a painful thing. Penny is quite knowledgeable about insomnia. The world she came from was already so developed, but there was still no way to solve the problem of insomnia. Sometimes the only way is to use drugs to force people to sleep. Rich people use sleeping cabins to relieve fatigue when they suffer from insomnia. However, that sleeping cabin is something that many people cannot even afford even with their wealth in several lifetimes. Okay, go to bed. Child, you still need to get a good sleep. Spider-Man Noir pushed little Penny and told her to go back to bed quickly. You should go to bed early too. Little Penny was still a little scared. Spider-Man Noir didn't explain the situation to them, so she went out again to investigate. It would be really worrying. I know. Spider-Man Noir nodded. Lie on the sofa. He yawned to indicate that he was very sleepy. Little Penny looked at the Spider-Man Noir and left with a smile. After all, she was very sleepy, so she should fall asleep soon. But after Penny left, Spider-Man Noir changed his tired look and opened his big white eyes wide. He always felt that there was something he had missed during his meeting with Wayne today. And it is quite critical. What is it? Spider-Man Noir looked at the ceiling with a warm atmosphere and fell into deep thought. Suddenly, he found that he seemed to have been dragged into the horrible problem of insomnia by that person. I quickly closed my eyes and kept telling myself to go to sleep. But the problem was, no matter how much he told himself that it was time to go to bed, he just didn't feel sleepy. This feeling is really uncomfortable. Wayne had no idea that he had actually succeeded in causing Spider-Man, who had an excellent sleep quality, to lose sleep. He is now stretching well at home. Make sure that your flexibility does not decrease after exercise. Otherwise, some movements during combat would be quite strenuous. If there is any mistake, it may put him in danger. End of this chapter. Chapter 17 The Invasion of Bats. Extra. In a small coffee shop in Brooklyn, there was a man sitting there who attracted a lot of attention. The man was just sitting by the window. It actually made their coffee shop, which didn't have a lot of customer traffic, become quite crowded. The black suit, the gray Empire collar shirt, and the black tie with a dark pattern made the man's every move exude an aristocratic temperament that is not often seen in America. The suit, which is also relatively slim-fitting, brings out his muscular figure perfectly. But what was somewhat inconsistent with his muscular body was his slightly melancholy face. This is not inconsistent, but rather interweaves a different flavor. When Wayne put on this outfit and walked out of the house today, he will no longer be the Dark Knight walking in the darkness. Instead, it is Bruce Wayne who is wandering around in social situations. Because I was a little curious before, why he always called himself Wayne instead of Bruce. Wayne's answer was simple, that is, the name Bruce represents too many things, and he is not sure whether he can bear it. Just like he never stated that he was Batman. The meaning that thing represents is too heavy. You have become him. Everything about him has completely become a part of you. How can it be heavy or not? Thomas's words completely awakened Wayne. He has become the Bruce Wayne of this universe. So what is he still worried about? Bruce holds a copy of the Daily Bugle with a news report about Spider-Man's death. It looks like Bruce has been reading the news carefully. But in fact, Bruce's eyes were always on the house opposite him. Kingpin's house. Handsome guy, do you want to get to know me? A long-haired woman sat down opposite Bruce quite confidently. To be honest, this woman is really good-looking, with long black hair and a healthy figure. From any perspective, she can be a very good partner. If he wasn't facing Bruce, we can be sure that 8 out of 10 men would be fascinated by her approach. Putting down the newspaper in his hand, Bruce put it neatly aside. Bruce said to the woman with a smile, I'm sorry, miss, but I don't like your type. The woman wanted to say something else, but Bruce had already put a dollar bill under the coffee cup. I'm sorry, I still have things to do. Nice to meet you. After saying this, Bruce turned and walked out of the coffee shop. Although the woman was somewhat unhappy about Bruce's rejection of her, she put aside this slight unhappiness when she saw Bruce's graceful and polite actions. Men feel happy when they see a beautiful woman, and women also feel happy when they see a handsome man. Bruce is obviously a handsome guy in the popular sense, and the kind of handsome guy who is extremely attractive. Even though Bruce had walked out, the woman was still unwilling to take her eyes off him. The melancholy and aristocratic feeling is so attractive that one can't take their eyes off it. It must be very pleasant to live with a man like this, the woman murmured to herself. If those guys who had worked with Bruce Wayne knew what she said, they would definitely roll their eyes at her. When Bruce, dressed in noble style, came to Kingpin's house, the 2 bodyguards looked at Bruce with extreme vigilance. Sorry, sir, Mr. Fisk is not at home today. If there is anything you need, I can help pass it on. A bodyguard walked up to Bruce in advance, stood in front of Bruce, and put his hand on Bruce's shoulder. It has to be said that even the bodyguards that Jean Bing found for himself are big guys over 1.9 meters tall and look extremely intimidating. Standing in front of Bruce, he was not at a disadvantage at all. Oh, that's really bad luck. I finally made an appointment for today, but I didn't expect that Mr. Fisk would have something to do.
Bruce looked annoyed when he said this, but his peripheral vision had already noticed the position of the pistols on the waists of the two bodyguards.
Then you'll have to make another appointment. The bodyguard has seen this kind of thing many times. He just maintained his cold attitude. Okay, thank you. Bruce also placed his hand on the bodyguard's shoulder, but gently moved it towards his neck. The bodyguard suddenly felt weak all over. His eyes rolled back and he fell towards Bruce. Hey, what's wrong with you, brother? Are you okay? Bruce supported the bodyguard with great concern. When the other bodyguard saw this scene, he did not rush over, but stood there cautiously with his hands on his waist. He had no way of confirming whether Bruce had done anything. After all, there was physical contact between the two of them.
And he knew very well that in this world there were many ways to make a person unconscious with just the slightest contact.
What if Bruce had used this method to make his colleague faint? Please put my colleague down. Thank you for your cooperation.
The bodyguard was indeed very conscientious. He stretched out his hand and motioned Bruce to put his colleague down on the ground.
But the other hand is always ready to draw the gun. Okay, no problem. You don't need to be nervous.
I don't want you to shoot me because of my mistake.
Bruce looked like an ordinary person who encountered an accident.
Watch me, I'm going to let him go.
Even when Bruce was knocking down the bodyguard, he was explaining the situation to another person. Slowly put the unconscious bodyguard on the ground. The other bodyguard always felt that Bruce's behavior was a little strange, but he didn't know what was wrong.
Bruce suddenly lifted the hem of the unconscious bodyguard's suit, and an anesthetic needle popped out of his hand and hit the other bodyguard's neck.
The bodyguard fell down slowly, holding his neck with a look of shock.
Even before he fell into a coma, he kept his hands on his waist, and it was obvious that he had always been wary of Bruce.
However, no matter how cunning the fox is, it cannot beat a good hunter. Bruce dragged the unconscious bodyguard up quite easily and walked towards Kingpin's door. Put the two bodyguards aside. Bruce took off the anesthetic needle he had thrown away. Look at this incredibly small anesthetic artifact. Bruce can only say that it is worthy of being Batman's product, simple and efficient. However, it must be said that Wilson Fisk was really confident in the security of his home.
Even though he had left, he did not even lock the door.
Just give it a gentle push. The home of the New York Underground King has already opened its doors to Bruce. And this is where the bat sneaks in. End of this chapter. Chapter 18 The Man Behind Kingpin. Bruce walked quite naturally to the private elevator built by Kingpin. But this thing was hidden quite perfectly by Kingpin, if Bruce had not scanned the house thoroughly before. It's really not necessarily possible to find it.
Nice painting. Hanging there, covering everything, was an oil painting of a battle between gods and demons, but the painting was so huge that it could perfectly cover everything.
Next to this painting is a bust of Copernicus. Looking at the bust there, Bruce simply used both hands to barely bend it to the other end. As the oil painting rose, a sci-fi elevator door slowly opened. There is no special biometric technology, only a single switch at the door. But according to Wayne's inference, it is not easy for ordinary people to bend the bust.
After all, the guy who designed this thing is a guy who can lift a car with his bare hands. The fact that Bruce was able to move that thing shows that his physical fitness is pretty good.
As soon as I walked in, the elevator door closed. There is nothing inside except an up button. As a feeling of weightlessness came over him, Bruce could feel that the elevator was falling too fast. Even Bruce had some tinnitus. As expected, it is not surprising that he has such physical fitness as the guy who has been in a love-hate relationship with Spider-Man. When Kingpin Underground Space was revealed in front of Bruce had to admire the man who was able to create such a large space under Brooklyn, New York. But Bruce doesn't think this place is that good. In any case, Bruce would not choose this place as his residence, unless it is used as a temporary base. Otherwise, the best place for Bruce would be something like Wayne Manor, which has a natural bat cave. Wilson Fisk doesn't put too much here. A few old-fashioned keypad phones, a few notepads, a few folders, and piles of training equipment. All of this has fully demonstrated Wilson Fisk's distrust of technological products. Bruce was quite calm about all of this. How could someone like Wilson Fisk easily place some electronic devices in his secret lair that could be easily hacked? Besides, according to Bruce's impression, basically all Spider-Men are tech whizzes, and in this universe Spider-Man is even more of a tech genius. Pick up a notebook. As Bruce flipped through the pages, he could already see many familiar names. Only after seeing these things did Bruce understand why Wilson Fisk in this world could do this. It can even be said that it has almost ruled New York City. Basically, every prominent figure in New York has appeared in this notebook. Mayor of New York City. Commissioner of the New York City Police Department. New York City City Councilman. Putting down the notebook that would scare all the top executives in New York, Bruce opened the notebook next to it.
And what is recorded there is another group of people.
The bosses of the New York underworld also appeared in Wilson Fisk notebook. The bosses' weaknesses and their secret bases. Even the locations of the factories where they made profits were thoroughly recorded in this notebook. If one day Wilson Fisk wanted to turn the table over and stop playing, these things alone would be enough to turn the entire New York City upside down.
And Bruce has reason to believe that since Kingpin was able to obtain so much evidence, it must be more than just the things on the notebook.
Putting down the notebook, Bruce didn't plan to explore further.
These things were indeed very useful, and he would take them away when the time came, but it was not the right time yet, since the things recorded in the notes obviously have nothing to do with money. So what kind of surprise is waiting for you in the folder on the other side? What was inside the folder was indeed a surprise for Bruce. There were a large number of bearer bonds and Kingpin various accounts. Everything has already made one thing clear. Bruce had found what he needed. But in order to avoid missing anything, Bruce opened all the other folders. There were still 2 folders containing a large number of unknown bonds, but the contents of one of the folders surprised Bruce a little. S.H.I.E.L.D. That's right. In that folder was a list of S.H.I.E.L.D. agents in New York. It can be said to be quite detailed. The agent's rank, position, and specific address. It even says what the agent likes to eat, whether it's hamburgers or hot dogs, and it's all marked on it. It's all clear. Logically speaking, the list of S.H.I.E.L.D. agents is fairly confidential anyway. With such a terrifying information-gathering ability, Bruce doesn't believe that Kingpin can get this thing. The fact that this thing can appear in Kingpin hands already explains a lot of problems. Perhaps Kingpin's ability to become the King of New York may be related to the person who gave him this information. With such confidential documents in hand, it would be easy to deal with several high-ranking officials in New York City. It doesn't require much effort. Bruce looked up suddenly. If it was true, he was definitely in danger now. Supporting Kingpin so much, with this guy's style, he will definitely not let Kingpin develop freely so easily. There are so many things they want. Maybe Kingpin has been living under their surveillance. All he needed to do was to evacuate from here. I once thought it was a simple matter, but it turned out to be like this. After packing up the things he needed, he immediately started looking for another way out. How could a man like Kingpin only give himself a way to escape? Sure enough, there was a small problem in Bruce's observation. Just as Bruce was about to leave, there was movement in the elevator behind him.
You really come as soon as I said.
Wayne immediately pulled out a portable bat mask from his suit and covered his face. Then it disappeared into darkness. When the elevator opened, a steady red laser was already scanning the surroundings. The well-trained team advanced slowly, fully armed. They were completely black, with no indication of what organization they belonged to. Find the person out. End of this chapter. Chapter 19. Within 7 steps, fast and accurate. Following a man's order, the surrounding team members consciously began their search. They searched in pairs, trying to prevent anyone from replacing the one who was left alone. Even the person who gave the order earlier had another person with him. Their discipline and meticulousness in their actions fully demonstrate how professional the organization that trained them is. Bruce narrowed his eyes at the guys. There really were no markings on them, but to Bruce it was obvious where they came from. Apart from Hydra, who else could do such a thing right on S.H.I.E.L.D.'s doorstep? I just don't know what the relationship is between Hydra in this world and S.H.I.E.L.D. It can't be that there is Hydra in S.H.I.E.L.D., but there is no S.H.I.E.L.D. in Hydra. That would be so embarrassing. Likewise, Bruce was assessing how long it would take him to finish them off. The Hydra agents were indeed powerful, but in Bruce's eyes, they were not much of a threat. 2 Hydra agents were searching towards Bruce from the left and right. It can be seen that these 2 guys are quite nervous. One of them can instantly deal with the 2 bodyguards they arranged for Kingpin at the door. He is definitely not a petty thief. From the very beginning, they had to find the guy who entered Kingpin's house as a guy with superpowers. And it's not superheroes that come to mind. Not many superheroes would go straight into someone else's home and perform their moves like this. So their targets are all supervillains. But the problem is that none of the supervillains they were able to monitor would come out to cause trouble at this time. Everyone knows that New York City is now the Kingpin stage, not to mention that Spider-Man is now dead, and few people will come back to solve this matter. Although the so-called Spider-Man appeared in Hell's Kitchen before, no one thought it was real. It will just feel like a poor imitator. After all, according to those guys who later fought with the so-called Spider-Man, that guy looked like a middle-aged and fat man. And everyone knows that Spider-Man will never gain weight in middle age. How could Spider-Man, who has so much to do every day, get fat in middle age? So, it could just be a Spider-Man imitator. At most the equipment the guy used did make him look a lot like Spider-Man. There are many folk inventors in this world. Marvel's amateur scientists are really science. It can even be called science fiction. And suddenly, a supercriminal who could easily enter Kingpin's house appeared in their sphere of influence. How could this not make these guys come out to take a closer look? They also need to see whether this guy who suddenly appeared is worth their training. If the situation is right, there would be no problem in upgrading his equipment and the like. They might never imagine in their lifetime that the person who entered King Byung's house was anything but a so-called supercriminal. In another world he is considered a hero. Even though Bruce doesn't consider himself a hero. The 2 guys coming towards Bruce just stepped into Bruce's attack range when the bat made a move. He instantly appeared in front of an agent. The guy felt as if a devil-like mask suddenly appeared in front of him, and the next moment he felt a heavy blow on the left side of his head. The whole person fell to the ground in an instant. There was no trace of his gradually blurring consciousness and he fainted instantly. Another agent who was his teammate turned around and was ready to shoot the moment Bruce appeared. But there was no sign of Bruce. The only one left was the companion who had fallen to the ground. He had obviously already gotten used to this kind of thing during training, but now this strange situation made his heart filled with fear again.
His vision couldn't stabilize for a moment. His eyes were constantly looking around. Bruce flashed to the agent's side and a powerful kick sent the agent flying into the air. Taking advantage of the moment when the agent was in the air, Bruce had already extended his knee. Crack! Even now, with the sounds of other agents rushing here, there was no way to cover up the crisp sound of breaking. Broke back. This skill, which was once used on Bruce, was given to someone else by Bruce. Ah! There was only a cry of pain and then no more sound. This made the agents coming here stop involuntarily, look at their companions around them, and make sure that they were people they had been with day and night, before they dared to move forward reluctantly. It may sound like a long process for Bruce to do all this, but in fact it only happened in a few seconds. Facing these guys, the fighting power displayed by Bruce was still direct crushing. Group 3-3, control the surrounding situation. The guy who had been giving orders before spoke again. They moved very quickly, and immediately began to pull themselves to the side of their comrades. It's a bit difficult. Bruce watched these guys slowly approaching him. Although he said so, there was no trace of hardship in those eyes. It is still so calm that it's frightening. He flipped his hand and produced two weapons like brass knuckles and held them in his hands. However, the shape on it looks more like a bat with its wings spread. Gently press a button and the bat logo instantly turns red. At this moment, Bruce didn't intend to hide his figure. Bruce took a step forward, and the moment his foot landed on the ground, the elbow from had already knocked an agent away. With such a big commotion, it would be hard for the agents not to notice it. But their reaction speed was obviously not as fast as Bruce's. He closed the distance between himself and the other agent, and an uppercut with a red glow knocked him away. When the fist made contact with the agent's chin, a burning smell began to spread. As experienced agents, the weapons they had used and the torture they had used on their enemies had already made them know the reason for the smell they were smelling. Raising their guns, they knew what the most important thing was. Even though firing at this distance would most likely kill one's own comrades, that would only be a necessary sacrifice for the mission. Moreover, within 7 steps, the gun is fast and accurate. End of this chapter. Chapter 20: The Fear Granted by Bats. Bang! The gun went off. The person who fired the shot was even a famous sharpshooter in their team, but all they heard was the sound of bullets hitting the wall. As for the target that he wanted to hit, he didn't even touch it. Even the person who fired the gun looked at his gun in shock. What he was sure of was that there was absolutely nothing wrong with his gun, and he was aiming at the person when he fired. But why didn't it hit? This question puzzled all the team members, but now was obviously not the time to think about such things. Bruce was clearly not the type of person who would make them think carefully about why they couldn't hit him within 7 steps. Bruce dodged the bullet and disappeared from their sight again. He even extinguished all the light sources in the entire underground space. Today's agents are just blind. When Bruce came out again, the brass knuckles on his fists, which had already burned red, began to fly up and down in their sight. Pulling an agent over, Bruce clamped his hand tightly around the agent's wrist to ensure that he wouldn't make any unnecessary movements. The other hand directly broke the agent's elbow. Ah! The intense pain made the agent scream out in this defenseless situation. Without waiting for orders from their commander, the other agents made their best choices. As long as they don't want to become like their previous colleagues, everyone will make this choice. Bang, bang, bang! The continuous sound of gunfire illuminated the surroundings brightly. Obviously, what spewed out from the muzzle was not only the bullets, but also the fear of those agents. In this shooting, the agent who had his arm broken by Bruce and shouted out was unsurprisingly turned into a sieve. In other words, the forensic doctor would only be able to find some human tissue of this unfortunate guy from the pile of bullets. The agents did achieve objective results, with one of their agents being turned into a pulp by one of their own. But what about Bruce? At this moment, his suit was not even stained with dust. This environment is too convenient for bats. In Bruce's eyes, these agents are now obviously in a state of fear. They had no way of knowing for sure whether they were dealing with a human or a ghost. If it were a human, how could it be possible for him to dodge their shooting again and again? Only ghosts can do this. If it was a ghost, their special agent team that specialized in handling normal emergencies would obviously be no match for it. They need professional help. What are we fighting? When someone starts to communicate, it means that this guy's psychological defenses are obviously broken. Silence. But the only answer he got was the commander's cold words. He could only suppress his fear. I don't know how long I can hold on. Under fear, their fighting capacity has begun to decline. What was originally a little troublesome for Bruce has now become simple. Who made Bruce not expect that there was the shadow of Hydra behind Kingpin? When I came here, I put on a simple bulletproof vest and a bat mask ready to conceal my identity at any time. But this also reminded Bruce that this is the real world and not everything can be viewed simply according to the situations in the movies. At Spider-Man's funeral, there was no superhero like Captain America. But in this world, all the heroes who have communicated with Spider-Man appeared on the scene. There is no way to fake this. Retreat. The commander didn't intend to continue fighting with Bruce here. Not to mention that they were facing a guy who had no idea what was going on. The double tension, both physical and psychological, was really making him a little overwhelmed. As a commander, he felt that his nerves might collapse at any time. What about the team members who asked earlier?
For them, this was an unspoken fear. All he had to do was bring all his remaining team members to the ground. Unfortunately, Bruce won't give them this opportunity. He had already set his sights on the agent who had asked the question earlier. That guy is on the verge of collapse. Just add a little more force. He will be the breakthrough point for Bruce to defeat the others here. Bruce, wearing a bat mask, appeared in front of the agent at an extremely fast speed. Then it returned to darkness like a ghost. Although it was just a fleeting glimpse, Bruce was certain that the guy must have seen his appearance clearly. Ah! The ferocious bat mask that appeared in front of the agent had already turned into a green-faced, fang-toothed demon in the agent's own imagination. He can no longer bear this pressure. Ignoring the orders from his commander, he raised his gun and fired wildly at the space in front of him. The sound of gunfire echoed in every corner of this dark space. Amid the flashes of gunfire, Bruce's figure appeared again. The originally neat formation had become somewhat chaotic as the agent lost control. And this is Bruce's best opportunity. In the eyes of the agent, it was clear that every shot he fired was directed towards the elusive figure. But there is no effect. Gleek, gleek, gleek. After the firepower was unleashed, the sound of empty chambers continued to be heard. At the same time, the wailing of teammates beside him could be heard. Bruce's punch had left an indelible mark on his body for life. The bats have already set their sights on them. The mentally broken agent sat down on the ground, without the ability to stand up again. He just watched his teammates being knocked to the ground one after another by the devil in a suit. In the end, he was left with the same fist. The burning bat symbol left the same mark on his shoulder blade. When Hydra agents came to support, all they saw were agents knocked to the ground. There is also an unusually clear bat logo. All these performances made Crossbones, who came here, look solemn. None of them are fatal, but they can make people faint in the shortest time, which is quite tricky. Crossbones came to this conclusion after just examining the injuries of an agent. However, it seems that our previous judgment was wrong. That guy might not be a supercriminal, but more like a superhero. Only superheroes would leave them alive. Crossbones clapped his hands and looked at the other side where the notepads and folders were originally placed. We don't have any agents who failed missions and survived. After Crossbones said this, the agents around him had already performed Hydra's unique etiquette towards him. The next moment, they had already raised their guns at their former comrades. Boom! End of this chapter. Chapter 21 The Excitement of the Spider. It's been taken care of, but I couldn't get to the research institute in time. When Crossbones came out, he was already talking to his boss. His first assignment was to a private technology park in the Hudson Valley. Oakmax's research site. Even Hydra was tempted by what Kingpin did there. Besides, some of the scientific researchers there are from Hydra. As a result, the place was invaded by two guys who looked like Spider-Man. They also took away the computer of their chief scientist. The development of this matter was far beyond their expectations. When Kingpin made that thing before, Hydra knew that he would most likely destroy Brooklyn directly. But what does it have to do with them? They just want the collider that Kingpin built. A machine that can bring people from other universes to their universe is indeed quite attractive to Hydra. As long as they modify it properly, they will be able to bring other things back through this thing. Everything will be solved. But in order to maintain a good relationship between themselves and Jean Bing, when they received the spy's report that there was a problem with Jean Bing's residence, they had already arranged a team to investigate. In the end, all we got was the loss of troops and generals. It also meant that they had no time to support Oakmax and capture the two Spider-Men. All this is because of the masked freak who showed up here at an inopportune time. Crossbones' eyes were filled with hatred for the Bat Monster. I think it might be a guy imitating Batman. At this time, the sound of discussion on the side attracted Crossbones' attention. What's the meaning? Seeing their captain approaching them, the two soldiers immediately stood up straight. I just don't know what my captain is talking about. I mean, what's going on with Batman? Crossbones didn't have much patience, and the fact that he could speak so calmly now was already a sign of his good temper. We found this bat logo on almost all of our team members. Although it's a little distorted, I still have some impression of it. Batman, DC Comics' leading comic character, is such a symbol. So, I think it's possible that this was done by a Batman fanatic. After saying these words, the team members looked at their captain cautiously, fearing that they might have said something wrong. What's his weakness? Crossbones asked the question directly. He is just an ordinary person. He doesn't have any superpowers. The only thing he can say is that he has a smart brain and an extraordinary reaction speed. If you get hit by a bullet, you'll still die. The team members actually don't like bats very much. He always felt that bats were too dark. It doesn't suit him very well. Those words were enough for Crossbones. An ordinary person who is going to die is much easier to deal with than those masked freaks. Although judging from the scene, that guy was not a simple person, but at least he was not a freak with superpowers. In the coffee shop in the distance, Bruce sat there again, but this time he was no longer holding a newspaper in his hand. Instead, it was a glass of milk. Although Thomas in my mind has been saying that this milk is not very good, at most it is just barely edible. Bruce turned a deaf ear to this person's complaint. While drinking the milk in his hand, He watched the Chevrolet Suburban evacuating from the direction of Jean Bing. In which world would agents always love this full-size SUV? It has become standard equipment for these agents. The American people will choose to avoid such full-size SUVs if they are not sure whether the people sitting in the SUV are ordinary people or government agents. After the last Subaru left, Bruce stood up and placed a Franklin under the milk cup. Bruce walked out looking like a rich kid with nothing to do. When Bruce meets a pretty girl, he will give her a wink that makes people's heart beat faster. Bruce's behavior would often make the girl extremely excited, but because the playboy walked so fast, even if the girl wanted to approach him, she would eventually return empty-handed. Compared to Bruce's current casual and comfortable state, the three Spider-Men who had just escaped from Oakmax were sitting exhausted on the bus back to the city. Whether it was Peter Parker or Miles, they were all surprised when they saw the Spider-Man who saved them. After all, they had never seen a female Spider-Man before. Especially when the female Spider-Man's name is Gwen Stacy. Looking at the obviously damaged key in her hand, Gwen asked Miles calmly, "Did he break it?" Yes, he felt very embarrassed too. Perhaps it was the pride and self-esteem of an adolescent boy in front of the girl he liked that prevented him from telling the truth about the damaged USB flash drive. He blamed the damaged USB drive on Peter Parker who was lying behind him. But it is obvious that this middle-aged Spider-Man is not willing to do anything to destroy the emotional issues between the two children. He just smiled slightly after hearing what Miles said. Miles may also feel that what he said is not very good. He lowered his voice quietly and spoke again to Gwen. "So just pretend nothing happened, okay?" As Gwen has been enforcing justice for several years, how could she not see through Miles's tricks? However, she did not choose to expose Miles directly. Now there are more important things for them. Gwen laughed, and even though that smile was quite happy, one could still feel the loneliness in it. "I know where I can get a new one made so he won't break it this time." Gwen's eyes were relaxed and indifferent, but Miles did not have the same relaxed attitude as Gwen. "I'm sorry about your friend." Miles didn't want to continue talking about this matter, so he changed the subject and expressed his regret for what Gwen had said before. "Thank you, Miles." Gwen gave a relatively relaxed smile. In her world, Peter Parker's death has always been an indelible scar in her heart. "I know how to answer that bat. I finally know how to answer that bat." Suddenly, Peter Parker, who was lying in the back, suddenly jumped up. He spoke to the other two people with a look of surprise. "Bat." Gwen obviously didn't quite understand what the middle-aged Spider-Man meant. Gwen turned her gaze to Miles, and sure enough, he also looked confused. Miles knew about the bat, but what he didn't know was what this Spider-Man wanted answered. "A guy who can help us all get out of here." Peter Parker smiled at Gwen confidently. End of this chapter. Chapter 22: A Visit from Spider-Man Noir. The bat mentioned by Peter Parker has just returned to Queens. The number of people who came to mourn the dead Spider-Man has not decreased at all since morning. There were people standing even in front of his house. "Hey, brother, if you also want to commemorate Spider-Man, I suggest you line up at the back." The man looked at Bruce who was about to cut in line and pushed Bruce with dissatisfaction. However, this push not only failed to move Bruce, but instead caused Bruce to grab him and pin him to the ground. The movements were smooth and graceful. If the man had not been pinned to the ground in an instant, some people might have thought that Bruce had demonstrated an extremely high-end dancing skill. The people in the queues in front and behind turned away from Bruce and the man because of this little incident. "First of all, I need to go home, and you are standing in front of my door. Also, don't touch other people's clothes easily." After saying this, Bruce pulled the man up, then pulled his arm and said another sentence to the man. "It may hurt a little, just bear with it." The man hadn't yet realized what Bruce meant by that. The next moment, Bruce twisted and pushed, and reconnected the man's arm that was dislocated by his own grappling. Obviously, the man's brain nerves reacted at this time, and the intense pain swept over him. After brushing off the dust on the man's body, Bruce gave him an extremely kind smile. Then he walked towards his house. This scene made the little girls queuing behind extremely excited. A man who was so polite and had powerful martial arts skills was simply the standard mate candidate in their minds. As for what the use of having such fighting ability is in a world like America where basically everyone can get a gun, they don't care. As long as you are handsome and strong enough, that's enough. It's better to have money. Bruce fits the first two perfectly. As for whether Bruce met the last requirement, some knowledgeable guys could already see that the suit Bruce was wearing, although it was mass-produced by Gucci, was not something that ordinary people could handle. The only thing that makes people a little suspicious is that the place where Bruce lives now is indeed not very good. But none of this is a problem. The little commotion here naturally attracted the attention of May Parker, who was receiving those Spider-Man fans. However, all this did not cause any waves to the knowledgeable Aunt May, who continued to receive every fan who came here quite calmly. It is not uncommon for people in America to start shooting at each other over minor frictions. A little grappling move is nothing. But this reminded May that it was time to stop these fans' spontaneous actions. It's almost time to get off work. The neighbors around here also have to go home and have a good rest. If they continue to stay here, they will only disrupt the normal lives of the people around them. I appreciate your concern, but it's already very late. You should go home and have some rest. May Parker waved to the fans behind her, indicating that she would no longer receive them. As fans of Spider-Man, They naturally know how to be considerate of Spider-Man's aunt. Maybe this aunt is receiving these uninvited fans from morning to night. The fan who was about to present a souvenir smiled at May Parker, and then shouted loudly to the back. Let's stop here today. We'll come back tomorrow. Just remember to arrive early. I'm very tired. I hope you can understand. That guy's voice is just like his body size, very loud and deep. Although the fans at the back were a little resentful after waiting in line for a long time, they were still very obedient and slowly dispersed. Even if you just came to Bruce after taking a shower at home, you can't help but admire this scene. Worthy of being a fan of that little spider. So understanding and so friendly. It wasn't just May Parker who saw that scene, but also Spider-Man Noir, who had been worried about May Parker getting into trouble. Such a concise and powerful counterattack, and such a neat bone-setting action. All of this makes Bruce a mysterious figure in the eyes of Spider-Man Noir. What is the purpose of a man who dares to go out for a run late at night, fight back, and act extremely efficiently living in such a backward community? Spider-Man Noir isn't so sure. No matter from which perspective, he had to eliminate the risk of that man on behalf of the deceased Spider-Man. Not just for Aunt May. It is also to prevent a more crazy supercriminal from appearing in New York in the future. I'm going to go out for a while. Spider-Man Noir said to Penny, who was enjoying cookies. Although Penny is very young, she can still feel that something is wrong with Spider-Man Noir's current condition. Are you okay? Putting down the cookies in her hand, Penny spoke to Spider-Man Noir very seriously. I'm just going out to check the situation. After leaving these words, the Spider-Man Noir disappeared from Penny's sight. Penny was a little worried that Spider-Man Noir might encounter something he couldn't solve this time when he went out. But Spider-Man Noir is Spider-Man after all, and Penny believes that he can solve most problems. Bruce, who was exercising at home at the moment, keenly noticed that someone had landed in his backyard. After purchasing the house, Bruce used his own equipment to prepare a complete surveillance network in the backyard. It seems to be used now. Being able to avoid all the defenses outside so easily, it is obvious that in this small community, only Spider-Man can do this. Bruce stopped his exercise and took a white towel from the side to wipe his sweat. He opened the back door of his house directly. Standing there was a black and white Spider-Man. You are not an insomniac. Spider-Man Noir said this the first time he saw Bruce. After all, this is what Bruce said when he faced him. You're not a so-called Spider-Man fan either, are you? Wiping the sweat off his face, Bruce didn't care at all what Shadow Spider said. He turned around and walked into his house. The Spider-Man Noir was left with a completely open back. Would you like to come in and sit down? Spider-Man Noir had no idea what kind of person Bruce was, but he still walked in out of a sense of responsibility. At least he wanted to find out whether this guy was harmful to other people. Looking at the fitness equipment scattered on the ground, Spider-Man Noir can now be sure that this person does not have any superpowers. Other things need further observation. But he didn't know how long he could stay in this world. End of this chapter. Chapter 23. The Batlight turns on. Spider-Man Noir had just sat down. Bruce has already started talking. How long can you stay in this world? Bruce pushed a glass of water in front of Spider-Man Noir. The hand of the Spider-Man Noir that was originally intended to catch the water just hovered in mid-air. He opened his eyes wide and looked at the person in front of him in disbelief. Finally he put his hand down, but did not take Bruce's glass of water. He now had no way of figuring out what kind of guy this was. Obviously he doesn't have any superpowers. But he seemed to know a lot of things were happening. Bruce just folded his arms, leaned against the wall and looked at the black and white Spider-Man quietly. It seems that you know much more than I do. Spider-Man Noir, who was sitting on the sofa and adjusting the brim of his hat, was so out of tune with this colorful world. Bruce did not comment on what Spider-Man Noir said. The Spider-Man of this world is dead, and this is something everyone knows, but now including you, I have met two Spider-Men. No matter how slow I am, I know this situation is impossible. Especially when one of the two Spider-Men is drawn in a completely different style from this world. He looked down at his attire, then looked at the world around him. Spider-Man Noir naturally understood what Bruce meant by that. Although the world he sees is always in black and white, it does not prevent him from knowing how special he is in this world. Just like the little cube he had always been curious about. He couldn't tell the colors of this world apart. So you are not Kingpin's man? Spider-Man Noir turned around and asked Bruce. Are you a criminal? Bruce did not directly answer Spider-Man Noir's question. Anyway, another question was raised and thrown to this Spider-Man. Bruce's question made Spider-Man Noir suddenly laugh. I like you. This time Spider-Man Noir picked up the glass of water that Bruce had handed him before. I like women. But it was obvious that Bruce didn't intend to follow up on what he said. Spider-Man Noir was stunned for a moment, but then he understood what Bruce meant. I hate the fact that you have absolutely no sense of humor. You don't seem to be from our world, nor do you seem to be from this world. He lifted his mask slightly. Spider-Man Noir drank the water Bruce poured for him in one gulp. Okay, I'm leaving now. Putting down the cup and adjusting his mask, Spider-Man Noir did not intend to stay here any longer. In his opinion, the man in front of him has been completely classified as the kind of person who will not bring harm to anyone. Of course, if Bruce knew the classification that Spider-Man Noir gave him, he would probably disagree. Bruce himself had no idea how many people had been hospitalized in just the first few days of this world. What's more, those people are likely to be disabled for life, and may even have to lie in bed and become a vegetable for the rest of their lives. If possible, I'd like to see if we can become friends. Spider-Man Noir looked back at Bruce as he walked away. Bruce didn't answer. Spider-Man Noir didn't feel any loss. He shot out spider silk from his wrist and left. Bruce quietly closed his door and resumed his training plan. Compared to the previous middle-aged Spider-Man with red and blue colors and a belly, Bruce has a better impression of this Spider-Man Noir. Maybe it's because they're both pretty good detectives. Or maybe because there are fewer Spider-Man Noir than there are Peter Benjamin Parker. But only sometimes. Some people really can't just think straight. Bruce, who was just about to pick up his training plan again, saw an extremely familiar sign appear in the sky that was beginning to darken in the distance. In this world, bat lanterns actually appeared. After wiping his hands, Bruce already knew who had done this. Who else could it be other than Spider-Man, who was driven away by his few questions before? I miss it a little bit. Thomas used Bruce's eyes to see the bat lights in the sky. Here comes the trouble. Bruce knew very well that the guy definitely didn't come to him just to answer his question. It is very likely that they received some important information from Ockmax or encountered some major setbacks. Are you going? Thomas felt that Bruce shouldn't go there now. He had nothing but the equipment he brought with him, no logistical support, and no one to provide him with off-field help. It is obviously not a wise move to go to a battlefield full of super-powered people in this attitude. Turning and walking towards the bathroom, Bruce responded to the Batman in his mind. My name is Bruce now, but my identity is Batman. How can Batman not go over when someone else has the bat light on? Thomas didn't seem surprised at Bruce's choice. It would be better to say that this is the choice that all Batmans will make when they see the Batlight. On the other side, Gwen and Miles were really confused by what Peter Parker did. Are you sure he will come over like this? I think my method is more reliable. Let's find a place first, repair the key, and then deal with all this. Gwen felt that what Peter Parker did was simply a fantasy. How could someone come to help them by turning on the Batlight? How could this kind of plot, which only appears in comic books, happen in the real world? Although the plot of them traveling to another world is quite comic book-like. But at least there is scientific basis for this. But Batman doesn't exist in their universe. Believe me, he will come, as long as he is still a die-hard fan of Batman. Peter Parker spoke to Gwen confidently. Gwen could only nod in agreement. This female Spider-Man obviously doesn't believe that there is such a Batman in this world. There really is a Batman. I've seen him when I was working with this Peter. He was indeed dressed as Batman. Miles quickly explained to Gwen what he had seen, even though the Bat at that time didn't seem to have any good feelings towards him. But how could he possibly tell Gwen about this? Here he comes, here he comes. Suddenly Peter Parker changed his previous anxious look. Lien waved at Gwen and Miles. When Gwen and Miles came over, they found a figure already standing on the building opposite them. Wow! Only after seeing Bruce appear in person did the female Spider-Man believe that there really was a Batman in this world. Everything that Peter Parker said before is true. End of this chapter. Chapter 24, Peter's Madness. There really is a Batman. Gwen looked at the bat that appeared in front of her, obviously a little surprised. This feeling was really new to her. This character only existed in comic books, but now he appeared in front of me. There's always a feeling of dislocation. It's a good thing you could think of this way to find me. Bruce didn't even bother to look at Gwen and Miles. He started talking to Peter Parker as soon as he arrived. After all, you are a fanatical fan of Batman. I think this method will definitely help me find you. Peter Parker spread his hands nonchalantly, then cut off the power of the Batlight next to him. With one jump he was already beside Bruce. Peter Parker landed lightly and put his arm around Bruce's shoulder in a very familiar manner. Seeing that Peter Parker had already jumped over, how could Gwen fall behind? She jumped lightly and landed next to Batman. It's just a pity for Miles, who just gained the ability of a spider. It has not been fully discovered yet, and he finds it difficult to even do the most basic thing of sticking to the wall. Even though he had become skilled at using spider silk during the chase with Oak Marks, the problem was that the situation there was different from the current one. It was really difficult for him to cross the gap between two tall buildings. Miles looked at Gwen, who had already stood there, patted his cheek, and took 2 steps back. You can do it, you can do it, you can do it. Miles cheered himself up and sprinted faster. Finally, when he reached the edge of the building and was about to jump up, he stepped on his loose shoelaces. The jump was quite successful, but it was obvious that he had stepped on his shoelaces and was weak afterwards, so he would definitely not be able to get through. Facing Miles, who was about to fall, Gwen and Peter Parker almost simultaneously wanted to shoot out their spider silk to pull him over, but there was someone who was faster than them. Bruce fired his hook gun in an instant and it entangled Miles' arm. He pulled the trigger and lifted Miles straight up. Thank you. Looking at Bruce, who was expressionless and packing up his hook gun, Miles thanked the ferocious-looking bat. Bruce didn't answer, but raised his hook gun again. If you want to talk to me, I suggest you go somewhere else now, otherwise someone will come to your door soon. As Bruce said this, he had already shot his grappling hook in another direction. Without waiting for Spider-Man's reply, Bruce disappeared into the darkness.
Really, I think his current style is extremely dark compared to ours. He couldn't really have walked out of a comic book, did he? Miles couldn't help but complain as he watched Bruce disappear from their sight. Peter Parker nodded to Miles at this time. I think you are very similar to Spider-Man in this respect. After saying this, Peter Parker shot out Spider-Silk and followed Bruce. Gwen originally planned to shoot Spider-Silk and leave here with Peter Parker, but when she saw Miles, she hesitated. You can catch up. But in the end, she just left this sentence to Miles, then shot out Spider-Silk and left. Miles really doesn't know how to describe his feelings now. What is going on? At this point, the only thing he could do was to muster up the courage to follow Gwen and the others. But he is indeed quite smart. At least now he can keep up with the speed of Gwen and the others. But what surprised Miles was that the two Spider-Mans were the most capable guys in the city. All you can do is follow the bat. Bruce was right. After they left, a group of people had already arrived on the rooftop. This time, the armbands of this group of people were decorated with an eagle made up of simple patterns. Obviously, S.H.I.E.L.D. has noticed this unusual thing. For them, they want to control all extraordinary events as much as possible within a controllable range. Especially a superhero like this one, who knows where he came from. It seems that we are still late. The leading agent pressed his communicator after looking at the extinguished light. Keep a close eye on that place. Perhaps some things will be solved in a couple of days. The guy on the other side obviously didn't care too much about this matter. In the eyes of S.H.I.E.L.D., the guy who appears now is just a street hero. For a street hero, there is no need for S.H.I.E.L.D. to conduct such elaborate monitoring. It would be enough to just leave someone to keep an eye on every move in this area. There are too many street heroes in New York City, and it is impossible for S.H.I.E.L.D. to keep a close watch on every one of them. Understood. The team leader directed his team members to take off the bat logo on the simple bat lamp. Send it back for testing to see who posted this thing here. Yes. As for Bruce and those Spider-Men at this moment, it had already approached the community where May Parker lived. Gwen suddenly sped up and jumped in front of Bruce. At this moment, Miles realized that it was not that the Spider-Men could not surpass the bat, but they just needed to wait for the bat to stop. Wait! Gwen stared at Bruce. Why did you come here? What on earth do you know? At this moment, Gwen was like a cat with its fur exploded in front of Bruce. And what she was protecting was, naturally, the May Parker home behind her. Wow, what happened? Peter Parker obviously stepped out to act as a peacemaker. He didn't want to see any conflict between Spider-Man and Batman. Although he is quite confident in Spider-Man's abilities, he still has some psychological trauma when facing Batman, who always has a backup plan in the comics. Especially since the Batman he knew had no scruples when it came to fighting. Then let's talk here. Bruce, who was stopped, did not show anything. Anyway, he was just looking for a place to have a good talk. What do you want from me? No longer paying attention to Gwen, Bruce shifted his gaze to Peter Parker. This guy is the one who lit the bat lantern. First, let's discuss the question from last time. I have already thought about how to answer you. However, Peter Parker did not explain what he wanted to talk to him about. I first wanted to have a good debate with Bruce about the question I left for him last time. Aha! Bruce's meaningless syllables once again made Miles quite curious. He really wanted to know what Batman meant by that, We are not criminals, because we always know what path we have chosen, and we also always know that our choice must be in accordance with our own justice. At least I dare say I do. Peter Parker's eyes were full of brilliance when he said this. So what's the matter that brought you here? But what the middle-aged Spider-Man had never expected was that Batman had no intention of continuing to discuss this matter with him. This drove him a little crazy. Chapter 25: The Eyes of a Bat. He couldn't believe that the thing he had been thinking about for a long time did not arouse any interest in the eyes of the bat. You're such a great friend. Peter Parker said this to Batman, almost gritting his teeth. Even though Peter Parker showed kindness to Bruce, for Gwen, the man in front of him was really too mysterious. Although Gwen knew that May Parker's home address was already quite well known in this world. But the fact that this bat was able to bring them directly here is very telling. Bats, I know what they are trying to do. Answer my question. Gwen obviously wouldn't let Bruce off easily. She was now extremely worried that this person might have some intentions towards one of them. Bruce had no intention of paying any attention to Gwen. He just looked at Peter Parker quietly. The look in those eyes showed that Peter Parker had been through a lot. Still can't bear it. I hope you can help us get back. Peter Parker wanted to explain all this to Bruce. But Bruce had already said, return to your universe. Yes, that's right, that's it. Peter Parker hit his palm and said to Bruce excitedly, have you already known that I'm not from this universe? When Peter Parker said this, he moved closer to Bruce to see if the bat had any emotional changes. Although he is old, his brain is still quite useful. He remembered what the bat had said to him before. At that time, he might have been seen through by the bat. I told you, your case is a troublesome one. Bruce was just repeating what he had said before. It was this series of conversations that completely confused Gwen and Miles. So, you already knew about our problem before. Gwen looked at the bat that looked like it didn't want anyone to approach her with some disbelief. It's a simple reasoning. When Bruce said this, Miles on the other side suddenly felt embarrassed for a moment.
Before, he asked Peter Parker a lot of questions, and although he finally came to the same conclusion as the Bat, he was not as calm as the Bat. Besides, at that time, that look was more like what Spider-Man told himself. Wait, why are you willing to come and see us? You've already said before that the matter this Peter is involved in is quite troublesome. Besides, judging from your appearance, you don't seem to want to get involved in this matter. Gwen didn't know what the previous Bat and the other Spider-Man were talking about, but what she did know was that when a person said something was troublesome, she basically wouldn't get involved. Because that kind of person is afraid of trouble. Yes. Miles still remembered that the Bat left quickly after seeing them again. If you didn't want to get involved in this kind of thing, why would you come to see them? First, the Bat light is on. Bruce walked in front of Gwen and raised a finger. With a height of over 1.9 meters and a muscular body, he completely overshadowed the small Gwen. Gwen knew that Batman was not a person with superpowers, and his power might not be as great as that of Dr. Octopus. But when facing this Bat, the sense of oppression and threat she felt was far beyond any enemy she had ever faced. Gwen raised her eyes and met Bruce's blue eyes. She saw neither melancholy nor excitement in them. Some just palpitations. This Bat brings too much oppression. She just looked at each other and she couldn't bear it anymore. You scared her. Miles hurried to Gwen. But when he really looked up and met Bruce's gaze, even though he thought he was brave, he couldn't help but take a step back. In their eyes, Bruce is simply an evil ghost walking in the world. What emanated from him was only endless fear and the kind of darkness that was hard to forget once you had seen it. Secondly, your enemies are now my enemies. Bruce retracted his gaze and turned to look at Peter Parker. Now Peter Parker is holding his hands up, looking a little at a loss. It is obvious that he wanted to stop Bruce from continuing to scare the two children. But he didn't expect Bruce to end his oppression of the two children before him. So we are allies now. Peter Parker put down his hand, walked to Bruce's side, stretched out a hand, and took off his mask. Peter Benjamin Parker is Spider-Man from another world. Peter Parker didn't ask any more questions. He knew very well that everyone had their own secrets, and he wouldn't ask why Bruce would confront Kingpin. There are some things that you don't need to know too clearly. Gwen took a few breaths before slowly raising her head and also chose to take off her mask. Gwen Stacy, also a Spider-Man. Miles also wanted to introduce himself, but he suddenly found that he seemed to be just a person with spider abilities but without the title of Spider-Man. So you don't plan to take off the mask and let us see what kind of person is hidden under this terrifying appearance? Peter Parker couldn't help but say jokingly when he saw that Bruce had no intention of taking off his mask. Gwen was also somewhat curious about what kind of guy was hidden under the mask. There is still one of you who doesn't have the will to become Spider-Man. Although Bruce didn't point it out directly, the people here naturally knew who this Bat was referring to. Originally, Peter Parker would have thought that Bruce had just said this in a slightly euphemistic way. But the next moment, Bruce was facing Miles. Am I right? Miles Morales. Miles was a little unconvinced. He was chosen as a disciple by Peter Parker, the Peter Parker of this world. He even wanted to teach him a few tricks, even though he was dead. He was a little unconvinced, but when he met Bruce's eyes, he felt a little timid for some reason. The words that I had already prepared to say were swallowed back into my stomach at this moment. Miles' performance made Peter Parker a little discouraged, but he might be quite optimistic about this kid. No matter which aspect of his abilities he showed, he had high hopes for this kid. But now when he faced the Bat, he lost the courage to refute just because of the Bat's look. Okay, let's figure out how to fix this little thing. Peter Parker raised his mind again, inserted himself between Bruce and Miles, and blocked the Bat's sight. At the same time, he raised the damaged USB drive. End of this chapter. Chapter May 26th. Parker. You need to find a place to fix this thing yourself. When Peter Parker blocked Bruce's gaze, Bruce had already set his sights on Peter Parker. Of course I also roughly know where you are looking for. Bruce raised his hand and pointed towards the house with Spider-Man memorabilia displayed at the door. It seems like nothing can be hidden. Gwen has given up. In front of this Bat, they have no secrets at all. If you are Batman, shouldn't you have your Batcave? Why can't we repair this thing in your Batcave? As a man who has read several DC comic books, Miles will naturally have a deep memory of Batman's Batcave. Not to mention the strange facilities in the Batcave. Just the mechanical dinosaurs used for defense in the Batcave are enough to make people excited. Miles really wanted to see the scenery inside the Batcave, and was also curious why this Batman never showed his Batmobile or other Bat vehicles from beginning to end. There is no Batcave yet. After Bruce gave Miles this answer, he jumped up, touched the cloak behind him, and glided to May Parker's door leisurely. What? To Miles, this excuse sounded like something Bruce just made up casually. How could a rich Batman not have a Batcave? Peter Parker probably knew what was going on. After all, he had once followed this Batman to rob the rich and give to the poor, and the person being helped was this Batman. Patting Miles on the shoulder, Peter Parker picked up a computer host he was holding and jumped down. I suggest you talk less to him. Gwen said this to Miles when she left, but it was also a warning to herself. The Bat's attitude and the atmosphere really made Spider-Man like them feel uncomfortable. What else could Miles say? He could only follow them there. Putting down the computer host of Oakmax, Peter Parker now seemed a little nervous. He didn't know what May Parker would look like when she saw him. Peter Parker shot out spider silk and rang the doorbell of the house, but it was obvious that his expression was a little hard to describe. "Why don't we just go?" Peter Parker, standing at the familiar doorstep of his home, felt extremely complicated. He wanted to see Aunt May, but he was also afraid that something different would happen after they met. "Peter, we're already at the door." Gwen signaled Peter not to leave, and this was indeed the only place they could find to make the second key. "This is a terrible, terrible idea." Peter Parker turned around and wanted to leave, but as soon as he turned around, he was met with Batman's disapproving gaze. "Thank you for your concern, but we are not receiving fans today." "Thank you." Aunt May's very kind voice sounded behind the door. Peter Parker, upon hearing this familiar voice, stood still on his own accord. However, May Park, who pushed open the door, was obviously still on guard against people knocking on the door at this time, and he had a baseball bat in his hand. But the moment she saw Peter Parker, her expression became extremely shocked, and the baseball bat fell to the ground involuntarily. "I'm not mentally prepared yet." Although Peter Parker's expression has recovered a little now, he is obviously not ready to meet another Aunt May so soon. "Peter." Aunt May was obviously shocked by this other Peter Parker who suddenly appeared in front of her, but the look in her eyes quickly turned into love for Peter Parker. "Hey, Aunt May." Peter Parker's voice sounded a little haggard. She walked up to Peter Parker with some disbelief and gently placed her hand on the spider logo on Peter Parker's chest. Feeling the familiar spider logo, May Parker placed his hand on Peter Parker's weathered face with some disbelief. "I know this sounds crazy, but I'm actually from..." Peter Parker tried to explain to Aunt May that he was not from this world. This time, he was overtaken by someone else and spoke first, and the words he said were directed at the kind-looking old woman in front of him. "Another time and space." "That's right. You look tired, Peter." Aunt May stroked the face of the unshaven Peter Parker in front of her. "Well, I am tired. A little old and plump." Aunt May only had time to look at Peter Parker's figure in front of her. When Peter Parker heard this, he looked helplessly at the bat who was standing quietly and without saying a word. "Yes, someone has already said that." When Aunt May saw the pants Peter Parker was wearing, she said in surprise, "Oh my God, are these loose pants?" Gwen nodded helplessly and answered Aunt May's question. "Yes, it's slacks." Miles slowly walked towards Aunt May. "I was there when Peter left. I'm really sorry." Miles expressed his apologies to Aunt May. "Which time and space are you from?" Aunt May asked Miles curiously. "Brooklyn." Just at this moment Aunt May saw Bruce, who was obviously taller than the others on the other side. "I didn't know that my nephew turned into Batman at some point in time and space." Batman obviously still maintains his absolute popularity in this world. "I belong to this world." Facing such a kind old woman, even Bruce's low and terrifying voice became a little softer. "All right." Miles took out the secret key that he had broken, handed it to May Park and said, "Peter, is there anywhere we can redo this?" "It's a little gadget." After taking the USB flash drive handed over by Miles, May Parker called this thing the same way as Peter Parker. Looking up, the old woman showed an extremely determined look in her eyes. "Follow me." Kicking open the back door of his house with great force, May Park led them to the inconspicuous grocery room in the backyard. "Well, I have a place like that too, a small shed for storing equipment." But when May Park used the key to open the antique-looking brass lock, an amazing scene had already happened. The spider logo of Spider-Man was shining on the copper lock, and the wooden door, which looked no different from any other storage room, had a big spider logo painted on it by the dazzling light strip. May turned and tilted his head to a few people, asking them to follow him. End of this chapter. Chapter 27 Spider-Man. "This place is too full." Peter Parker, who also has a storage room to keep his equipment, complained helplessly when he saw this scene. As the elevator slowly descended, the space and scope of the spider cave clearly surprised the other two people. When seeing the facilities inside, Miles was quite excited. Isn't this the place he dreamed of where he could store his secret equipment? Mysterious, full of technology, and with such a large space. "So is your bat cave as big as this one?" Miles suddenly turned to Bruce and said this. Unfortunately, Bruce had no intention of paying any attention to him. He just stood there quietly, like a silent sculpture. Obviously, he had no way of getting any useful information from Bruce. "Hey, is it the same over there?" Seeing that he couldn't get any useful information from Bruce, Miles immediately changed the person he was asking. He said this to Peter Parker. "Almost, but there are no jeeps or planes." As Peter Parker spoke, the elevator reached the bottom of the spider cave. A row of spider suits lit up behind them, and Peter Parker was still talking about the gap between his there and here. Imagine a smaller version of this, with an extra mattress. Young people today really. Peter Parker wanted to say something else, but he saw the photo frame placed on the table. He didn't say anything else, but walked over with a sad look and picked up the photo frame. The picture in the frame is always of Peter Parker's love of his life, Mary Jane. Looking at the person in the photo smiling brightly, Peter Parker couldn't help but think of his lover. At this time, Miles was looking at Spider-Man's various combat suits with great interest. Looking back at the somewhat silent Peter Parker, Miles wasn't sure if calling out to Peter Parker now was a good choice, but he did find the best evidence to refute Peter Parker.
The Peter Parker in this world has a spider suit with a cape. Hey, Peter, look, isn't this a cloak? Pulling the cloak of the spider suit, Miles said to Peter Parker with a smile. Perhaps remembering what he had said to the boy before, Peter Parker couldn't help but smile. Miles withdrew his hand and continued to look at Spider-Man's suit, but soon he stopped in front of Spider-Man's classic skin. Red and blue spider suit. It's hard to see it in this universe anymore. Gwen watched the interaction between the two people with some interest. After all, Gwen had no idea what kind of experiences they had before. But soon Gwen's attention was attracted by the relationship diagram on the other side. Peter knows how dangerous his mission is. Aunt May also noticed Gwen looking at the relationship diagram on the wall and spoke slowly. But he also knows that the only one in the world who can stop that guy is Spider-Man. Aunt May couldn't help feeling a little lonely when she said this. There are indeed many heroes in this world, but those heroes are often dealing with things that are more difficult for them. As for a guy like Kingpin, it would be difficult for them to have the time and energy to fight him. Not to mention that from beginning to end, Wilson Fisk showed the public his side as a great philanthropist. Even Spider-Man's funeral was planned by this great philanthropist. Except for Aunt May, perhaps few people in this world truly recognize Wilson Fisk's true face. Of course there are a few more now. Everyone in this spider cave also understands what kind of guy Wilson Fisk is. King Bing knows that we are going to look for him, but unfortunately we are outnumbered. Miles put his hands in his pockets and spoke somewhat dejectedly. For him, it was his first time fighting crime as a Spider-Man-like character, but the final result was so embarrassing. This made him feel really uncomfortable and somewhat unacceptable. Outnumbered? That's not necessarily true. Aunt May listened to Miles' words, smiled slightly, and handed them 3 pens and 3 name tags. You might be able to use this. Of course the other one doesn't need it. Aunt May didn't prepare anything like this for Bruce. As the only guy who was completely different from the others, Aunt May believed that others should be able to tell them apart. Just when Gwen and the others wanted to ask why this was happening, their spider sense was triggered. You think you're the only ones who thought of coming here? While Aunt May was speaking, Gwen and the others raised their heads at the same time and looked toward the ceiling. On the ceiling that looked like a spider web, a pair of red eyes slowly opened, followed by 3 other pairs. Hey guys! Spider-Man Noir raised his hat very politely. Then there is Penny Parker who drives the spider robot, and Peter Porker who was bitten by a pig. The appearance of this scene surprised all of them. I have to say that the current situation is indeed weird and a bit scary. Except for Bruce, who has been reducing his presence since entering the spider cave. The Spider-Men were all sizing each other up, trying to get a good feel for each other's condition. And also introducing myself. Bruce did not get involved in the conversation between these Spider-Men. He just found the coffee in the spider cave, made a cup for himself, and also made a cup for Aunt May. You are different from them, right? Aunt May seemed to know everything. After taking Bruce's coffee, she looked at the bat meaningfully. Bruce didn't say anything, but just slightly raised the corner of his mouth, revealing an expression that seemed like a smile. Seeing Bruce's expression, Aunt May probably understood that what she thought was indeed correct. After all, these guys are Spider-Man. Only Bruce is another hero who has absolutely nothing to do with Spider-Man. Neither of them paid any attention to the noisy exchange going on over there among the Spider-Men. Just holding a cup of coffee, watching all this happen quietly. Just as the Spider-Men were discussing who should shut down the collider, a sudden change interrupted Bruce and Aunt May's coffee drinking. Those Spider-Men who came here from other universes all had strange folds on their bodies, and even had many different appearances. The longer they stay in this universe, the more their cells decay, and the more they are rejected by this universe. In the end it will only lead them to death. Go, kid. Aunt May took the coffee cup from Bruce's hand and spoke to Bruce calmly. I'm sure you'll help them. Bruce was a little flattered by Aunt May's trust. To be honest, Bruce had never given his full trust to anyone. End of this chapter. Chapter 28 Bruce's Plan, Extra. You can't stay here. If you stay here you will die. I should be the one to turn off the machine. I will wait until you all go back before I do it. I promised him. So I must do it. Miles spoke with great passion. Everything he said made quite a bit of sense. But at this time Spider-Man Noir stood up and said, Who are you? I think it would be better to give it to the bat over there than to you. Spider-Man Noir speaks extremely fast. Spider-Man Noir had already seen Bruce when they came in. He knew who this was, and he believed that if Bruce got involved, he would be able to help them return to their own world. This time not even Peter Parker said anything. They themselves knew very well that if faced with a choice between Miles and Bruce, basically most people would choose Bruce rather than the little guy who had just gained spider powers. Even if Bruce is just an ordinary person without superpowers. Just like Bruce said, Miles isn't ready to be Spider-Man yet. But at this time, Peter Parker did need to explain Miles' current situation to others. This guy's name is Miles. He helped me get the host from Alchemax. And this kid can also become invisible. Look, he can become invisible now. When Peter Parker said this, he excitedly motioned for everyone to come and see Miles' ability. It's just that Miles lets this introduction fail. Miles currently has no way to freely control his invisibility. He tried hard to appear invisible. Looking at his hands that were still the same,
Miles put his hands in his pockets and said, I can't say I can become invisible just yet. But at this time, the eyes of Spider-Man Noir and the others had changed when they looked at Miles, even though they believed Peter Parker wouldn't lie to them. But the kid was clearly not ready. Gwen pulled Peter Parker and the other Spider-Men together. You can't kid yourself, he's not ready yet. It's obviously not going to work, he's just a kid. I'd rather have that bat help us than have a kid like this help us complete our mission. Although she had no favorable impression of Bruce, Gwen still spoke. Although the guy looks rather gloomy and scary, it must be said that he does seem to have some skills. You should know that he can hear you when you talk. Bruce walked forward slowly and grabbed Miles, who was about to disappear. Not only did Miles' eyes widen at this scene, but even the Spider-Men looked incredulous, because they clearly saw just now that Bruce pulled Miles out of his invisible state as if he was grabbing air. I no longer believe that you don't have superpowers. Spider-Man Noir looked at Bruce cautiously. He really had no way to connect this completely inhuman behavior with Bruce's ordinary identity. Can you see me? Miles looked at Bruce in surprise as he grabbed his hood. I can't see it, but I roughly know what state you should be in. Bruce dragged the little guy to the Spider-Mans. If I hadn't stopped you, you would have gone to find the person you trust most, which means that you are very likely carrying out a mission. Bruce put Miles squarely on the ground and let him stand there. Miles now looked at the bat in amazement. He really doesn't think this guy is the Batman in the comics now. This kind of thing is completely mind-reading. How could Batman have superpowers? It's not mind-reading, just a little bit of simple reasoning. Bruce looked at Miles' surprised expression and said indifferently, I think you're reading my mind. Bruce ignored Miles' words. Have you ever thought about this problem? Wilson Fisk spies are spread all over New York City. It is very likely that your every word and action will be exposed under Wilson Fisk eyes. When Bruce said these words, the other Spider-Men also roughly understood what would happen. But Peter Parker didn't think it was such a coincidence. How could this kid easily attract Kingpin men here? My suggestion is that everyone try not to leave here before the plan is implemented. Bruce's voice was as calm as a robot giving ruthless orders. At this time, everyone basically agreed with Bruce's point of view. Although Miles wanted to leave here and explain the current situation to his uncle, after hearing Bruce's explanation, he chose to give up this idea. Now let's make 2 keys. Bruce looked at Penny Parker, who was lying on the spider robot. Wait, we don't have that much time. We can only repair the original key and make a perfect one. Gwen knew very well that it was impossible to make 2 keys directly at this time. 1 fake and 1 real will do. Bruce said lightly. Can you do that, Penny? No problem. Penny gestured to Bruce confidently. Then start working, and everyone else just do what they should do. After Bruce left this sentence, he turned and walked towards the computer with a monitor. Miles, let's train. Peter Parker pulled Miles up from the ground. Now he wanted to train this kid well. He clearly possessed abilities that none of them possessed, so he couldn't let this guy sink into such a state. Looking at Peter Parker, who was taking Miles to the side for training, Gwen looked at Bruce, who was sitting in front of the computer screen with his hands waving. Gwen chose to lean against the table to Bruce's left, quietly watching the work of others around her. Of course, for some people, this cannot be considered work. It can only be considered preparation before war. For example, Spider-Man Noir and Spider-Ham are restoring the Rubik's Cube. Do you know something? Thinking of all the signs Bruce had shown before, Gwen had reason to believe that there was a reason why Bruce stopped Miles from going out. I'm just stating a possibility. Bruce's eyes were fixed on the screen without any sign of moving away. What is displayed on Bruce's screen at this moment is the images from the surveillance cameras on various avenues in New York. Just follow the paths in these pictures, and your final destination will be only one place. Fisk Building. Looking at the man next to her, who had a completely different style from them, Gwen really didn't know what attitude she should adopt towards him. We will succeed, right? Gwen could sense that Bruce's flying fingers paused slightly when she said this. I thought Bruce would say something, but Bruce just resumed his actions. Sure enough, I will still hate you. After leaving these words, Gwen left Bruce and went to Aunt May. End of this chapter. Chapter 29, Miles' Problem. It didn't matter to Bruce what Gwen said. What he needs to do now is to limit Kingpin's support to the greatest extent possible. Although Kingpin takes his Collider plan very seriously. But when facing those real agents, Kingpin's place is still a hornet's nest full of loopholes. Now Bruce can guarantee that there are definitely Hydra people around Kingpin. It is estimated that people from S.H.I.E.L.D. also gathered around Kingpin. The commotion in Brooklyn is just too big. As New York is not located in an earthquake zone and there are no large-scale earthquakes, it is difficult for such problems in Brooklyn not to attract people's attention. As for why no action was taken to stop Kingpin, Bruce will only think that S.H.I.E.L.D. and Hydra both want Kingpin Collider. Perhaps only they themselves know what it is used for. What Bruce needs to do now is to turn all the agents around Kingpin into headless flies who are unable to deliver messages in time. A small attack should be able to take care of all this. The only prerequisite is that the Collider will not be damaged. Time is passing slowly, but no one disturbs Bruce and Penny Parker. They have already left the spider cave. They should at least replenish their physical strength. But there is an exception in this world. Aunt May brought a sandwich and a cup of coffee and placed them next to Bruce.
Don't forget to eat. Aunt May patted Bruce's shoulder and said this softly. Bruce was stunned by the simple and plain sandwich on his left hand. He turned around and wanted to say something to Aunt May. But at this moment, Aunt May was talking to Penny Parker, and it can be seen that the sandwich Aunt May made for Penny was quite childlike. It was a sandwich cut into the shape of a bear. Of course, Penny loved it very much, and the smile on her little face was really pleasing to the eye. Bruce didn't say what he said. He just turned around and started his work again. However, when Aunt May came back from Penny, she still laughed when she saw the empty sandwich on the plate. Even the coffee was drunk by this gloomy-looking child. Aunt May smiled and put away the plates, not thinking of disturbing Bruce at all. Nice sandwich. Bruce's deep voice rang out. But when Aunt May looked at Bruce, the child was still doing his work carefully. It seemed as if what she heard just now was just hallucination. However, she didn't believe in auditory hallucinations. What's more, she believed from the beginning to the end that this child was a good child. You can come often in the future. After leaving this sentence, Aunt May took the elevator again and left the spider cave. Bruce didn't say anything, but his working hands paused for a moment. He's a very gentle person. Thomas suddenly spoke. Bruce simply buried himself again in his work. Now he just wants to get everything done. By then, everything will have a relatively good ending. After a night passed, the sun slowly moved towards the west. Penny cheered. I did it. There was an expression of deep joy on Penny's little face, even though this matter was not actually that difficult for her. But that kind of joy can't be faked. Great. Bruce walked to Penny's side. His voice was not as low as before, but rather gentle. Hey, I made 2 according to your request. Penny handed the 2 keys to Bruce. The spider logo on the fake key has 4 horizontal webs, while the real one has 3 horizontal webs. I understand. You go up and meet them first. Bruce put away the secret key and walked towards his office area. Although Penny didn't know what Bruce was going to do now, since everyone trusted this guy so much, she naturally trusted Bruce as well. Okay. Penny happily walked towards the elevator and left. When Penny left with her little robot, Bruce lowered his head and looked at the 2 secret keys in his hands. Hey. Hello everyone. Penny smiled happily when she appeared in front of the other Spider-Men. Gwen looked tentatively behind Penny Parker, and when she was sure that the bat was not behind her, she frowned and said to Penny, Where's the bat? It seems that his work is not finished yet. He came out after I gave him the secret key. Penny naturally said whatever she wanted to say, but she didn't know that to Gwen, Miles and Peter Parker, the original plan might turn out to be completely unpredictable. That guy is a bat. After looking at Peter Parker, Gwen prepared to leave. I gonna go see. Just as Gwen was about to push open the back door, it was already pulled open. The bat hidden under the cloak slowly walked in front of her. We can implement the plan now. A hand stretched out from under the black cloak, and there were 2 secret keys already threaded on the ropes. Which one is real? Gwen took the thing and wanted to identify which one of the 2 was the real one. But Bruce didn't answer. Even when little Penny wanted to explain the situation, Bruce stopped her by shaking his head. Although she had only known Bruce for a short time, Penny always felt that what Bruce did was right. She chose not to speak. You hold this, the colorful Peter Parker holds this. After handing one to Gwen, Bruce handed the other to Peter Parker. The 2 men looked at each other. Although they always felt that something was wrong, in this situation, it was better to listen to the bat. I think you should know when Kingpin plans to have the next collision. Bruce said while looking at Peter Parker. Tonight. He remembered that clearly. After all, what those guys like to do most is to give others a deadline within 24 hours. It has become a standard catchphrase for villains. It just makes them a little annoyed to listen to it. How are his training results? It was only at this time that Bruce looked at Miles on the other side, who was obviously frustrated. Peter Parker didn't say anything. He just pursed his lips. He really didn't want to say anything hurtful to the kid. The abilities that child possesses do give people something to look forward to about his future. But right now, he really wasn't ready to take on the responsibility of Spider-Man. This is a question that Peter Parker cannot avoid. Miles is looking forward to Peter Parker being able to say he is ready. But even he himself knew that he was not ready. End of this chapter. Chapter 30 Spider-Man Memorial Event. Extra. Bruce didn't say anything. He just looked at the kid. He is the person here who knows the child's normal trajectory best. If he were not there, he would still be following the normal trajectory yesterday. Eventually, he will understand his responsibilities just like the normal Spider-Man. Should I go to school now? Miles couldn't look Bruce in the eye. He could only lower his head and look at his untied shoelaces. Bruce didn't say anything, just walked outside. The Spider-Men knew that this meant the beginning of the plan. They looked at the somewhat lonely Miles and wanted to comfort him. But I don't know what to say. They could only walk away from Miles one by one. But when he left, almost everyone patted him on the shoulder. Although Gwen wanted to speak several times when she passed by Miles, she could only swallow back the words that she felt were meant to comfort her. At this point, Gwen didn't feel like anything she said would be comforting to this guy. She could only say goodbye to Miles. Bye, Miles. Miles looked up with some frustration, looked at the slender figure that had walked out,
opened his mouth, but finally swallowed it. I know you, kid. You can handle everything. You just need to step through a door. Peter Parker squatted down and spoke to Miles solemnly. Miles looked at Peter Parker and nodded heavily. With Miles' affirmation, Peter Parker couldn't drag it on any longer. He is now catching up with the main force. There must be no problems with today's plan. Miles looked at the figures that were getting farther and farther away, and a look of longing appeared on his face. He also wanted to be able to carry out such a mission like them. Of course it's just Spider-Man, like the Bat. That's not what Miles wants to be. What? You've lost your confidence. Aunt May smiled and drank her coffee, looking at the boy. Miles immediately turned around and said to Aunt May, "How is that possible? I promised Spider-Man that I would become like him. It's just that this was a task Peter gave me, but now I've given it to someone else. Isn't that a bit bad?" When Miles said this, he couldn't help but think of the Peter Parker in this world who was already seriously injured at that time. The greater the ability, the greater the responsibility. But now, he can't even control his basic abilities. How to take that responsibility? Then why don't you train well? Aunt May spoke to Miles in a relaxed manner. How to train? I have been trained by a fairly mature Spider-Man for a whole night, but I didn't accomplish anything. Miles felt inexplicably lost when he thought of this. He wondered if he wasn't born to be Spider-Man. Otherwise, all these problems cannot be explained at all. Spider-Man, sometimes you don't need training from other people. Aunt May put down her coffee cup. My Peter, is there anyone who can train him? Listening to Aunt May's words, Miles' eyes gradually lit up. Looking at Miles who had regained his fighting spirit, Aunt May said nothing and walked straight towards the spider hole. And Miles followed behind Aunt May. The sun gradually sets and slowly retracts its light. But human beings' own lights have completely turned this city into a city that never sleeps. Not to mention the Spider-Man's and Bruce's target, the Fisk building is now even more magnificent. The lights have illuminated the building, making it the brightest place in the area. No one would think that the guy who built this building would be the underground king of New York City. They would only think that Wilson Fisk was one of the rare good people in the world. Crouching on the boom of the tower crane, the Spider-Men are now carefully observing the things around them. The Kingpin has a private elevator that goes from the top floor directly to the collider. Penny Parker, sitting in the Spider-Mech, was controlling the mech to plan their route to the collider. Speaking of it, it is quite simple. As long as they can enter the building normally. Things after that were much simpler. I didn't expect there would be an audience. Spider-Man Noir noticed the red carpet ceremony being held under the Fisk building. Those flashing lights and those eye-catching stars are heading towards the Fisk building. Apparently, they were invited by Wilson Fisk to participate in some activity. What's our plan? Gwen looked up at Bruce, who was standing at the far end of the crane. Bruce standing there was like a devil moving in the dark. I have already controlled the surrounding surveillance cameras. Bruce said this calmly. Now those cameras have a safe passage formed by tiny blind spots. Follow me. After Bruce said this, he shot out his hook gun and swung towards the top floor of the Fisk building. It is extremely easy for Spider-Man to see every step Bruce takes. After all, their dynamic vision that far exceeds that of ordinary people and their rapid learning ability are just some small improvements brought about after they become Spider-Man. What's more, their IQ is not low. Gwen was the first to follow Wayne, and then the other Spider-Men followed directly. But when they swung to the Fisk building, everyone except Bruce was surprised by what they saw. What a joke! But all this was a huge joke to the Spider-Men. What did they see? Spider-Man's mortal enemy, the underground supervillain of New York, was actually holding a memorial service for Spider-Man? And it looked like this was of a very high standard. Everyone at the venue could see a person who shouldn't be there, Mary Jane. But her appearance here is reasonable. For her, although she knows that her husband is Spider-Man, she knows far less than Aunt May. Not to mention that even the spider hole was built by Peter in Aunt May's house. This kind of thing was destined to happen. There was no way Mary Jane would know what kind of guy Kingpin was. Kingpin on the stage was giving his speech. Thank you everyone. It's an honor to be able to commemorate Spider-Man with you all tonight. When saying this, Kingpin's tone was filled with grief. We used to be really good friends, and he was like... But it was obvious that the Spider-Men couldn't stand it anymore. What a pighead. Gwen narrowed her eyes and was quite disdainful of Kingpin's remarks. I can hear you talking. But Spider-Ham is a little unhappy. Wait, look at how those waiters are dressed. They have no taste. But it can't be that simple. Spider-Man Noir looked at Bruce. They could see that the waiters serving in the surrounding area were all dressed in Spider-Man costumes, which was obviously a special arrangement for the Spider-Man commemorative event. Perhaps this was the easiest way to get them in? Bruce just glanced at it and then walked in another direction. Go from here. End of this chapter. Chapter 31 Under Control. It would be better if we just go from here. Peter Parker said this to Batman. If you think that Kingpin really wouldn't be able to recognize you because of your so-called disguise, then it's unlikely that he would be alive today. Bat stopped walking in another direction. Besides, he had already held a memorial service for Spider-Man before this. Why did he have to hold another one? Turning around to look at the now bewildered Peter Parker, Batman felt helpless. Because he knew we would come here. Gwen suddenly understood it at this moment. Aha! The bat restarted its movements and walked towards the position it found at the beginning. Doesn't that mean this is a trap set for us? Spider-Man Noir also understood. Kingpin has already prepared everything, and is just waiting for them to fall into the trap. And they had to come. What about us now? Spider-Ham stroked his chin, thinking seriously. There's no other way. This is a naked conspiracy and we have to go in. Peter Parker's IQ seemed to be slowly returning in this world. Even if we don't come, Kingpin will still start the collider, and by then he will have achieved his goal. As for us, we won't be able to return to our own world. Gwen continued where Peter Parker left off. I can only wait in this world for the cells in my body to completely decay and die. It's probably a pretty painful way to die. The Spider-Man Noir now understand the source of their previous pain. They are rejected by this world. If they don't return to their own world in time, the only thing that awaits them is death. So what are you doing? The bat had already opened a passage. A ladder for passage is exposed below. Wow, how did you know that? Seeing this passage, Peter Parker spoke to the bat excitedly. They did want to enter the building through a passage before, but it was not here. They were about to climb in through the window downstairs. The height of the activity hall is higher than that of an average 3-story building. If you go in from downstairs, you can probably get directly to the edge of the venue, and then you only need a little disguise to ensure that you won't be discovered. But now Bruce has apparently found another suitable way for them to sneak in. The Spider-Man in this world has already put the design drawings of the Fisk building in his computer. Anyone who is careful enough can find it. Batman's words made the surrounding Spider-Men look really embarrassed. To be honest, in their own world, they do operate as Spider-Man. But there aren't many guys like the Spider-Man from this world. Have a spider hole of your own. Of course, it is quite consistent with Batman's character that he knows these things. Doesn't Batman have his own Batcave? When faced with a spider cave, it is natural to check all the equipment. To be honest, I really doubt that you are not a fanatical fan now. You can't be the Batman who traveled through time and space like us and came to this world. Peter Parker suddenly put his arms around Batman's shoulders. Even though the overlapping effect flashed across his body, it did not reduce his interest in Batman. The bat just looked at him, said nothing, and fell down. With its cloak acting as a cushion, the bat did not make any sound when it fell. I'll know. The fact that Bats didn't talk to himself said a lot in Peter Parker's eyes. Okay, let's get ready to do things. Gwen didn't seem to have much idea about the true identity of the bat. She just wanted to go home as soon as possible. Peter Parker spread his hands. I just want to know his true identity. Don't tell me that you are not curious about his identity. Gwen pursed her lips at what Peter Parker said, but she said nothing. She simply dodged and landed in the passage, moving forward quietly. Apparently I was right. Peter Parker smiled and fell down just as lightly. I guess everyone will be interested in what that guy looks like under the mask. Spider-Ham said the same thing. As a newspaper reporter, if I could know what the vigilante looks like under the mask, it would definitely increase the sales of the newspaper to a higher level. When Spider-Ham said this, he showed a very cartoon-like expression. Obviously, he was already imagining what kind of sensation it would cause to know what a vigilante looked like under the mask. But it can only be imagined. Because as a vigilante himself, he knows very well how important the mask is to them. He always makes me feel like I've met my father. Penny expressed her thoughts quite directly. Then he jumped right in. Spider-Ham didn't know what to say for a moment, so he could only shoot out spider silk and hang on the back of Penny's spider mecha. Only the Spider-Man Noir remained silent and did not say anything. After all, he is the one who knows the true appearance of bats. The true appearance of the bat was no longer what he was curious about. He, like the other Peter Parker, wanted to know if this bat was the same as them. But as they moved forward, a sense of vibration was transmitted to Spider-Man and Bruce through the surrounding walls. But Bruce was quite calm about this matter. They have already started to act. Bruce said indifferently. So what should we do now? Peter Parker now felt that it was a good thing to have someone like this who could always help him think about what he should do. At least he can solve many things. Wait until our super philanthropist finishes his speech, and... Bruce turned his head and looked at the Spider-Men hanging on the ceiling. We will need to separate and carry out our respective actions in a while. Just carry out your own actions. After saying this, Bruce didn't say anything else. He just stared at the projection on his arm, and what was shown was Jean Bing, who was finishing his speech in the hall. And there is the tombstone that has long disappeared. The tombstone had already gone to the bottom floor, ready to deal a heavy blow to the uninvited guests who were about to arrive. And Kingpin was now moving out of the hall. Everything is now under Bruce's control, and there are no major deviations in everyone's trajectory. End of this chapter. Chapter 32. The Bat succeeded. As Kingpin entered his private elevator, the two bodyguards who were originally guarding the elevator entrance had not yet reacted when a figure appeared directly beside them. Boom! What happens when two good heads collide? Naturally, a very crisp collision sound is heard. Who wouldn't like this sound? Bruce released the heads of the two unconscious bodyguards with a calm expression. When the two heads collided, the Spider-Men on the ceiling couldn't help but shrink their necks. It should hurt. Spider-Ham has changed the most. He feels that if he is hit by someone, he will definitely need to rest for a while. Enter the private elevator guarded by the two guys. Spider-Man Noir's idea was quite direct. He immediately planned to kick open the tightly closed elevator door. With Spider-Man's abilities, it is certainly possible. But the bat stopped him. Just throw a small thing up there and the originally closed elevator door will be opened directly by the bat. A handy little gadget, said Peter Parker. Pulling out his grappling gun, Bruce shot his grappling hook directly to the top of the elevator shaft, then fell straight down. Now I think I hate him too. Peter Parker said this to Gwen. But Gwen didn't answer now. She always felt that the bat had something else to tell them. The Spider-Man rolled over and landed at the bottom of the elevator shaft. But the bats were no longer there. Now I feel more and more that this guy is the real Batman. This kind of behavior of turning away and disappearing is exactly the same as the Batman comics that Peter Parker has read. Even Superman couldn't figure out where Batman went after turning around. Well, according to what the bat said, Kingpin has definitely prepared a large army waiting for us there. Gwen took a deep breath and hoped that things would develop in the direction they wanted. Now it's time to tell us which one is real. Gwen turned and looked at Penny Parker. The one with 3 horizontal stripes is real, and the one with 4 stripes is fake. Penny felt that at this point, it was not particularly important whether to say it or not. They may be leaving this universe soon. Gwen and Peter Parker took out their keys at the same time. Damn bat. Gwen looked at the key in her hand and then at the key in Peter Parker's hand. Now she really hates that bat more and more. The keys in the hands of both of them are the same, all with 3 horizontal nets. Just as Penny was shocked, suddenly her spider mecha received an email from the bat. I know you should have told them how to distinguish the authenticity of the key. I can only tell you that any key in your hand may be the real one. But don't worry, you will get back, and I will destroy the collider as well. When Penny Parker read out the email message from Batman, Gwen really wanted to tear off the bat's mask and teach that bat a lesson. So what should we do now? Spider-Man Noir was not doing nothing during this period of time. He was looking around the collider for the locations where Kingpin might be hiding. He actually spotted several figures in white coats. What he was holding in his hand should be a portable rifle. Get rid of those who are interfering with us. Gwen was very angry now. It's not just because the bat gave them 2 keys that they had no idea whether they were real or not, but also because the bat didn't trust them. When Spider-Man and his companions took action, Batman had already found where he should be. He stood quietly like a shadow in the corner of the large laboratory. The fact that these guys didn't like to turn on the lights allowed Bruce to invade here so easily really gave Bruce a good opportunity. I don't know why, but it seems like these villains don't like to turn on the lights in their experimental sites. Even when the lights were on, they were not bright. Start the program. Kingpin walked directly into the laboratory. Now he just had to wait for his equipment to bring his family back. Upload the genetic sequences of Vanessa Fisk and Richard Fisk. Start searching for spatial matches. The orderly communication in the laboratory did highlight the professionalism of these guys, but it also allowed the bats to discover a few rather suspicious guys. From the very beginning, although they were doing their own work, they were also doing their own little things on the other side. In the dark laboratory, it is indeed difficult to detect their behavior. The countdown to secondary ignition begins. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Violent energy spurted out from the nozzles of the 2 colliders, causing a violent collision in the middle. The collider has begun, and the opportunity Bruce has been waiting for has appeared. A small USB device has appeared in Bruce's hand. According to Bruce's calculations, this thing will not affect the ongoing collider at all. When the special container that was about to be pushed into the energy collision flow just appeared, Bruce had already thrown the USB device in his hand into the center of the laboratory. Dang dang. The sound of metal colliding seemed particularly abrupt in this noise-treated laboratory. Kingpin was not attracted by the sound. All his attention was on the collider. He probably won't have any problem with anything that happens here. When Tombstone heard the sound, he had already taken out his gun and scanned the surrounding environment, but he only saw the door of the laboratory slowly closing. When he lowered his head and saw that thing, he immediately chose to let Jean Bing leave here. Unfortunately, he was unable to do so. Olivia Octavius also discovered the little thing. She was just about to throw the thing away with her tentacles. USB device exploded. Destructive broadband electromagnetic radiation enveloped the laboratory in an instant. As a scientist, Dr. Octopus naturally knew best what this thing was, but she had never imagined that someone could construct a USB device so small. What happened? Kingpin looked back at the computer screen that was plunged into darkness, and then at Dr. Octopus who could no longer control his tentacles. How could he not know that his plan had been ruined? But it wasn't just Kingpin who asked his question. The Spider-Men who were dealing with the minions outside also discovered that the container did not continue to rise. What happened? Spider-Ham was a little curious as to why the thing stopped moving. Gwen looked at the laboratory which had turned completely dark, and the Kingpin who could be roughly seen under the light of energy. It looks like the bat succeeded. End of this chapter. Chapter 33. Gwen with a bad temper. Although Gwen was a little disgusted with the bat, she had to admit that when such a person became her teammate, many things could be easily and safely handed over to him. Suddenly, Gwen felt that having a teammate might not be such a bad thing. Of course,
It won't be a teammate like Bat. Who knows what the bats will do behind the scenes. That guy was clearly the type who didn't trust anyone at all. Okay, let's do our thing now. Gwen turned and shouted to Peter Parker, who had already dealt with the miscellaneous soldiers of Alchemax in the distance. Peter Parker made an okay gesture to Gwen, shot out spider silk from his wrist, and swung directly towards the ceiling. Okay, now let's see if this little thing is real. Peter Parker found the control panel used to change the collider with ease. His spider sense activated as he knocked open the panel covering the control panel. Well, I knew it. Peter Parker had almost become accustomed to this kind of script. When a good character is about to succeed, a villain always pops up, right? The Prowler. Peter Parker looked helpless as he watched the guy swooping towards him. But it was clear that the Prowler had no intention of talking to Peter Parker at all. The expression hidden beneath the purple mask was extremely serious, and it even showed through the eyes on the mask. Can't you just stay aside and let me finish this job? The Prowler came over and grabbed Peter Parker's neck, pushing him away from the control panel. Peter Parker failed, and Gwen naturally took over Peter Parker's position. She and Peter Parker both have keys, and it's unclear which key is the real one, but at least now they have a second chance. Come on. Gwen inserted the key in her arms into the control panel, appearing a little anxious. But obviously, nothing happens in the control panel. The key Bat gave Gwen was a fake. Oh, damn Bat. Gwen pulled out the fake key and crushed it into pieces. Although she had thought that her key was fake, Gwen still found it hard to accept when this happened in front of her. But now all Gwen can do is get the other key back from Peter. Or let Peter come over and try to see whether his key is real or fake. Leave that Peter to me, you come over and try it. Gwen was really furious now. Spewing out spider silk, Gwen pulled herself to an astonishing speed in an instant. A kick landed on the Wanderer's back, sending this man, who relied on high-tech equipment to walk on the inverted ceiling as if it were flat ground, flying out. So yours is fake. When Peter Parker saw Gwen's reaction, he already knew that Gwen's key was fake. Does that mean that what he has in his hand is real? It seems that the Bat still has some feelings. Peter Parker said this, but was met with a cold stare from Gwen, who made him say this like a bat, which makes us trust him more and less than other Spider-Men. Gwen didn't punch him directly on the spot, which showed that she had a good temper. Peter Parker realized that he had said the wrong thing and immediately gave Gwen an awkward smile, then quickly evacuated the battlefield. The Prowler is back. I'm really pissed off right now. Gwen had never been treated like this before. She had automatically transformed the Wanderer in front of her into the form of a bat. Apparently the Wanderer hasn't realized yet what Gwen will do to him. He only knew that his mission was to strangle these unlucky Spider-Men to death here. Although there seemed to be some problems with his allies, the Wanderer himself was not someone who needed teammates. The ninja-like running posture makes this Wanderer look even more terrifying. But all this may mean nothing in Gwen's eyes. Now Gwen has already regarded the Prowler as the dead bat. Just as the Prowler raised the sharp iron claws and prepared to attack Gwen, the white Spider-Man in front of him disappeared. Instead, a foot wearing ballet shoes kicked him directly on the waist. Even though Gwen's strength was small compared to other Spider-Men, her kick on the Prowler still caused him some pain. At this moment, the other Spider-Men naturally had their hands free, and they couldn't help but sigh as they watched the battle happening on the ceiling. Did anyone provoke her? Spider-Man Noir could naturally see that Gwen was definitely not the same as when she first dealt with those Alchemax minions. It was obvious that he was really angry. Penny Parker noticed Peter Parker who had reached the control panel. Maybe it's the Bat. Penny revealed the reason why Gwen was so irritable. Thinking about the Bat, Spider-Man Noir suddenly felt that everything made sense. But then, under their gaze, Peter Parker angrily crushed his own key. Should we inform the Bat that he might be punished for his crime? Spider-Ham said this tentatively. I think you should worry about yourselves. A ferocious voice sounded in their ears, and a guy who had completely transformed himself appeared in front of Spider-Man Noir and the others. When Scorpion saw the three Spider-Men in front of him, he did not show any interest at all. He just showed a very happy expression. It was as if he could tear all three Spider-Men into pieces. Spider-Man Noir immediately assumed his fighting stance. It seems that we really couldn't decide the winner last time. This time it's not about winning or losing. This time you will die here. Scorpion showed an extremely ferocious smile, and then swooped down towards the Spider-Man with his four mechanically modified legs. Why don't you so-called heroes come out and face me? Are you just good at hiding? Wilson Fisk roared towards the empty space in the laboratory. Now his anger is enough to completely ignite this place. He was about to bring his family back, but one guy ruined his perfect plan. How can one not feel upset by this kind of frustration? End of this chapter. Chapter 34. Hurry up. Hurry up. However, while feeling frustrated, Kingpin had not completely lost his mind. He gestured to the tombstone and began searching. One person might not be able to handle that guy, but two people would definitely be able to do it. Now the researchers, trembling with fear because of this sudden incident, are hiding under their desks, not knowing what to do. Going out was obviously not an option. It seems even more inappropriate to stay here. There were a few researchers who had already hidden under the table, but their expressions were relatively calm. They really didn't expect that there would be a hero who would throw out an USB device while fighting.
He was really not afraid that the USB device would cause the collider outside to go completely out of control and create a black hole directly under Brooklyn. Is the person who did this so confident that he can limit the damage caused by the USB device to this extent? I originally wanted to report this to my superiors, but it is obviously impossible. Damn it! A female researcher gritted her teeth, clearly quite disgusted with this intrusive hero. But no one cares about her voice. Tombstone had already reached the gate, with the guns in his hands ready. As long as that guy shows up, Tombstone promises that he can make him experience what American style is. What does it mean to empty the magazine? Bang! The shock wave of the explosion instantly blew the tombstone away. The sudden change didn't allow Kingpin to react. He just saw the tombstone flying out. The next second, a hook was already hanging around his neck. A figure also continued to enlarge in front of him, and at this moment the bat really appeared in front of Kingpin. Kingpin reacted quickly, pointing the pistol in his hand at Bruce. Just as he was about to shoot, a small piece of metal stuck to his pistol. There is also a flashing red light on it. The bat followed the force of its hook and came directly behind Kingpin. Bang! Boom! Two dull sounds were heard. The first sound was the sound of the metal sheet attached to Kingpin's pistol exploding, and the second sound was the sound of Kingpin smashing the table as he was thrown directly by Bat's throwing technique. The bat who did all this didn't feel anything. Instead, he looked more seriously at the big guy who was slowly getting up. Bats had anticipated Kingpin's resilience, and even from the beginning Bats was acting in the way he would deal with Bane. It just didn't have any micro-explosives. But now it seems that this big guy has caught up with Bane before the injection of venom. This ability to withstand blows is somewhat surprising. Jean Bing stood up and looked at the pistol in his hand that had exploded, and then he crushed the broken pieces into a ball again. Looking up at the bat. I don't know why you guys always come to interfere with my family. You are not saving your family. You are just making up for your shortcomings towards your family. Bruce's voice was still as steady, but now he was obviously ready for Kingpin counterattack. The muscle groups in the body have already been mobilized, enabling the bat to take the best response measures at any time. Under the light of the collider, Kingpin now looks like a burly devil. I've already killed a spider, I don't mind killing a bat. As Kingpin said this, his huge body started moving. I don't know how this guy trained himself. Even with such a huge body, he can burst out with amazing speed in a short period of time. The pair of fists, which looked already quite intimidating, smashed towards the bat's head. But the bat's reaction speed was far beyond his imagination. He just bent down and dodged, and slipped through the gap under Kingpin's arm. He stepped firmly and punched Kingpin right in the ribs. Even with Kingpin weight, he had to move sideways 2 steps under the bat's punch. Bats won't miss the opportunity. He rushed forward and kicked Kingpin out without giving him any chance to react. A leg-cutting kick hit Kingpin's knee. Half a ton of force hit Kingpin's knee directly. Even though he had thick skin and flesh, he could feel the problem in his knee at this moment. After a successful strike, Bat immediately followed up with a back kick. But this time it didn't have any effect. Kingpin has put his hands on his head to prevent subsequent attacks from the bat. He even grabbed the bat's calf and threw it out. Bang! The bat hit the outer window frame of the laboratory and couldn't help but let out a muffled groan. The tombstone that had been knocked unconscious by the explosion slowly woke up, and as soon as it opened its eyes, it saw the bat that had been smashed on the frame. He stood up and rushed towards the bat, punching it in the abdomen. However, he was entangled by Bat's backhand, and he locked Tombstone's arm with a cross armbar, and brought himself down from it. When Tombstone was thrown to the ground again, he wanted to punch Bruce. Obviously the bat's reaction speed was much faster than his. The bat fell backward suddenly, and its arm pressed down on the Tombstone's arm, breaking the Tombstone's right hand. Ah! But apparently the bat didn't finish the action. After breaking Tombstone's arm, it dodged and punched Tombstone in the face. The Tombstone that was originally wailing became silent after being hit by a punch. Bruce was a little out of breath at this time. It wasn't because he was physically exhausted, but because the pain from being thrown onto the frame by Kingpin began to slightly interfere with his movements. Careful! Thomas in my mind suddenly spoke at this moment. Even though Bruce had reacted quite quickly, he still couldn't make any effective response. Especially Tombstone grabbed Bat's ankle tightly before he fell into coma. Although the strength has declined now, when facing this kind of battle, any problem may cause huge problems. That hand made it impossible for the bat to escape for a while. Kingpin rushed forward like a human tank. Even though this tank is a little lame now. But no one would think that his lethality is not fatal. Kingpin flew out directly with the bat. There is a tombstone of a person who has fainted on the bat's ankle. When they rushed out of the laboratory, the original researchers immediately scattered. They all ran out through the gap in the wall that the bats had blown open. Let's go to hell together. Jean Bing was obviously crazy at this moment. With his face full of flesh, he could no longer control his expression, which was obviously sick. Even when he was talking, he seemed a little crazy. What happened in the direction of the laboratory has attracted the attention of all Spider-Men. Bat! Peter Parker, who was cursing bats in his heart just now, kicked the wall to speed up his descent the next moment. Even Spider Silk has been shot out. Gwen simply shook off the prowler and moved quickly towards the bat, and the Spider Silk was aimed directly at the bat. Faster! Faster! Looking at the spider silk getting closer and closer to the bat, Gwen still couldn't help roaring in her heart. End of this chapter. Chapter 35. Can we really get to know each other? Extra. But how can the Wanderer on the other side let Gwen get what she wants? After a run-up and accumulating strength, the Prowler jumped down directly and knocked Gwen to the other side. Gwen could only watch as her spider silk was deflected by the impact of the Prowler. No! At this time, Peter Parker is still at least some distance away from being a bat. But there was obviously no way to catch up. The bat didn't seem to be overly panicked. It just tilted its head back and then hit Kingpin's head directly. The bat mask showed its unparalleled defensive power at this moment. After all, how could something that could defend against 9mm pistol bullets at close range not have any hard properties? This header also made Kingpin feel dizzy. Simultaneously with the headbutt, Bruce's trapped hand also performed the attack. Although the force was not strong enough, it was enough for Bruce to perform the movements he needed. His fist hit hard at the place where he had hit before. Amidst the severe pain and trance, Kingpin now relaxed slightly for a moment. This was the opportunity the bats had been waiting for. He suddenly pulled out a hand with a hook gun in it, and shot his hook directly in the direction where Peter Parker fell. Don't even think about it. Kingpin had reacted and wanted to continue trapping the bat, but now he found that his body was flying backwards uncontrollably. Bruce placed a small thruster directly on Kingpin's chest. The blazing tail flame even caused slight changes in the armor on the bat's chest, but this was not a problem for the bat. His goal has been achieved. I caught you. After catching Bruce's hook, Peter Parker quickly shot out his spider silk, allowing himself to hang on the ceiling. Kingpin could only watch the bat getting farther and farther away from him, until there was no way to catch him again. I won't let you go. Even at the last moment before falling, Kingpin was roaring at the bat. He once thought that his biggest enemies would be these Spider-Men, but now it seems that his preparations should be directed at the bat. Bang! The sound of heavy objects falling to the ground even masked the sound of the collider. But that was only a moment, and now many buildings that do not belong to this universe have appeared in the center of the collider. That is the universe belonging to those Spider-Men, and it is constantly pressing towards here. If the collider is not shut down in time, black holes will still appear. You're so heavy. I think you should try losing weight or something. After sending Batman to the safe laboratory platform, Peter Parker first said this to Batman, and then punched Batman directly in the face. It can be seen that the spider still held back. Otherwise, Bruce would definitely not have been knocked to the ground by a punch. But that doesn't mean you don't have to give me an explanation for those two fake keys. At this point, Peter Parker thought of the confident look on his face when he spoke to Gwen. Now he really wanted to throw the bat mask to the ground. Peter Parker took a long breath and reached out to the bat. Get up. Batman didn't say anything. He just placed his hand on Peter Parker's outstretched hand and slowly stood up. At this moment, the other Spider-Men dealt with the scorpion that had transformed itself into a biological weapon and jumped up directly by pulling the spider silk. I shouldn't have been so confident in handing the key to you. Little Penny was obviously a little unhappy about what Bruce had done before. Holding his hands, he spoke to Bruce with an angry look on his face. Her spider mech also showed a rather angry expression on the screen. Suddenly, the Spider-Men around all made way for them, and a white figure jumped out from them. Even Peter Parker, who was closest to Bruce, let go of Bruce's hand at the first moment. After dealing with the Prowler, Gwen knew that the bat was not in serious trouble, but she couldn't suppress the anger in her heart. When she came in front of the bat, she had already punched the bat in the abdomen. Even though she is an agile Spider-Man, her strength is still strong. This punch really made Bruce feel uncomfortable. But the bigger blow should come from Thomas in his mind. It's not the tradition of the Wayne family to make women hate you like this. I suggest you learn from it in the future. Thomas was just watching the fun and enjoying the trouble. Bruce could even hear a hint of ridicule in the guy's tone about the beating he had received. But Gwen outside did not release her anger easily. I told you I hate you. And you actually did something so infuriating. Speak up. Aren't you good at speaking? Gwen grabbed Bruce's face and pushed him to the ground. He attacked Bruce with both hands. When Spider-Man Noir saw this scene, he quietly moved to Penny Parker's side and covered Penny's eyes with his hands. The child was too young to witness such a brutal scene. Peter Parker and Spider-Ham were watching this scene with great interest, and were even commenting on where Gwen should hit the bat. But everyone knew that Gwen's strength was quite precise, and basically it was the kind that would not cause any harm to Bruce. At most, it just looks a little embarrassed. Do you know that you could die at any time if you do this? Grabbing Batman's collar, Gwen shouted frantically at Bruce. The bat said nothing, but took out the real key from his gauntlet. Looking at the key taken out by the bat, Gwen may have thought of something, and tears slowly flowed out. It was just because of the mask that no one noticed it. Go back to your world, I will take care of things here. The bat's voice remained unchanged. Even though he was being beaten by Gwen, he didn't say anything. Okay, it's time for us to end this. Peter Parker walked forward, pressed Gwen's shoulder, and spoke softly. Taking the key from Batman's hand, Peter Parker now pulled Batman up. So now you know that Spider-Men can't be easily deceived. Peter Parker took off his cowl and stretched out his hand to Bruce. Besides, we are definitely people you can trust. Can we really get to know each other now?
After hearing these words, all the Spider-Men turned their attention to Bruce. They were indeed a little unsure whether the bats would get to know them. Peter Parker spoke first. Peter Benjamin Parker, Spider-Man from another world. End of this chapter. Chapter 36. The True Face of the Bat. Peter Parker extended his hand to Bruce, but the meaning of this hand was no longer the courtesy it once was. Gwen, who had spoken harshly to Bruce before, looked at Bruce at this time. "We are friends, aren't we?" Peter Parker smiled. He really wanted to know what kind of person this bat in front of him was. But Bruce just shook Peter Parker's hand. "Batman, that's all." After saying this, Bruce let go. He turned around and looked outside the laboratory. The collider is now obviously unable to bear the pressure, and other worlds are pressing towards this world. What you need to do now is to return to the world you belong to. Bruce's almost indifferent words really made the current Spider-Man a little overwhelmed. "I knew I should have pulled off your hood at that time." If he could go back a minute, Peter Parker would definitely tell himself that he should have pulled off his hood while beating up the stinky bat. Otherwise, this guy would continue to play dumb with them on this matter. Honestly, you can't make friends like this. Peter Parker walked to Batman with dissatisfaction and punched Batman on the shoulder. "But who made me so soft-hearted?" Peter Parker suddenly spoke to the bat with a smile. "I'll take a little loss and take the initiative to be friends with you, a cold-hearted guy, so that you won't have to go home crying when you have no friends at all." As he said this, Peter Parker had already taken the key from Gwen on the other side. Gwen wanted to say something to Peter Parker, but he just smiled at her. Then he turned over and swung towards the control panel. "Don't be too happy." Even as Peter Parker was falling, the guy could be heard yelling at the bat. "He's right." Spider-Man Noir came to the side of the bat. "We will be friends. And me." Penny was lying on her spider mech at this moment, talking to the bat with a smile on her face. "But next time we meet, remember to prepare candy for me, or I will play tricks on you. If possible, I hope we can sit down and eat a hot dog together one day." Spider-Ham's words seemed a little more down to earth. "Bye now." When Spider-Ham also swung out, only Batman and Gwen were left in the entire laboratory. It's hard to find friends with someone as annoying as you. Gwen looked at the Spider-Men who had begun to return to their own universes and spoke to the bat beside her. "Even your image makes people feel afraid." The bat didn't say anything, just stood there quietly. The black cloak completely concealed the bat's figure. "It makes him look more like a demon carved by a sculptor. But maybe I can keep a position as a friend for you if you are willing one day." Gwen took off her mask and looked at the bat beside her. "Thank you for not letting me experience the feeling of losing a friend again." Gwen said this without waiting for the bat to move. She swung towards Peter Parker's position. Now they are the only two left in this universe that does not belong to them. "Are you ready?" Peter Parker said to Gwen with a smile. "Yeah." Gwen took a deep breath and said to Peter Parker, "Goodbye, Spider-Man." As he spoke, he loosened his hands that were stuck to the wall. But just as I let go, I heard Peter Parker shouting, "Look, bats!" When she looked back, Gwen clearly saw the bat's face exposed in the light of the collider. Bruce held his mask in his hands, revealing his face. Nice face. This was the last thing Gwen thought of as she fell into her own universe. "It seems like we are friends now." Peter Parker nodded to Bruce. He had already relaxed himself and let himself fall directly into the universe that originally belonged to him. Bruce put on his mask again, raised his head, took out a bat dart, and threw it directly at the control panel. The green button in the middle. Just as the collider began to self-destruct, Bruce used his hook gun to land directly in a human-shaped hole that was created by the collision. Kingpin had brought Tombstone and smashed through the bottom of the collider container they had built earlier. What Bruce needs to do now is to take these two guys away from here. Otherwise, neither of them would survive. It is even possible to go to another universe and eventually die completely due to cell decay caused by being rejected by the universe. But this is not what Bruce wants to see. He needed Kingpin to be alive, or at least for people to see him in prison, even if it was only for a short period of time. When he brought the two big guys to the laboratory platform, Bruce simply threw away his hook gun. There was no time to retrieve it. He dragged the two guys and ran straight towards them. The energy collider created by Kingpin has begun to emit tremendous gravitational force, absorbing everything around it into the machine. If Bruce hadn't run fast enough with those two guys, they would have been sucked in as well. Bang! Continuous explosions began to sound, and the light produced by the Brooklyn explosion could be clearly seen even on Manhattan Island. This made it impossible for many people to have a good sleep. Such a big explosion occurred again in New York, and they had no way of knowing whether it was a terrorist attack. If the Twin Towers happened again, New York would really be nailed to the pillar of shame in the world's fight against terrorism. The police, counter-terrorism forces, and the National Guard all rushed to Brooklyn as soon as possible. Even the patrol officers were ordered to go over to see what was going on. Jefferson Davis was naturally one of them. It's more like he's now worried about his son and is searching all over Brooklyn. Naturally, he became the fastest police officer to arrive at the scene. Looking at Kingpin and Tombstone tied to the fire hydrant, the police officer opened his mouth in disbelief. Especially next to those two guys, there is a bat dart. No matter how you look at it, it's a bit weird. On the rooftop on the other side, Miles naturally saw everything, but he was late. "You're late."
A deep and terrifying voice sounded behind him. Ah! Miles jumped up instantly, and when he was about to fall off the roof, he shot out spider silk to pull himself back. Hey! It'll scare people to death. Looking at the bat, Miles is really angry now. This kind of behavior of getting behind someone without making any noise can really scare people to death. Bats didn't care what Miles said. The prowler is not dead yet, and I can't find him. You'd better pay attention. After leaving these words, the bat turned and left. End of this chapter. Chapter 37 Wick John Kane. But it was obvious that Miles was not the kind of guy who would leave easily, and he just followed Bruce. They've gone back, haven't they? When Miles caught up, his first question was whether the other Spider-Men had returned to their own universe. The bat looked back at the guy. He didn't think that he was stupid before, but now he should change his understanding of the information about the spider. Perhaps Miles only now realized that he had said something nonsense, and he scratched his head embarrassedly. Do you think we'll meet again in the future? Miles spoke again. Only this time his tone was quite serious. He really hoped that the bat could answer him. But the bat said nothing, shot out his grappling hook and disappeared directly in front of Miles. This time, Miles did not chase after him, because he knew that he would not get any formal answer even if he did. All that was received was silence from the bats. He just needed someone to talk to about his recent experiences. Even though, I can't tell you everything. With a long sigh, Miles slowly stood up, looked at the vague figure of the bat in the distance, and patted his face. If you promise something to others, you must naturally do it. Since he did not fulfill the agreement between him and Peter Parker and did not deal with the Collider himself, let him take over as Spider-Man and protect the city that belongs to him. When the bats and spiders separated, today's journalists swarmed here like sharks smelling blood. They naturally knew that after an explosion, the scene was likely to be quite dangerous. But in this city, in the eyes of their profession, danger often coexists with opportunity. As long as they get some explosive news that is shocking enough, they can be said to be on the rise. Even the Pulitzer will not be out of reach. New York police once believed that these reporters were more suitable for their positions at certain times. Reporters who could respond to calls as quickly as the police would sometimes arrive earlier than the police. It was clear that the journalists were outstripping the rest of the response force. What was hovering in the sky was not even a police helicopter, but a reporting plane belonging to a news TV station. Everyone was paying attention to the explosion. They want to know whether New York has experienced another horrific terrorist attack. When the reporters actually arrived at the scene, they couldn't believe their eyes. Kingpin, whose more familiar name should be Wilson Fisk, was currently tied to a fire hydrant with something, and on the other side was the bodyguard who always appeared beside Kingpin, a black man with albinism. But what really made the reporters unbelievable was the bat dart stuck in the ground next to Kingpin and his men. Comics have truly appeared in the world. A reporter who had read those superhero comics murmured to himself. This shock did not make him hesitate for a moment. He immediately took his microphone and spoke to Jefferson Davis, the highest-ranking police officer on the scene. Officer, what caused the explosion? What does it have to do with Wilson Fisk? Does the batarang next to them mean that there is another masked hero in New York after Spider-Man? The barrage of questions made Jefferson really unable to cope with it. The cause of the explosion is under investigation. As soon as he opened his mouth to speak, another microphone was put into his mouth. Are the people who captured Wilson Fisk borrowing the image from the comics to carry out their own actions? Is this a terrorist attack? Why didn't the NYPD get any word? Jefferson is really having a headache now. This kind of thing is obviously not something he can answer at his level. If he didn't answer well, he might not only offend these guys, but also those who work in offices in the police station. Okay, fellow journalists, I don't think you should continue to bother this police officer now. A man rescued Jefferson from the reporters. Although he was grateful to the man for saving him from the series of life-threatening calls from reporters, Jefferson was still diligently asking about the identity of the man next to him. Besides, who made that guy wear a pair of black sunglasses even on a night like this? He looked like an agent from a TV show. Excuse me, are you a policeman? Although Jefferson was always on patrol outside, he was still quite confident in his memory. He had never seen the man next to him in his own police station, and there hasn't been any news recently that anyone would be transferred here. Sorry, I forgot to introduce myself. The man took off his sunglasses, revealing a relatively honest face, and took out his ID from his suit, FBI. Also, when the man took out his ID, people in black suits came over and stopped all the reporters outside the cordon. Jefferson started communicating as soon as he saw the certificate. He had no way of judging with his naked eyes whether the guy in front of him was real or fake. The man obviously didn't care about Jefferson checking his ID. He walked up to Kingpin, who seemed to be waking up, and looked at this former underground boss of New York City. He smiled. Pick up the bat dart on the ground. A newcomer. When the next day's sunlight pierced through the clouds and shone onto the city, the early morning news had already reported on the explosion that occurred the previous night. After investigation, it was found that the huge explosion that occurred in Brooklyn yesterday was caused by Wilson Fisk, a former philanthropist and businessman in New York City. Bruce didn't care about the text on the news. Now it was enough for him to just look at the big guy appearing on the screen. I believe that when this Kingpin appears on the TV screen, Fisk Group will definitely look different. For example, as directors of Fisk Group. Now they really don't want to stay in this group any longer. No one knows whether this kind of thing will happen to them in the future. In America, anything is possible. What's more, they are not truly law-abiding citizens. It killed people. When will Fisk be able to make people feel at ease? How did this happen? Although the current name of this group is Fisk, even Kingpin was just built on the framework of the previous Osborne Group. Most of the directors sitting here were former directors of the Osborne Group. They have always been quite disgusted with Fisk one-man show. If something happened to Fisk, it would only make them very excited. But now this matter is really too big. It can be said that Kingpin was responsible for the worst explosion in New York since the Twin Towers. They are afraid to avoid it. "Sir, you can't go in, you can't." The secretary's voice suddenly rang out at the door. Then, the door of the conference room was pushed open. Several bodyguards who looked quite professional had already taken their positions. Then the real owner slowly revealed his figure. A custom-made Gucci suit perfectly displays Bruce's noble temperament. "Hey, boy, who are you?" Wick John Kane. Bruce spoke to them with a smile. End of this chapter. Chapter 38 Bruce's Methods. What's the point of asking his name? Send the security guard to take him away. Another director stood up and slammed the table in a very direct manner, yelling at Bruce. Bruce pulled out a chair quite naturally and sat down. "Giving over your shares of Fisk Group to me is, I believe, your best option." Bruce supported his chin and spoke naturally. Some directors were so angry at the young man sitting here that they laughed. "Who the hell do you think you are? Talking to us like that?" the director said lightly. Bruce smiled and said, "Trev Bogard? I think you should take a good look at this report before talking to me." Bruce motioned to one of the bodyguards to bring over the document bag that Bruce had asked him to carry with him. I found the document signed by Trevor Bogard and threw it directly in front of the guy. Trevor glanced at Bruce, then slowly opened the document as Bruce smiled. Although the other directors were quite curious about what was written in the document, they still maintained their status and sat in their seats seriously. There was no movement. What they could see was that Trev's expression changed from nonchalant at first, to serious, and finally to horror. They could vaguely see the cold sweat on that guy's face. "I agree." After reading his documents, Trev immediately raised his head and spoke to Bruce. As Trev finished speaking, a bodyguard placed a contract in front of Trev. "The contract is ready, and the compensation for you is at the end. Thank you for your cooperation," Bruce said with a smile. But Trev didn't think so much now. He just wanted to sign his damn name on it and leave this damn place. He didn't even bother to read the contract. He just turned to the place where he should sign and signed his name with a big stroke. He immediately stood up and prepared to leave. Even as he was about to leave, he was still tightly holding the document that Bruce had given him. Bruce stopped him. "Don't be so anxious." He stood up and walked over, looking at the name left by Trev on the contract, and smiled. "Nice signature handwriting, but you seem to have forgotten something." Bruce pulled out the so-called compensation that came with the contract. Naturally, they were the bearer bonds found in Kingpin's basement. "Don't forget this." Bruce placed the bearer bonds neatly in the folder in Trev's hand, and then grabbed the director's arms and patted them with a smile on his face. "That's what an elite person looks like." "Sorry, I can't take you down. I have other things to do." Bruce patted Trev's left shoulder with the back of his hand in a rather frivolous manner and sat back down. When Trev left, he had no intention of looking back. Now he just wanted to leave here as soon as possible. All of Trev's reactions told the other directors that the young man in front of them was extraordinary. This made all the directors look cautious when they looked at Bruce again. "Oh, by the way, I have some documents from other directors here." How could Bruce not respond to the gazes of other directors? After taking out the documents, Bruce signaled the bodyguards behind him to place the documents one by one in front of the directors. By the way, he also placed the share transfer contract next to their documents, and even thoughtfully prepared pens for them. Don't put it in the wrong place. It would be bad if other people knew about these things. Bruce sat in his seat and spoke completely nonchalantly. The bodyguards just kept silent and carried out their tasks conscientiously. All the directors received their own unique documents. Looking at Trev's expression, they had already made some preparations. But I didn't think this young man could come up with any powerful documents. At most, it was just that Trev himself did things in a dishonest way and gave others a handle. But when they saw the documents in front of them, they finally understood why Trev was so terrified. Because the documents in their hands have revealed almost everything they have done. Tax evasion, tax avoidance, kickbacks for government projects, and even some dirty things that have been done in the past have been exposed. Tick, 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 tick. The sound of Bruce tapping on the table added urgency to the situation. Almost all the directors around were terrified. This young man is really too unsportsmanlike. Use the ultimate move as soon as you come up. Who can stand this? A director suddenly looked up at Bruce, who was tapping the table, and said, "Young man, I hope you can take care of yourself. You can't eat such a big thing. I'm not that lucky." "Wow, can I take it that you are threatening me?" Although Bruce's tone showed considerable surprise, there was still a faint smile on his face. "Besides, do you really have the guts to threaten me?" Bruce lay back, leaning against the back of his chair and speaking nonchalantly.
Don't talk about whether I can eat it or not. Isn't Fisk Group a hot potato? You really don't want to let go? As soon as Bruce finished speaking, the director wanted to say something, but many directors around him had already started the signing process. But they were a little calmer than Trev. At least they remembered to take their compensation away. Bruce just sat there quietly waiting for these guys to slowly leave. Finally, even the guy who had threatened Bruce earlier was ready to sign. But Bruce got his contract back. Sorry, sir, this contract has been voided. Bruce smiled and sat down on the table next to the man. At this moment, he was playing with the pen he had taken from the director, showing the image of a dissolute young man to the fullest. What do you mean? The director was obviously quite angry and he glared at Bruce. Bruce just continued playing with his pen, but soon another noise was heard outside. Sorry, NYPD. A policeman came up and showed his ID to the bodyguard who stopped him. Let them in. Bruce nodded and asked the bodyguard to let the police officers in. Excuse me, are you the one who called the police? The police officer looked at the environment here and was obviously quite polite. He first asked the person who called the police into the house. That's right, officer. Bruce put down the pen in his hand and came to the police officer. He took the documents that the director had placed aside. We found a pretty bad guy today. I didn't even know there was such a scum in my company. Bruce was extremely indignant. Originally, I just wanted to find out if someone had embezzled money, but I didn't expect someone would do something so infuriating. When the documents were handed over to the police, the director immediately became restless. He wanted to step forward and say something, but was stopped by Bruce's bodyguard. Although the police saw it, they didn't say anything. The guy looked like he was going to commit violence. The bodyguard did nothing wrong. But when he saw the document in his hand, he already knew that it was impossible for him, a small police officer, to make a judgment on this matter. All he could do was take the person away. Thank you. Bruce smiled and waved as he watched the police officers take the person away. The director said nothing, but just stared at Bruce, as if he wanted to eat him alive. But he already understood all these emotions when he saw his wife and children just entering the company building. There is no room for me to turn the situation around. Bruce stood by the floor-to-ceiling window and just watched the man being taken into the police car without saying anything. Silent as a statue. End of this chapter. Chapter 39 Kane Group. Everything that happens in the Fisk Group is under everyone's attention. When the cause of the explosion last night was announced, people began to head towards Fisk Group. Some people have spontaneously begun distributing slogans boycotting the Fisk Group. But when they just approached the Fisk Group, they saw the Fisk directors who were in a hurry, and one of them was even taken out by the police. This kind of thing made them feel a little strange. According to any logic, even if the Fisk Group is in big trouble now, the New York Police Department cannot be so efficient in arresting people. Moreover, it is impossible to take a director away. It all seems a little confusing. The citizens who had gathered here to hold a protest march were completely confused by this incident. Only those reporters who came here to take a closer look at the Fisk Group or to say something vaguely noticed that something was wrong. I think we may have found a big news, said a young reporter. But his words caused the cameraman next to him to sneer. Okay, if it was really big news, they wouldn't have sent two of us here. If it weren't for the previous explosion, there wouldn't be any news this year that would be bigger than what happened in Europe. Listening to the cameraman's words, the young reporter also smiled. He naturally knew what the cameraman was talking about, but at times like this he always had to give himself a little comfort, didn't he? What's more, now in the world, the only news about super soldiers and people with superpowers can be considered the most shocking news. That kind of news is obviously not something the two of them would be able to access. It's great to be able to report news like this that catches the attention of New Yorkers. Just as the two of them looked at each other and lowered their heads with a sigh, a bustling crowd of people began to walk out of the Fisk building. After quickly setting up all the things needed for the press conference, he stood there quietly waiting for something. Let's just do our jobs well. Seeing that Fisk Group seemed to be planning to deal with this matter head-on, the young reporter stopped saying discouraging words. He walked diligently towards Fisk's podium. But there was indeed a fence in front of them to prevent them from getting too close. There were also security personnel from the Fisk Group standing by there on high alert. Although it was a bit hasty, this press conference can now be said to be quite formal in any aspect. Wow, he does look like a nice guy. Suddenly, the reporter heard the voices of people around him. If he remembered correctly, when he heard this voice before, it seemed to be shouting something like, "There is no good person in Fisk Group." But why did he suddenly change his words now? Glancing at the woman who had quietly put away her protest sign, the young reporter shook his head. He could only say that the American people are always like this, with no firm stance of their own. But he is different. He will judge everything from the most objective perspective. This is true even when it comes to your favorite hero. Turning his head to look over, the young reporter couldn't help but admit what the guy had said before. That is, the new spokesperson of Fisk Group does not look like a bad guy. It seems like everyone is really concerned about the affairs of the Fisk Group. Who made the chairman of the Fisk Group do such an appalling thing yesterday? Bruce said angrily as he looked at the crowd below. This tone obviously made those people who came here to protest and march remember the purpose of their coming here. They raised their signs again and resumed their condemnation of the Fisk Group. Right. Wilson Fisk should be executed. He's just a lunatic.
All kinds of voices rang out, leaving the young reporters confused as to what the spokesperson meant. Are you really afraid that Fisk Group will not go bankrupt? However, all this will become the past, but this does not mean that we will not compensate for the wrong things we have done, even if it was done by a person without permission. Fisker Group, starting today, will no longer be known by that name. This sentence once again calmed down the protesters who were originally getting agitated in the surrounding area. They probably understood what the spokesperson meant. Fisk Group may no longer exist. From now on, the Fisk Group will be officially renamed the Kane Group. The Kane Group will restart all work and set up a special foundation to be responsible for the Brooklyn explosion. After Bruce finished speaking, he turned around and prepared to leave. May I ask who will be in charge of the Kane Group in the future? Why didn't he come forward to explain these situations? Or is Wilson Fisk still the actual person in charge of the Kane Group now? The young reporter looked like he was determined to get to the bottom of things, not caring at all about Faith beside him or the Kane Group security guards who were eyeing him covetously. Isn't that me? He turned around and smiled at the young reporter. Bruce didn't say anything and just left the simple press conference. The young reporter had no way of imagining such a thing. The guy clearly looked about the same age as himself, or even smaller. He has actually become the chairman of one of the super companies in New York. Even the people around were quite shocked. They never thought that a young guy like Bruce could be the CEO of a huge company. Even when Tony Stark and his brother took over Stark Industries, there was no such sense of surprise. After all, Stark Industries itself is someone else's family business, which is completely different from the thing that is now appearing in front of them. But one thing is the same. That is, Stark Industries is now supported only by the playboy Tony Stark alone. As for his brother, the news said that he died of a brain tumor. No one knows what really happened. The young reporter suddenly became excited at this time. And now he suddenly thought of something. He had no way to interview those truly extraordinary people, but he could create a superhero that only he could think of. Who could have made this reporter excited? When Wilson Fisk was arrested, there was a batarang on the ground. And now the Fisk Group was directly acquired and renamed. He looked up at the cameraman beside him and said, "We are going to have explosive news." End of this chapter. Chapter 40. Another cage. I have to say, in this world where superhumans are running around, it is quite surprising that an ordinary person can occupy the front page headlines of New York news for several days. Of course, the vast majority of the reasons were because a young reporter put his own speculations in the newspaper. What is said is that in this world, newspapers are no longer something that people ask to buy. But there will always be people who will buy it. Especially with such an explosive headline. It's hard not to be curious and see what exactly happened. Young New York billionaire suspected of involvement in Wilson Fisk's arrest. There's even an even more exaggerated subtitle underneath that. Is our world invaded by comic book characters? Is the new chairman of Kane Group related to the emergence of Batman? All the titles have set off a wave of decryption among people. However, after the Kane Group's official website was put under maintenance and the names of its top executives were posted, the originally turbulent puzzle game has begun to calm down. Because that handsome man's name is Wick John Kane. This name has completely made them lose interest in continuing the investigation. But then another article by the reporter brought it all to a climax again. Could the super-rich of Kane Group be the super-financial backer who secretly funds Batman? Everyone is looking for clues to see if they can figure it all out. Some people even went directly to the gate of Kane Group to block Bruce. Unfortunately, nothing they did got a satisfactory result. They just watched this young rich man, walking in and out with a beautiful girl in front of the paparazzi's cameras every day. Although some guys were still quite persistent in their stakeout, they found nothing. That guy is a playboy. It's better to watch Tony Stark than Playboy. At least almost everyone has a copy of the private video between Stark and a red-haired beauty. Occasionally I can take it out and laugh. As for Batman, never saw him. Moreover, various cases have occurred frequently in the city. After knowing that Bruce had moved to a manor outside New York, Bruce named the manor Kane Manor. Everything seemed to indicate that the young rich man now had nothing to do with the bats they were talking about. They have all contacted the person who sold the manor to Bruce to see if they can get any information from him. But the news they received made everyone feel a little depressed. When that person bought the manor, he did not look for one with a lake or something like that. I just chose a manor with a medium to large area. Various signs have shown that everything now is just a gimmick created by that unscrupulous journalist. But this gimmick has become a joke that entangles them. Anyone can enjoy watching a joke. But they were in no mood to laugh when they themselves became a joke. All the anger was vented on the newspaper that published the article, faced with numerous complaints and abuse from the American people. In the end, the newspaper itself could not bear the pressure and had to give an explanation to the society. The young reporter was fired. As for what the young reporter will do later, no one will care about him. Everyone's life just returned to its starting point. No one mentions the so-called Batman anymore, and no one would really be stupid enough to ask a billionaire if he is a masked hero. The grand decryption operation ended in such a hasty manner. But no one knew that they were actually quite close to the truth. But no one persisted. However, Bruce didn't pay any attention to the previous vigorous Batman decryption campaign at that time. In this era, all it takes is time and some other things to draw all people's attention away.
Many things will be completely forgotten. Bruce, wearing a welder's mask, was carefully welding together the items in front of him. It's almost done. After putting away the tools in front of him, Bruce slowly straightened his body and stretched out his body, which had become stiff from maintaining the same position for so long. This is more like a bat cave, Thomas said in Bruce's mind, looking at the current state of the place. Not even close. Bruce shook his head. He didn't think what he had made looked much like a bat cave. At most, it's just a name that occupies a hole. Although many people think that what Bruce chose was just an ordinary manor. There is no lake, let alone any natural caves. There is only an air raid shelter that is unknown to anyone. Even Bruce had accidentally found some clues when he was screening information about estates around New York. It can really be said that I am lucky. If he had not been careful at the time, Bruce would really have to take such a big risk and choose a manor with a lake or a natural cave. But it's going well now. It's pretty good. Thomas just shook his head at Bruce's words, not thinking it mattered at all. Before Bruce could speak, a voice suddenly came from the cell next to Thomas. Maybe you could try to let me help you, right? It was a distorted voice. It was somewhat different from Batman's usual deep voice, as if there were other people's voices mixed in with his voice. What Thomas could be sure of was that the person who was mixed into the body of the person in the other cell was definitely not old and should be a strong young man. Shut up, I don't know what you did, but I only know that my son is not as fragile as you. Thomas grabbed the cell door and shouted wildly to the other side. There was no manners at all. He knew the man in the cell was also called Bruce Wayne. However, he really didn't want to believe that his son would become like that. The guy in the cell didn't say anything, just fell silent again. Bruce outside didn't care at all that there were two guys communicating in his mind. He just did his own thing meticulously. Bruce knew exactly who the new guy that appeared in his mind was. A Batman who thinks he has never brought stability to Gotham, and a Batman who is angry that tragedy has already happened when he took action. A Batman who has his eyes on the Flash. End of this chapter.